Blonde girl sleeps in red light.
Distant, agonizing cries pierce her mind.
Someone else's distraught weeping causes her intense mental pain.
Clenching the sheets, she commands the voices to be silent. She gasps for breath as the inner pain becomes unbearable.
Vibrant emerald eyes snap wide open.
She wakes up, gasping in shock.
Bolting upright, she hears a voice calling for Sayun.
A sudden, sharp scream escapes her.
Her whole body racks with intense physical pain.
She remembers being in a car while her sister was driving.
She recalls being in the back seat holding young Seyen. A violent car crash shatters her memories.
A sudden, icy chill washes over her. Looking around the fancy room, she wonders where she is.
She observes the furniture and concludes this is not a hospital.
She worries if her sister and Sayun are safe. Trying to stand, she suffers a sharp pain and clutches her head. Her head burns as if a hot iron is being pressed against it.
Visions of foreign people and places flash like camera shots.
She realizes she's experiencing someone else's mother's.
She was a busy university student focused on her career. She also remembers being a noblewoman who drank until wasted. Her love for her niece Sayun clashes with the noblewoman's hatred for her family.
Two distinct identities stand back to back in her mind.
She feels the two souls mixing violently like water and oil.
A man's voice calls out to Lady Marussia.
A worried maid asks if she is all right and offers to call a doctor.
She sits in silence, processing everything.
She understands she has become a character in a book. The storybook pages reveal her fate.
She is now Marussia Valik, an ethereal noblewoman with golden hair.
A car crash and a carriage accident occurred at the same time.
Fate aligned both tragedies without error.
Two souls from different worlds share one body. The merger of their spirits remains unstable. She recalls memorizing this story while reading it to her niece.
The fictional story has become her reality. She is transmigrated into the villainess Marussia. Despite her headache, she decides she must confirm the truth with her own eyes.
The basement holds the needed answers. The maid urges her to rest her injured leg, but she orders her to move aside.
The maid falls with a sharp cry.
She stands shocked by her own physical reaction. She wonders if Marussia's instincts push the maid instead of her own. Their souls remain merged, but dangerously unstable. The student's soul is appalled by the violence, while the noble's voice orders the maid to get out. Seeing the maid's submissive reaction, she realizes how used the staff is to Marussia's bad treatment. The door shuts with a click. Recalling Marussia's memories, she heads to the study to find the basement key.
She follows the precise directions to the third book on the second shelf.
Her search is successful as she discovers the secret basement key hidden within.
Marussia stands in quiet contemplation, her emerald eyes reflecting a newfound focus.
Deep-seated memories manifest as a visceral fear of the dark basement below. She recalls that Marussia chose a room at the manor's highest point. Although top floors were typically for staff, Marussia insisted on the attic for a specific reason. She was desperate to place as much distance as possible between herself and the basement.
The silence is broken as a sudden, rhythmic top sounding echoes through the hall.
Her inner self recoils in hatred of the destination, but she forces herself to proceed. The physical sensation of Marussia's lingering terror remains intensely present. She descends the stone stairs, her mind fixated on the child imprisoned in the depths. A bright light marks her approach to the final threshold. The oppressive shadows deepen as her heart races in time with the jingle of her keys. Despite her painful leg injury and overwhelming internal doubt, she feels compelled to verify the truth. Her determination hardens as she prepares to confront the reality of the story.
She finally reaches the landing at the very bottom of the long staircase.
While the servants believe the basement is empty, she knows the family's dark truth. A massive iron door stands as the final barrier to the secret room.
The heavy lock yields as a sharp metallic click sounding breaks the tension.
Cruel instruments of punishment hang ominously upon the cold stone wall. The core of the Valik family's darkest secrets lies hidden within this chamber. A foul, stifling stench fills the room that serves as a grim prison.
She's struck by horror at the realization that a child is kept in such conditions.
A flickering candle reveals the tragic figure of Marussia's sister. A silver-haired girl with bright eyes huddles fearfully upon a simple bed. Marussia gazes at the child in a state of utter, breathless shock.
The child possesses a silver, ethereal beauty that perfectly matches the story's description.
Despite her youth, the girl has marked her own clothes to claim her destiny. Shivering in the dark, her pale skin is covered in the visible marks of severe abuse. The evidence of the female lead's mistreatment is undeniable to any observer. Overwhelmed by the tragedy, she realizes she only has 3 years of life remaining. She recalls a memory of reading a storybook to her young niece. Brilliant butterflies flutter through the air as she questions the world's logic. The reality is explained by the fact that the original world was a fairy tale. The simple story featured beautiful illustrations of a heroine who is identical to the girl before her. The silver-haired child remains motionless and solitary on the edge of the bed. Memories surface of Marussia wandering away from the house to avoid this place. Thick, vertical shadows seem to consume everything in the vicinity. Marussia turned to heavy drinking and parties to escape the reality of her sister's suffering. The sight of her younger sister being beaten left Marussia deeply unhappy and scarred. This neglect and trauma led to the child's current broken state.
A sudden realization or presence causes her eyes to snap wide in alarm.
Igor Blick, Marusia's father, suddenly appears and demands to know why she is dead.
She tries to recall the author's notes regarding the complicated relationship with her father. Igor acknowledges her recent accident but notes her presence here suggests her injuries aren't serious.
He places a hand on her shoulder, ordering her to return to her room and cancel her meetings.
Igor firmly pushes her toward the exit as a heavy thud sounding follows her protest.
She finds herself back in the hall, confused by his sudden haste and insistence on her departure.
A lingering, suspicious thought begins to take root in her mind. She stands alone before the iron doors as a sudden, sharp snap sounding echoes.
Marusha's emerald eye widens in alarm as a voice commands someone to cry.
Narrations reveal the cruel belief that a failure to cry caused a business to collapse.
Igor, Marusha's father, brandishes a rod and screams for the child to weep.
A sharp, desperate cry for her father echoes through the oppressive atmosphere.
Igor reminds Marusia that he ordered her to return to her room and rest.
Huddled upon her bed, Larissa weeps as Marusia questions the extent of the cruelty.
Marusia stands firm, her gaze hardening as she reflects on the man's heartless behavior.
Years of avoidance nearly caused Marusia to forget the horrors hidden in the basement.
Overcome with grief and pain, Larissa buries her face in her hands.
Shimmering jewel-like tears stream down Larissa's face as she suffers in silence.
The narration describes the beautiful yet cruel reality of this twisted fairy tale setting. Igor's face lights up with a sinister, greedy smile as he observes the scene. Dropping to his knees, Igor celebrates the fact that the girl has finally cried.
Igor greedily gathers the shimmering diamonds, planning to use them to fix his business.
Confirms that Larissa's magical tears have transformed into the finest diamonds.
Igor departs the room, casually advising Marusia to continue her actions in moderation. A sudden, sharp thud sounding marks the door closing as Marusia curses the author.
Illustrations depict the tragic nature of a protagonist whose suffering produces immense wealth. Larissa stands alone amidst a floral frame, her silent tears continuing to fall.
The Velik family's wealth was squandered on gambling and excess without a second thought. A memory surfaces of Igor holding a young Larissa before the greed took root.
The family's fear turned into systematic abuse, treating Larissa like a mere diamond mine.
A portrait shows an older Larissa, signaling the eventual end of the tragic tale.
A dark-haired prince is destined to fall in love with Larissa upon their first meeting. The narration explains that the prince will eventually execute the family for their crimes.
Marusia realizes she has only 3 years to live before the execution occurs. A singular, urgent thought takes hold as Marusia decides she must escape this family.
She weighs the risk of leaving immediately versus staying to save enough money first.
Her focus is broken by the sound of a voice calling out her name.
The nanny arrives with a tray, stating she is there to treat the child's wounds.
The nanny attends to Larissa, whose body is covered in a map of hidden scars.
Marusia stares in disbelief, realizing the funds she needs would come from this suffering.
A cold realization sinks in that her predecessor left her with no personal savings.
Marusia's eyes snap wide with a sudden, startling epiphany about her situation.
The scene shifts abruptly to another part of the Grand Manor. Marusia's memories of her past life as Seon begin to feel increasingly distant.
The trio remains in the dark basement room, the weight of the secret hanging heavy.
Marusia recalls her love for fairy tales, though none were ever read to the girl before her.
A comparison is drawn between a happy childhood and Larissa's solitary, painful existence.
Marusia watches from the doorway in silent contemplation of the scene unfolding before her. The original story's lack of detail on Larissa's internal pain haunts Marusia's thoughts.
Marusia walks through the quiet halls, determined to act despite her own physical injuries.
As she turns a corner, she nearly collides with 2 maids pushing a heavy cart. The maids cry out in shock and fear upon seeing Lady Marusia in the hallway.
They quickly bow and offer a frantic apology for not seeing her approach.
Marusia struggles to suppress her inner anger, aided by a small, calming presence in her mind.
She decides to ignore the conflict to avoid complications for her future escape plan.
The maids remain frozen in a tense silence as they wait for her next move. Whispers fill the air as the staff questions if she sustained a head injury in the accident.
Marusia continues walking, realizing she can hear every word of their disrespectful gossip.
Marcia stands in the hallway watching the retreating maids while her inner voices debate if she should endure the disrespect or speak up.
Stunned by the blatant disrespect, Marcia's green eyes narrow as she processes the maids' whispers.
The hallway remains eerily silent as she wonders how she can hear their distant whispering so clearly.
A nagging suspicion grows that they spoke loudly enough to be heard intentionally.
A sudden, sharp door slam sounding punctuates her mounting frustration as she curses her situation.
Villain Blick, Marcia's blonde and blue-eyed brother, makes a striking entrance framed by blue flowers and a butterfly.
Striding through the manor, Villain harshly orders the bowing staff to get out of his sight. Marcia laughs at the absurdity of his behavior, despite the student's soul within noting the strained sibling relationship.
Villain's gaze hardens as he turns his sharp blue eyes toward her with an expression of pure irritation.
She dismissively waves him away, suggesting he return to his own work while her inner self predicts only pain will come from this confrontation.
Villain mocks her ability to walk and questions if she lost her mind following her recent breakup.
Her emerald eyes flash with rage as she demands to know how he dares speak to her that way. Narrative text reveals that Marcia ended her engagement just 1 month prior. The breakup was formally initiated by her fiancé, ending their wedding plans.
Flashbacks show distant figures in documents, emphasizing that the arrangement was merely a political transaction between families. Lying face down on her bed in a red dress, Marcia admits she never actually liked her fiancé.
Memories of past arguments resurface where she refused to be labeled as a woman whose marriage had failed.
Their voices echo through the grand manor as she questions if he has sold his conscience. Standing at the top of the grand staircase, Valen asks for clarification as she brings up the source of his earnings.
Marcia stands with her arms crossed, her firm stance challenging her brother's defensive reaction. Enraged, Villain claims his own ventures hold more potential than their father's business. A heavy thud sounding follows his footsteps as he declares he would rather gamble than focus on a failing business.
Marcia reminds him that every business he touches inevitably ends in bankruptcy.
Dismissing her, Villain walks away while predicting their father will die soon and leave him the family assets. He casually references the basement as a source of easy money while Marcia sardonically asks if he wants another drink. She reflects on how both her father and brother are equally irredeemable gamblers.
Marcia's inner chibi self feels the urge to deliver some justice as she decides she cannot let this continue.
She continues her verbal assault, accusing him of wasting his life on gambling, drinking, and potentially drugs. Villain explains that drinking fairy blood prevents him from getting drunk, a useless trait passed down from their mother.
Text confirms the shocking fact that their mother was a fairy.
This explains why Larissa's tears transform into jewels. It is a manifestation of her fairy blood.
A curious thought flickers through Marcia's mind regarding whether she possesses any magical powers of her own.
Villain snaps, pointing a finger and threatening to beat her if she doesn't shut up and leave.
He turns to depart with a sharp swish sounding, leaving her surprised by his sudden exit.
A quick snap sounding accompanies Marcia grabbing his arm, desperately telling him to leave their sister alone.
Villain raises his hand to strike her as he demands to know how she dares touch him.
She stops him in his tracks by asking if he intends to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Marcia warns that another blow will kill Larissa, and they must keep her alive for the sake of the wealth she provides.
Internally, she knows she isn't lying about the fatal risk to the child's life.
Her expression turns cold and calculating as she reaches up to touch her emerald earring.
A shimmering green jewel dangles from her ear, catching the light.
Villain tosses an item toward her, stating it will pay for her wine for an entire month. He pauses in the grand hall, noting that she seems strange for speaking about the basement so openly. With a sinister smirk, Villain clarifies that he only cares about the money and tells her to stay out of his business. Whistling a tune, he waves a dismissive hand and decides to skip his usual visit to the basement today.
Marcia exhales a breath of pure relief, glad that her gamble to distract him actually worked.
Later, sitting at her desk with a heavy book, she admits she is exhausted by the rapid succession of events. She concludes that no one in this family is sane, a realization that hardens her resolve.
The manor tower stands tall against the warm colors of a fading sunset.
Resting her hands on the open pages, Marcia knows she cannot leave things as they are, but remains uncertain of her next move. Marcia questions if Larissa's fate prevents her from meeting the fated prince.
Marcia notes Larissa's long wait and decides she must find an alternative path.
A vision shows the original marriage. Marcia slams hands down in Lagre. She resolves to find the prince.
Marcia admits her search is impossible.
Marcia wonders how a fairy tale could possibly lack its fated hero. She reads that the only listed prince is a married man with a child. Marcia concludes he isn't the protagonist. A green book catches Marcia's eye. She triumphantly announces that she has finally found the information she needed. Marcia holds the book up triumphantly. Narrative text introduces the unmarried Fabian Laurent from the Grand Duke's family. Marcia acknowledges their common age difference. Chibi Marcia continues her library research. She recognizes the crest from the four.
Marcia compares Fabian's description to the tall black-haired prince in the illustrations.
The original illustrations lacked specific details.
Marcia checks for matching hair color.
Marcia plans to escape if Larissa. She calculates recovery will take weeks. The manor towers stand call.
Marcia sits pensive at her table.
She chooses to ignore a caller. Her soul merges with the original. Past memories begin surfacing for Marcia. She recalls how her predecessor behaved. Alien thoughts become increasingly guttural. Marcia decides not to reply.
Gossip outside her door triggers a memory.
Marcia realizes she hears the maid's disrespectful whispers perfectly despite the distance. She discovers her power allows her to hear people's thoughts, but only negative ones. Marcia finally understands why her predecessor's personality was so warped by constant malice. Looking down the stairs, Marcia realizes the room's location blocked out screams from the low. Marcia decides she is rested enough. She resolves to face her problems. Fearing for Larissa's safety, Marcia decides to move up the timeline for her escape plan. Marcia prepares for an early departure. Marcia enters the dark basement room. A sudden, quick shivering sound punctuates the silence as she notices Larissa's feet shaking. Marcia offers food to build trust. Marcia shows her empty hands and asks the child to look at her directly. She promises to stay right where she is and not take another step. Standing at a distance, Marcia asks the girl to finally show her face. A soft, quiet rustle sounding accompanies the girl inside the blankets tentatively moving. Larissa peeks out from the covers, and Marcia is instantly struck by her cuteness.
Offering a soft greeting, Marcia asks if the child can understand her or talk.
Text confirms this is the first real conversation Marcia has ever had with Larissa. Marcia continues to speak gently, explaining she simply hadn't heard the girl's voice before.
Marcia worries that her awkward approach might have shocked or frightened the child.
Marcia and Larissa stare at each other in a heavy, silent moment.
Larissa nods slowly, confirming that she understands Marcia's intentions. Marcia leaves gingerbread cookies on a handkerchief as a peace offering. Larissa gazes at the delicious cookies with wide, sparkling green eyes.
Marcia feels relief that the child seems sympathetic to her presence.
Marcia observes the small child, finding her incredibly cute.
Narrative text focuses on the name Larissa over at the library shelves.
Marcia leans in close to offer a serious new suggestion. The manor stands tall against the warm colors of a fading sunset. Marcia resolves to adopt the persona of a crazy girl to hide her plans. Marcia clutches her head, fully committing to her chaotic new act. Chibi Marcia throws a dramatic and noisy tantrum on her bed. A sudden, sharp clattering sounding startles the maids out a mile away. The maids complain about the noise disturbing their sleep at dawn.
A sudden, quick door slam sounding marks the maid's entrance.
The bewildered maid questions the lady's problem with her dress. Marcia screams that she has nothing to wear for an important arty. The maid internally questions Marcia's sanity regarding her outfit choices. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding escapes the two horrified maids. Marcia wails in despair over the ruined fabric lying on the floor. Marcia accuses the maid of destruction and threatens to fire her. Sobbing on the floor, the maid begs for mercy and forgiveness. Marcia orders her things packed and prepares to go to the dressing room. Marcia demands a carriage and orders the suitcases moved downstairs immediately. Marcia insists on traveling alone and demands total secrecy from the maid. Marcia questions the maid's hesitation while maintaining her dramatic performance. Marcia is satisfied that her escape plan is moving forward without hindrance. A sudden, quick rattle sounding accompanies the carriage moving at dawn. Marcia rides in the carriage, reminding herself to keep her guard up. Marcia looks out the window with a firm and determined gaze. Marcia instructs the child to stay hidden inside the suitcase for now. Marcia asks Larissa if she truly wants to leave her confinement.
Marcia promises to never leave the girl's side once they escape.
Marcia begs Larissa to trust her and leave the manor behind together. Nora informs Marcia that the tailor shop is not officially open yet. A sudden, loud bang sounding occurs as Marcia forces her way inside. Nora watches in shock as Marcia rushes into her tailoring shop.
Marcia blames her maid for the ruin and requests urgent repairs.
Marcia presents several old dresses she wants altered into trendy styles.
Marcia dismisses the worker after the heavy suitcases are delivered.
A sudden, quick door click sounding signals they are finally alone. Marcia grabs Nora's hands and apologizes for making such a scene. Marcia confesses that she is actually trying to escape her current life. Nora is stunned into silence by Marcia's sudden and bold confession. Nora's inner thoughts reveal her fear of being involved in trouble. Marcia hears the negative thought and resolves to beg for Nora's help. A sudden heavy thud sounding occurs as Marcia falls to her knees. Marcia claims she is fleeing surveillance in a truly frightening environment. Marcia warns that the spying maids are lurking nearby to watch her. Marcia begs Nora to help her arrange a secret escape carriage. Marcia instructs Nora to tell any potential visitors that she simply left her clothes behind and headed out for a shopping trip. A sudden, sharp jingle sounding accompanies Marcia presenting a small, heavy pouch to the tailor. Marcia asks Nora to accept the pouch as a token of her deep appreciation for all the help provided.
A nervous, heavy gulp sounding escapes Nora as she stares at the generous payment in her hands.
Nora provides the cheapest dress in her shop to help Marcia conceal her identity during her escape. Marcia thanks Nora for satisfying her unreasonable demands over the years and asks her to look after the suitcases. A sudden, quick click sounding signals the carriage door closing as Nora realizes how much the lady has changed. A sudden, quick clatter sounding accompanies the carriage as it travels along a quiet, sun-dappled forest road. A sudden, sharp tap sounding occurs as a small brown shoe steps onto a footstool to exit the carriage. Marcia stretches her tired arms, feeling completely worn out after enduring 3 different carriage transfers to reach safety. A sudden heavy thud sounding marks the moment Marcia sets her large suitcase down on the grass. Marcia gazes up at the lush canopy of leaves and gently checks to see if the child is feeling tired. Marcia kneels beside the large suitcase, telling the child inside to wait just a moment before she opens it. A sudden, long zip sounding echoes through the forest as Marcia asks Larissa if the cramped space was too stuffy. Marcia reassures Larissa that the forest is empty and safe, inviting her to feel the soft leaves under her feet. Marcia reflects on how remarkably well the little girl handled being confined inside a small bag for several hours.
Chibi Marcia reaches out to place a wide-brimmed hat on Larissa's head, calling it a special present.
A soft, quick nod sounding accompanies Larissa adjusting her new hat, and Marcia is struck by how adorable she looks. Narrative text reveals they have finally reached the territory of Grand Duke Laurent and must find another carriage for the final leg. A sudden, loud growl sounding signals Marcia's intense hunger as illustrated by a backdrop of small pecking chicks. Marcia realizes that Larissa also hasn't had the chance to eat anything since their chaotic early morning departure. A sudden, bright chime sounding announces their arrival as they step into a rustic wooden building. A friendly voice from within the tavern welcomes the two ladies and invites them to take any seat they like. Marcia offers several delicious meal options to Larissa, but the child remains silent and unresponsive. Marcia worries that Larissa's life in the basement has left her with no choice but to trust a sister she barely knows. A vision depicts Larissa sitting alone on a bed surrounded by heavy chains, highlighting the trauma of her past confinement. Marcia is glad to see the child isn't cringing anymore and gently asks if there are any foods she cannot eat. A sudden, light jingle sounding accompanies Marcia's offer of grilled chicken and chips, wondering how the child survived her previous life.
A grand white stone palace stands framed by a floral border, representing the wealth and power of the Laurent family.
Marcia hopes to find a benefactor at their destination so they will never have to worry about food or safety again. Marcia tells Larissa to choose her favorite foods to enjoy for life, believing their target has more than enough wealth to share. With a determined and warm expression, Marcia promises the little girl that she will never let her cry again. Marcia explains that their family lacks noble titles compared to the man they seek, unaware of a hooded stranger sitting nearby. The hooded man sits in the shadows of the tavern, revealing messy black hair and intense, glowing red eyes. Marcia's expression freezes in shock as she recognizes the man from the table across the room. A sudden, quick swish sounding occurs as the hooded man turns his head slightly to glance toward the two girls.
Marcia covers her mouth in sheer shock, paralyzed by the man's unexpected and imposing presence.
Marcia notes that while his clothes are a bit messy, the man's beauty is as perfect as a stone statue.
A vision shows the black-haired man in elegant, noble finery standing alongside a blonde woman in an ornate gown.
Marcia panics as their eyes meet while the hooded man internally questions why the blonde woman is staring at him.
Marcia continues to eat while privately noting that although the man is handsome, he appears extremely suspicious.
Marcia is struck by a sudden and chilling sensation, her expression shifting to one of intense alarm.
The hooded man pauses his meal, wondering if he actually just heard the blonde woman's inner thoughts.
Marcia tries to maintain her composure, but her admiration for his looks is quickly replaced by a sense of danger.
A sudden, dark pulse sounding accompanies a terrifying mental voice threatening to catch and harm someone ungrateful.
A blonde man named Igor enters the tavern, his menacing presence confirming Marcia's worst fears.
A sudden, sharp thud sounding occurs as Marcia grips the table, horrified by how quickly their pursuer arrived. A sudden, heavy stomp sounding echoes as Igor walks toward them, and Marcia fears he is coming their way. A sudden, quick stomp sounding follows as Marcia frantically wonders what she should do to protect Larissa. A sudden, loud rustle sounding accompanies Marcia pulling Larissa into a protective embrace, realizing that danger has finally caught up.
Marcia and Larissa hide under the table, terrified of being discovered with nowhere else to turn.
A sudden, quick jingle sounding marks the entrance of the tavern as a voice welcomes the patrons inside.
Igor approaches the hooded figures, demanding to know if they have seen two girls in the area. Igor claims the missing girls are his daughters, one silver-haired child and a blonde older girl. Igor warns that the silver-haired child is unwell and her life will be in danger without timely medicine. Marcia realizes Igor is lying and internally screams that his claims are all a fabrication. Marcia fears their journey will end immediately if the people at the table reveal their hiding spot. Gripping her skirts, Marcia weighs her options between shouting for help or creating a distraction for Larissa. Marcia considers if she can bribe the strangers with jewels to earn their protection.
The black-haired hooded man calmly informs Igor that he has not seen any girls matching that description.
Marcia remains hidden, reminding herself that only she and Larissa are truly in this together.
Igor laments about his precious daughters while the black-haired man offers a polite apology for his lack of information.
The black-haired man denies seeing the girls while Marcia privately wonders why the strangers are choosing to help them.
A sudden, quick rustle sounding occurs as Marcia hugs the child, overwhelmed with gratitude for the stranger's silence.
A mysterious "oh" breaks the silence as someone is startled.
Igor is surprised as a server approaches, while the black-haired man watches the exchange with intense red eyes. Delicious food is served at the table as a server announces their order has arrived.
Marcia holds the child close, believing that the immediate threat has finally passed.
A moment of relief as the situation finally settles.
The black-haired man instructs the server to place the new order on his table, confusing the young woman.
The black-haired man stares intently, asking why the server is hesitating to bring the food over. Igor questions the extra food, but the black-haired man dismisses him by claiming one serving wasn't enough for their size. A sudden, quick clack sounding accompanies the server placing the food down, confirming the extra order is for the hooded men.
The black-haired man tells Igor not to waste time and suggests he check outside the restaurant instead.
Igor looks unconvinced, but ultimately accepts the answer and prepares to leave the establishment. Igor requests that they notify him immediately if they happen to see his daughters later that day.
A sudden sharp thud sounding marks Igor's departure, and narrative text identifies him as a member of the Blick family.
Once the coast is clear, the black-haired man addresses the ladies hiding beneath the table.
A sudden, quick rustle sounding occurs as Marcia and Larissa emerge from hiding, reassured that their pursuer is gone.
The black-haired man offers his untouched food to the girls, and Marcia responds with deep appreciation. The man explains that he helped only to avoid a noisy commotion that would have ruined his meal.
The black-haired man coldly warns Marcia to eat quietly or he will call the pursuer back inside.
Marcia is left speechless by the man's rude demand.
Marcia questions the man's strange behavior while looking out the window.
Marcia reflects on her past as a villainess, noting that while she hid her hair, her height remained a giveaway.
Disguised in a cap, Marcia asks a worker for directions to the nearest place to rent a carriage. They blend into the bustling market crowd. Marcia hopes to remain undetected in public. Marcia remains vigilant in the market, hoping her ability to hear sounds will provide enough time to prepare for trouble. Her power only senses negative intentions.
A sudden, sharp gasp escapes Marcia as she hears a terrified thought questioning if someone can succeed.
A mysterious thought startles Marcia in public. Marcia looks back at Larissa, realizing the fearful inner voice she just heard belonged to someone else entirely.
Dark thoughts of a potential murder echo through the crowd, making Marcia realize that someone will survive a plant attack.
A nervous young man in the crowd hopes that following orders will prevent him from starving today.
Marcia cannot ignore the looming danger ahead.
Marcia recalls her past ruin, realizing her empathy for the voices of others is what led to her downfall.
Marcia is shocked to spot the two hooded men from the tavern walking ahead of her in the market.
Marcia panics upon hearing a plan to stab the two men in the middle of the crowded street.
Marcia notes the black-haired man's noble aura and finds his presence in such a place highly suspicious. Marcia spots a black carriage in the marketplace and wonders if it is a car. Narrative text reveals Marcia's surprise at the existence of cars and trains in this world while showing the freckled boy in the crowd. Marcia decides that she has no choice but to take a certain action. A voice suddenly calls out from the side, drawing attention to someone nearby. The freckled boy is startled as Marcia points him out, instructing him to come closer. Arno and Poe watch from the shadows, noting that a sneak attack is now impossible. A sudden, quick clink sounding accompanies Arno handing gold coins to the boy, who responds with stuttered gratitude. Marcia internally questions if the boy intends to accept the payment with only one hand.
Arno asks the boy why he won't remove his hand from his pocket, noticing the hidden weapon.
A sudden, quick swish sounding occurs as Marcia leads Larissa away, hoping she has sufficiently repaid the men for their earlier help. Marcia feels a sense of relief, glad that she has settled her perceived debt with the strangers.
Marcia's eyes narrow with suspicion as she continues to survey the area.
Narrative text reflects on a dark plan to dispose of the child once the task was completed safely.
Marcia casts one final glance back at the marketplace crowd before mooning on.
Marcia believes she has saved the young boy's life by disrupting his potentially fatal plan. A sudden long hiss sounding echoes through the massive high-ceiling train station as a locomotive pulls in.
A sudden, quick clack sounding occurs as Marcia places money on the counter, requesting 2 tickets to Dieppe Station.
The bored ticket agent informs Marcia that all tickets for the current day are sold out. Marcia is stunned by the news, while the agent offers tickets for the following day instead. A sudden, sharp creak sounding accompanies Marcia gripping the counter in frustration, knowing they cannot wait until tomorrow. Marcia frantically weighs her options, considering if they should rent a carriage to reach the next station.
Marcia and Larissa stand together in the station, worried that there is no guarantee of finding a train further down the line.
Arno suddenly appears behind them, noting that they seem to be searching for tickets to Dieppe. In a comical, chibi moment, Arno bluntly invites the two girls to join them on their journey. Poe explains that they have already rented a first-class compartment with plenty of extra seats for them to use. The two men stand together, confirming that they are heading to the same destination and suggesting there is no need to wait. Marcia laughs off the suspicious coincidence and politely declines, stating they will find their own way.
Larissa's expression shifts to one of alarm as the name Igor Blick is mentioned.
Arno stares intently with his red eyes, asking if the man named Igor Blick is currently hunting them. Marcia is frozen in pure shock, her green eyes wide as she realizes the stranger knows far too much.
Marcia grips her skirts tightly, questioning why the man helped them in the restaurant if he knew of the pursuit.
Poe observes Marcia's intense wariness as the two men walk ahead, noting her high level of vigilance.
Arno explains that his offer is simply a gesture of thanks for her help in the marketplace earlier.
Marcia realizes that despite their mysterious nature, the men harbor no negative intentions toward them. Marcia decides to accept the offer, expressing her appreciation for their assistance as they head toward the platform.
A sudden, loud whistle sounding signals the train's imminent departure from the Grand Station.
The train begins to move, its wheels turning against the tracks as it leaves the station behind.
A sudden heavy clatter sounding accompanies the train's movement as Larissa gazes out the window at the passing scenery. Larissa is delighted to have a window seat, while Marcia smiles warmly at the child's small moment of joy.
Inside the elegant compartment, Marcia thanks their benefactors for the comfortable ride and admits she doesn't know their names. The black-haired man introduces himself as Arno, while his companion with glasses invites them to call him Poe.
An illustration of a magnificent palace appears, identified as the domain of Grand Duke Fabien Laurent.
Narrative text suggests that the two men might be middle-class or emerging nobles given their expensive attire.
Marcia rests her head on her hand, staring thoughtfully at Arno with an intense gaze. Arno looks back with a hint of confusion, asking Marcia why she is staring at him in such a manner. A soft, light laughter sounding accompanies Marcia's sheepish apology as she explains she was pondering a possible car accident.
Narrative text questions if the situation truly involved a car accident as Marcia suggested.
Arno and Poe sit stiffly on the sofa, seemingly surprised by Marcia's specific mention of a car.
A chibi Marcia wonders if her choice of words was appropriate for the situation.
Arno looks up at the ornate ceiling lamp, explaining that a car is a vehicle that moves automatically without effort.
Poe agrees that it is easy to understand and says it would be okay to call the product a car.
Arno notes the object has no official name yet, but thinks she is right about what she saw.
Marcia is stunned, wondering how he knew what it was and if he said it was an unnamed object.
Marcia realizes she showed too much knowledge and explains it looked like a carriage without a horse.
Arno asks if she was just guessing, while Marcia's chibi version thinks she just said what she thought.
Marcia laughs awkwardly, asking if the machine is still in the development stage. Arno admits his interest in the car and mentions he provided a small investment for it.
Arno explains he was testing a faulty sample product that broke after a short distance because it had no brakes.
Marcia recalls the car accident that ended her past life and led her into this fairy tale world. While the men discuss the investment, Marcia impulsively shouts that they must continue funding the project. Marcia is filled with sudden, intense determination.
Arno finds her enthusiasm interesting and ponders her reaction with a quiet hum. Marcia panics internally, worrying she acted out of character while her chibi version looks embarrassed. Marcia quickly tries to explain that her outburst wasn't because she knows the business world well.
Arno leans in close, asking Marcia why she is traveling to the duchy.
Marcia's eyes widen in utter shock.
Marcia insists she never said she was going to the duchy, but Arno reminds her that she already did.
Marcia's chibi version asks when she said it, and Arno replies she said it at the restaurant earlier.
A flashback shows the two girls sitting quietly at the restaurant table earlier that day.
Narrative text suggests that eavesdropping is ungentlemanly and that he should have pretended not to hear her.
Arno asks where they are going if not to the duchy, and Marcia hesitates for a moment.
A soft, light laughter sounding accompanies Marcia's nervous admission that she is going to meet the Grand Duke.
Arno questions if she means Grand Duke Laurent and asks what she intends to do there.
Marcia gently touches Larissa's shoulder while reflecting on the child's future. Marcia smiles warmly while embracing the child. Narrative text identifies the prince, who is also the Grand Duke. Narrative text suggests he may immediately realize that she is his destiny. A sudden loud laughter sounding from Arno breaks the tension as Poe questions if that is truly her expectation. Marcia's chibi version worries she was disrespectful and wonders why the atmosphere shifted so suddenly.
Marcia turns her attention back to Larissa, asking how she's feeling and if she likes the train ride.
Marcia asks if Larissa is suffering from a headache or feeling any motion sickness. Larissa remains silent, and Marcia realizes she must be patient with the child's reaction. Marcia tells Larissa to let her know if she needs anything, suggesting they can go to the bathroom together.
Poe notes that Marcia seems to care for her younger sister a great deal.
Marcia is momentarily frozen by the comment.
Marcia recalls her impulsive decision to save the miserable child instead of following her original plan to escape alone.
Poe remarks that the young girl seems to be Versailles. Marcia explains that Larissa is simply not feeling very well at the moment. As the train travels past a quiet lake, Marcia explains that the child has suffered a significant shock. Marcia believes that the child simply needs a bit of care and attention to recover. Narrative text reflects on the years needed to heal from trauma and hopes for a fairy tale ending.
Marcia prays that everything will be like the ending of the original story once Larissa meets the Grand Duke.
A jeweled book floats among the clouds, evoking the imagery of a classic fairy tale.
Arno watches Marcia with an intense and knowing gaze.
Arno offers to help them get inside the Grand Duke's mansion as an apology for his earlier behavior.
A soft, light laughter sounding follows Marcia's belief that he is joking, though he insists he will really help.
Marcia's chibi version wonders if the men are actually workers at the mansion rather than nobles.
Arno claims to be in charge of an important job at the mansion and can let them in through the front door.
Marcia reflects on his promise that there would be a way once they arrive at their destination.
Marcia wonders if there is a way.
A sudden sharp creak sounding occurs as the train reaches Dieppe station.
Marcia expresses relief as they finally arrive at their long-awaited destination.
Marcia is startled by a sudden discovery. Marcia recognizes a luxurious white carriage. Narrative text identifies the Grand Duke's family crest from a fairy tale book.
Marcia glows with joy amid bright sunflowers.
Marcia helps Larissa while marveling at the carriage's high quality. Narrative text explains they are entering the Grand Duke's private hunting grounds.
Marcia looks out with a stunned expression. The massive and grand mansion of Grand Duke Laurent comes into view.
Arno welcomes the two girls to the mansion with a steady gaze. A sudden quick clatter sounding accompanies the carriage stopping before the mansion.
Poe offers a hand to help Marcia disembark from the carriage.
Marcia realizes she missed an obvious clue. Narrative text reflects on the carriage being from the Grand Duke.
Maids bow as the group enters, impressing Marcia with their manners.
Marcia begins to suspect Arno's true identity as he passes the servants.
Marcia is overwhelmed by the shocking realization that Arno is the Grand Duke.
Marcia is mortified, remembering her earlier boast about Larissa's future fiancé.
Marcia worries that her previous comments caused Arno's loud laughter. A sudden, quick tap sounding echoes as Marcia ponders Arno's detached man.
A pink-haired butler greets the ladies at the grand entrance. The butler offers to lead them to a reception room for their visit.
Marcia looks back with concern as they follow the butler inside. Poe adjusts his glasses with a look of visible discomfort. Narrative text clarifies that Arno is actually not the Grand Duke. The conversation continues as Marcia questions if Poe is the real Duke.
The butler promises answers soon, urging them to follow him into the mansion. Narrative text reflects on the staggering wealth of the Grand Duke's family.
Marcia and Larissa stand in a room filled with opulent decorations.
A sudden, quick clink sounding occurs as a servant prepares tea for the guests.
The butler invites the girls to enjoy some refreshments while they wait.
Marcia reflects on the risks they took escaping without a formal plan. Marcia wonders how she should introduce Larissa.
Narrative text muses on the possibility of love at first sight. Marcia believes Larissa's beauty would charm anyone if she only smiled.
Marcia watches the child with a soft smile.
Marcia points out the various cakes and tea to a quiet Larsa.
Marcia asks the young girl if the pastries look delicious.
Marcia encourages Larissa to try the cake and enjoy the treats.
A sudden, light tap sounding accompanies Marcia offering a jam-filled cookie.
Chibi Marcia encourages a shy Larissa to eat without hesitation.
Larissa hesitantly takes a bite of the sweet cuppy.
A sudden, quick crunch sounding accompanies the two girls enjoying their snacks together. Narrative text wonders if the child lacked sweets while trapped in the basement.
A flashback shows the original Marcia enjoying a lavish party while ignoring Larissa.
Narrative text recounts the legend that their mother was a fairy.
The tragic history of their mother's death after Larissa's birth is relayed.
Marcia reflects on her lack of good memories regarding her family's past.
Marcia reflects on her childhood spent immersed in others' resentment.
Larissa's inherited fairy traits are the strongest among the three sisters.
Shocked, Marcia learns the Duke arrived. A sudden low creak sounding signals the arrival of the fated prince.
They watch the mysterious man approach.
Marcia is horrified to find an elderly man in the wheelchair claiming the title.
The elder confirms he is the Duke while Marcia stands in disbelief.
This shocking twist leaves Marcia speechless. She wonders how an elderly man could possibly be the fairy tale prince.
Despite his former looks, she finds the massive age gap completely unacceptable. As an elder sister, Marcia vows to oppose this absurd marriage union.
She wonders if a curse transformed the prince into a frog-like state.
Official records clearly state that the true Fabien Laurent is only 21.
Marcia begins to question the man's identity.
She asks the elder if he is indeed Fabien, but he remains silent.
The elder Duke instructs Poe to bring the real Fabien into the room.
Marcia realizes the man before her has not become the Duke yet. The elder Duke asks for her name.
Marcia introduces herself and identifies Larissa as her younger sister.
A sudden quick tap sounding announces a new visitor's arrival at the door.
Arno enters the room asking if they were looking from. He reveals that his true official name is actually Fabien Laurent. Arno explains he used an alias during travel, confirming he is the fated prince.
Fabien stands as the true fated prince, though he lacks the title.
He explains the title remains with his grandfather while he is alive.
Marcia realizes she completely overlooked the grandfather's existence in her research.
She is mortified by her own foolishness as her chibi version screams.
The grandfather announces his departure, telling Fabien to remain on his best behavior.
He graciously invites the ladies to stay and enjoy the mansion.
A sudden sharp click sounding marks the door closing as the group remains.
Marcia confronts Fabien for intentionally using a fake name to deceive them. Fabien smirks while admitting he chose the alias on purpose. She understands he suspected their motive since they were heading to his house.
A sudden, sharp snap sounding punctuates Marcia's rising anger at his deception.
Marcia sighs in deep frustration. She envisions the fated happy ending where the prince falls for the beautiful girl. Marcia hopes that securing their union early will grant her own personal freedom. Fabien watches her with piercing intensity.
Marcia wonders if their expressions match those of a fated couple.
She feels the weight of their basis.
Fabien questions if they are looking to get married immediately.
He notes that they seem to have developed a sudden, passionate bond.
Fabien dismisses their train talk as a joke, reiterating he isn't the Duke.
Marcia remains insistent that he will eventually fall in love with Larissa. Fabien is baffled by her plan to offer her sister to him. He wonders if this bizarre situation has gone much too far. Fabien's eyes narrow with deep intensity.
Marcia decides to delay the meeting and raise Larissa herself for 3 years.
She vows to never let the child suffer in that basement again.
Marcia smiles warmly at her sister.
Marcia ponders their next destination while standing in the ornate room. Fabien's attention is caught by a sudden quick limp sounding as he notices her injury.
Marcia looks back with a startled expression.
Fabien asks about her leg and offers a place to stay, leaving Marcia suspicious of his sudden kindness.
Fabien expresses his desire to help and keep them from being captured.
Narrative text reflects on the suspicious lies told by her father. Marcia muses on how easily the truth can be seen.
Fabien explains that he could no longer ignore the situation.
He bluntly orders them to leave if they are finished.
Marcia's chibi version considers if mercy can be the foundation of love.
A sudden low thump sounding accompanies Fabien's remark on Marcia's odd behavior and his instructions to rest.
Narrative text suggests that the truth will be revealed in due time.
Marcia vows to observe if Fabien will truly care for Larissa.
The scene shifts to a beautifully decorated, quiet guest room.
Marcia offers words of comfort to a tired Larissa.
Marcia expresses relief that they are safe in a comfortable bed instead of on the streets.
Marcia reflects on the political shift toward Fabian.
She gently strokes the child's head while sensing an impending crisis for the Grand Duke.
Her thoughts are interrupted by a sudden, quick tap sounding and papers fluttering through the air.
Marcia looks toward the door as the sounds of commotion grow louder outside.
Marcia overhears a frantic call for help from the hallway.
Marcia is stunned to hear that the Grand Duke's condition has become critical.
Fabian questions the doctor about his grandfather's self.
Narrative text notes the Duke's advanced age as the doctor warns of his failing health.
Fabian suspects foul play behind the sudden collapse but lacks the proof to act.
A sudden, light knock sounding precedes the announcement of visiting relatives.
Fabian reacts with visible disdain to the arrival of his aunt and uncle.
A sudden, sharp creak sounding marks the door opening as the relatives arrive precisely on time.
Fabian faces the group, convinced that the culprit is standing among them.
Narrative text identifies the Grand Duke's children as the primary suspects.
Even the grandchildren remain under heavy suspicion.
Count Dominic Laurent angrily demands to know by what right Fabian is present.
Fabian demands silence while Dominic hurls insults at him.
Dominic questions how the others arrived so quickly.
Countess Valerie Conrad lazily fans herself while dismissing the trip as potentially useless.
Eloise Conrad offers a bright greeting to Fabian.
Dominic argues that he, as the remaining son, should assume the title.
Fabian laughs coldly at their blatant greed for the family's wealth.
Eloise questions why Fabian would act against the family. Eloise smiles while reminding everyone that her father will eventually inherit the title.
Chibi versions show Valerie warning her daughter to stay away from the non-noble Fabian.
The tension remains high as they exchange sharp, rude remarks.
Valerie asks about the will, and Fabian tells the greedy relatives to leave.
Fabian expresses his disgust with the family's ugliness.
The room is thrown into chaos as a servant announces the creation of a new will.
Portis refuses to disclose the contents until the Duke has passed. Portis firmly requests that the relatives leave to allow the Duke to rest.
A sudden, sharp tap sounding accompanies Fabian stepping forward.
Fabian addresses Portis by name.
Fabian orders Portis to handle the paperwork while he prepares to face his relatives.
A servant reports that Lady Blick requested and received bandages and medicine.
Fabian's red eyes narrow thoughtfully. Fabian questions the request for medicine, recalling that while Marcia limped, it didn't seem like a serious injury.
He asks who was injured but learns that Marcia never specified the patient's identity.
The maid explains that although no doctor was requested, the quantity of supplies Marcia asked for was unusual, specifically seeking anything for trauma treatment.
Fabian realizes that the injury wasn't recent and that Marcia has likely endured the pain for a long time, wondering if it links back to her father's desperate search.
The memory of Abira's hurried search for his daughters weighs heavily as Fabian watches over Marcia and Larissa.
He asks if there were any other special items of note, hearing that neither lady has left their guest room since surveillance was posted.
Fabian remains deeply skeptical as he learns there were no other suspicious movements from the girls.
Fabian admits he tried to investigate Marcia's suspicious behavior under the guise of kindness, noting that she seemed genuinely unaware of the Grand Duke's identity until yesterday.
Marcia and Larissa stand firm, hoping their past has no connection to their current sanctuary.
Noting that Ballman will be difficult, Fabian orders Portis to hire another doctor from outside as they walk down the hallway with a sudden, quick tap sounding.
Fabian pauses, ordering a thorough investigation just to be safe.
He dismisses Portis with a sudden, quick tap sounding after hearing that someone has already been sent to investigate.
Fabian looks down at a new arrival, simply offering a greeting.
A sudden light rustle sounding accompanies a reflection on those bright, inhumanly red eyes that still remain.
Dominic's son, Richard Laurent, greets Fabian with a cold, "Long time no see, brother."
Richard sneers, claiming that the witch's offspring is merely pretending to be a real grandchild.
Chibi Richard taunts Fabian with a sudden, sharp snap sounding, questioning if he intends to overcome his father to become the Grand Duke.
Richard mocks Fabian for supposedly tricking their grandfather into rewriting the will, warning him to watch his neck even if he succeeds. Fabian coldly tells him to shut his mouth and look at their grandfather's face one last time.
He notes that there may not be another chance as the news arrives that Grand Duke Laurent did not survive the night.
Though surrounded by family in his final moments, none of them truly mourned the Duke's passing. Greed outweighs grief for the Duke's heirs.
The relatives waste no time bickering while Fabian sits in silent contemplation.
Fabian reflects on the surprising realization that despite their history of hatred, he may have truly loved his grandfather.
Dominic vows to become the Grand Duke at any cost. Looking out the window, Dominic prepares to destroy the family to achieve his goal.
He is willing to get blood on his hands.
A sudden low murmur sounding fills the grand hall as the relatives and guests gather.
A voice calls out to Fabian in the crowded room.
Dominic bites his nail with a sudden, quick tap sounding, regretting letting Fabian attend the academy and hoping he would never return.
Narrative text recalls that over a decade ago, when Fabian was expelled from the academy, the Grand Duke showed very little interest in him.
However, after graduation, the Duke's attitude changed, and Portis now prepares to disclose the updated will that deviates from the expected inheritance.
Portis formally identifies the document as the last will and testament of Frederick Laurent, the 17th Archduke.
Valerie impatiently demands to know who will take the most important position of Grand Duke.
A sudden, sharp whoosh sounding marks the announcement that the title goes to Fabian, the son of the Duke's eldest son, Xavier. Dominic erupts in fury, calling it the nonsense of a blind old man, as a sudden, low murmur sounding ripples through the crowd.
Portis adds a condition that Fabian must get married to a noblewoman within a single year.
Fabian is stunned by the marriage requirement, knowing that if it is not met, the title will pass to Dominic. A sudden loud thud punctuates Dominic's outrage as he accuses Fabian of manipulating his father and insults his status.
Portis sternly warns Count Laurent that another outburst will force him to call for legal intervention.
A sudden sharp whoosh sounding accompanies Dominic lunging forward, shouting that Fabian's fate is in his hands.
Fabian watches with a sudden light gasp sounding as Dominic is forced to the floor while Richard mocks him.
Richard smiles brightly at his brother Fabian.
Eloise smiles, having thought of a potential plan.
Eloise's mother is shocked by her daughter's sudden interest in the situation.
Valerie insists she won't allow the marriage because they are relatives, but Eloise argues it's normal for aristocrats as they bicker with a sudden light tap sounding. Fabian releases a sudden deep sigh sounding at the mess, realizing his chances of marrying within a year are slim. Richard scoffs with a sudden, sharp glare sounding, asking what sane noblewoman would ever want to marry the child of a witch.
Chibi Richard asks if Marcia is serious after she questions him for calling her crazy.
A grand hallway stands silent as a voice announces their departure, satisfied that the most important details were heard.
Narrative text reflects on how 3 years living with the Grand Duke fundamentally changed the frivolous nature of the old man's will.
Fabian notes that while he was determined to secure the title, the new will introduces a problematic condition regarding marriage.
Fabian identifies his bloodline as his greatest weakness, a bitter reminder that his mother was considered a witch.
A close-up of his piercing red eye emphasizes the grim realization that no noblewoman would willingly marry someone of his reputation.
2 sparkling wedding rings appear as the narrative explains the Duke's intention to force a marriage for political stability.
Looking out over his domain, Fabian understands that his grandfather believed a powerful marriage would secure his place in the Laurent family.
Fabian walks away with a steady pace, silently vowing that he has no intention of following the path laid out by the Duke's will.
Fabian's profile hardens as he considers his true purpose to defile the very aristocratic lineage his grandfather sought to preserve.
In his grand office, Fabian calls for Portis, who quickly enters to attend to the new Grand Duke.
A chibi version shows Portis reacting with shock as Fabian relays his grandfather's command to take the throne.
Seated at his desk, Fabian listens as Portis confirms that the outcome was natural given Count Dominic's incompetence.
Fabian leans forward, asking for the specific details of the condition attached to his inheritance.
Fabian considers the requirement to marry a noblewoman within a year, realizing he must find someone willing to accept the role.
Fabian explains he wants a woman from a low-ranking noble family with no money, making her easier to control.
Fabian notes that they must move quickly before Uncle Dominic can interfere with their plans.
Portis looks surprised as he mentions that a suitable candidate for the position of Grand Duchess is already within the mansion.
Fabian's thoughts drift toward Marcia and Larissa, remembering their arrival and the potential they hold.
Narrative text details Marcia's background, noting her noble surname and her status as an abuse survivor with nowhere else to go. Marcia gently brushes Larissa's hair, softly asking if the young girl feels better in her new surroundings.
Marcia offers a warm smile, promising Larissa that they will find more joy once she is fully recovered.
Narrative text recalls the horrifying moment the doctor discovered the extent of the wounds covering Larissa's body.
Marcia's expression is one of pure horror as she reflects on the sheer number of scars hidden beneath the girl's clothes. A close-up of Larissa's bandaged shoulder highlights the doctor's suspicion that the girl had been treated as a slave.
In the past, Marcia identifies Larissa as her sister, while the doctor points out the unmistakable marks of repeated beatings.
Back in the present, Marcia continues brushing hair while privately mourning the Duke's death and abandoning her pursuit of Fabian's heart.
As the brush moves through the long strands, Marcia wonders if bringing Larissa to the mansion was actually a mistake.
Marcia pulls Larissa into a protective hug, fearing that she may have robbed the girl of a simpler, happier ending elsewhere.
Surrounded by roses, Marcia muses on a future where Larissa could have lived safely without the burden of being hunted.
Marcia's hand grips Larissa's sleeve as she blames herself for ruining their chances by dragging her sister into this mess.
A sudden realization clears her mind as she declares that despite the current danger, she has no regrets. Determination fills Marcia's eyes as she vows to do whatever it takes to protect Larissa from further harm.
A sudden, light knock sounding at the door makes Marcia wonder if the doctor has returned ahead of schedule.
Marcia's face turns toward the door as Fabian's voice asks for permission to enter the guest room for a moment.
Fabian enters the room with a sudden, sharp creak sounding, immediately addressing Marcia and inquiring about her health.
Marcia points to the TSAT while thanking Fabian for his kindness in sending a doctor despite the family's crisis.
Marcia bows deeply, formally offering her condolences for the passing of the Grand Duke.
Marcia notices a hint of hesitation in Fabian's eyes, even as he thanks her for her sympathetic words. Standing across the room, Fabian admits he has something important to discuss and asks if she can spare some time.
Fabian suggests they move to the adjoining room to ensure that Larissa doesn't overhear their conversation, and Marcia agrees.
Marcia turns to Larissa, explaining that she needs to speak with Fabian privately for a short while. She reassures the young girl that she can come to the next room immediately if she feels anxious or afraid.
Marcia looks at Larissa's vacant expression, noting with sadness that there was once again no reaction from the traumatized child.
As Marcia follows Fabian, she holds on to the hope that one day her sister will find the strength to respond. Entering the quiet room, Marcia wonders what pressing matter Fabian intends to discuss with her.
Fabian stands before her, looking solemn and slightly ill at ease as the door closes behind them.
A sudden, light rustle sounding marks Fabian's movement as his knees begin to bend toward the floor.
Marcia watches in stunned silence as the new Grand Duke drops to one knee before her.
Fabian gazes up at Marcia while kneeling in a formal proposal stance, leaving her completely bewildered by his sudden action.
Fabian formally proposes, but Marcia immediately refuses and insists that his intended partner should be Larissa instead.
Fabian questions if she is refusing because she dislikes the idea, but Marcia argues that he has simply chosen the wrong person to marry. A chibi version of Marcia flatly rejects the idea of ever wanting to become a Grand Duchess.
Marcia reflects that she isn't a fairy tale character who would marry a stranger after a few days, even if he is incredibly handsome and wealthy.
Marcia suggests that Fabian should propose to Larissa, pointing out that he clearly doesn't have any romantic feelings for her.
Fabian admits he needs a wife immediately and is willing to accept whatever conditions she sets for the marriage.
Fabian promises she will be the only Grand Duchess in the nation, leading Marcia to ask if he is trying to negotiate a deal.
Marcia notes that since she isn't essential to his plan, he should use his money to find someone else if he is in such a hurry.
Visualizing a life of unimaginable luxury, a voice promises she will have the freedom to spend lavishly and do whatever she desires. Fabian says the reputation of the Grand Duchess doesn't matter to him, while Marcia notes she already has enough money to live independently.
A chibi Fabian humorously surrenders while waving a white flag, asking if he can instead explain the details of his current predicament.
Fabian reveals that the Grand Duke's will was announced that morning, and he will only inherit the title if he meets a specific condition. Sitting at a tea table, Marcia correctly guesses that the condition is marriage, and Fabian confirms it. Fabian explains he must marry a woman of noble blood within exactly 1 year from today.
Fabian warns that if he fails to meet the condition, the position of Grand Duke will pass to his uncle, Dominic.
Standing with his back turned, Fabian listens as Marcia realizes that someone else could become the Duke if he doesn't marry. Marcia bluntly asks how old his uncle is, deciding to be direct now that she knows the full truth of the situation.
Two small figures represent the uncle and his son as Fabian explains his relative is already 41 and was married long ago.
Marcia considers whether the uncle's son would be the one to inherit if Fabian is unable to secure the title. Imagining a wedding, Marcia realizes that even if Larissa were the prince's intended, the girl is far too young to be married within the year.
Marcia questions why she was chosen since she lacks a formal title, suggesting he could easily find a higher-ranking noblewoman.
Fabian stares with his piercing red eyes, explaining he specifically wants a wife who doesn't come from a powerful family that would interfere with his plans.
Symbols of chains represent Fabian's desire to control the family alone, viewing a powerful wife as a hindrance to his authority.
Marcia asks if a divorce is possible, wondering if she can eventually leave the arrangement.
Fabian offers to sign divorce papers in advance, allowing her the freedom to use them whenever she chooses.
Surrounded by roses, Fabian notes that while she can divorce later, the specific terms of the will must be met first.
Marcia agrees to the proposal on the condition that they stay married for 3 years before parting ways.
Marcia suggests that he will have fallen for Larissa by then, though Fabian warns it may be her who finds herself unable to divorce later. Fabian remains silent, his expression unreadable as he absorbs her counterproposal.
Fabian grows serious as he prepares to disclose one final important detail regarding his complicated ancestry.
Fabian identifies himself as the son of a witch, claiming that his distinctive red eyes are the definitive proof of his maternal bloodline.
A close-up of Marcia's green eye accompanies her realization that bloodlines often reveal themselves in ways that cannot be hidden.
Recalling Fabian's isolated childhood as the child of a witch, Marcia relates his painful past to the constant verbal abuse she endured in her own youth.
Marcia reflects on her role as the villainess within a fairy tale narrative. Marcia deduces that Fabian approached her because he knew many people would question his ancestry and reject him. Narrative text notes that the complications of his bloodline made it impossible for him to spend a year looking for a traditional wife. Marcia asks for some time to think over the proposal before giving him a final answer. Fabian agrees to her request and promises to return at the same time tomorrow to hear her decision.
A sudden, sharp click sounding marks the closing door as Fabian leaves the room.
Marcia finds Larissa sitting perfectly still in the guest room, looking exactly as she did when Marcia first brushed her hair.
A shimmering overlay shows Larissa's presence, highlighting how she continues to haunt Marcia's thoughts and sense of duty.
Marcia sits beside Larissa on the sofa and gently asks the young girl what she honestly thinks of Fabian.
Marcia leans in, asking Larissa if she ever felt a deep connection or a sense of destiny with Fabian.
Looking at Larissa's blank stare, Marcia realizes that Fabian isn't the only one who failed to fall in love at first sight.
Marcia informs Larissa about the proposal, explaining that Fabian needs to marry her to secure his title as Grand Duke.
Marcia promises to divorce him once Larissa is grown, offering to call off the wedding if it makes the girl uncomfortable. Marcia looks at her sister with determination, stating she will only accept the proposal if Larissa doesn't hate the idea. Marcia privately decides that she will pursue the divorce immediately when the time is right. Marcia reaches for Larissa's hand, thinking the Laurent name is better for their future, but realizes the girl is hiding something.
Larissa looks startled, her hands trembling as she clutches something tightly against her chest.
Larissa looks up, a sudden sharp gasp sounding. She clenches her hands, noting how filthy the fabric has become.
Marcia leans forward and offers to wash the cloth for the young girl.
Marcia's expression softens with concern.
She promises not to take the item away or involve any servants.
Larissa remains motionless, showing absolutely no reaction to her words.
Marcia wonders if the girl is hiding something private. She decides not to pressure the traumatized child.
Marcia gently tells Larissa it's okay, a light rustle sounding as the girl grips the cloth tighter.
Marcia is shocked to see the stained handkerchief. A moment of quiet, heavy contemplation follows.
Marcia recalls the night she entered the basement to save Larissa.
In the past, she offered Larissa cookies and a way to escape. She detailed a plan to smuggle her out in a suitcase.
Past Marcia encouraged her to bring a few precious items. She reflects that she hadn't expected the girl to bring anything.
The handkerchief was the only thing she kept.
She remembers how Larissa held her breath for hours while hidden.
It was a terrifying journey through the dark woods.
A close-up of their hands emphasizes the girl's immense courage.
Marcia feels overwhelmed, realizing how much Larissa depends on her.
A sudden, muffled thud sounding marks the moment Marcia pulls her into a tight hug.
Marcia vows to protect this real living person at all costs. They share a long, silent embrace.
Fabian arrives punctually the following day as agreed.
They sit together to finalize the terms of the marriage.
Marcia declares that she will accept his proposal. Fabian notes that he has his own condition to present.
A sudden light slide sounding marks him passing over a document. He presents his terms for the earrings, right?
The contract specifies that he must never make Larissa cry or separate her from Marcia.
Marcia demands a clause prohibiting physical contact and allowing for immediate divorce.
Fabian agrees that neither of them will be harmed after the separation.
Marcia explains that Larissa's safety is the most important part.
She warns that any violation of these terms will end the marriage instantly.
Fabian listens intently to her strict requirements.
A sudden crisp scratch sounding occurs as he signs the formal agreement. The atmosphere in the room remains tense. Fabian slides the paper back, asking her to tick it. Marcia reads that they can act freely in private, which eases her mind. She explicitly states that she does not want to have children. Fabian admits he plans to adopt and intends to end his bloodline.
He points to the no contact clause, a light top sounding, ensuring her it won't be an issue.
Marcia realizes he is far more calculating than a simple prince. She observes that his perfect looks hide a very dark interior. She concludes that the reality of their situation is no fairy tale. The meeting concludes as the sun sets.
Marcia hardens her resolve to survive this ordeal.
Marcia and Larissa walk away together, hand in hand.
Larissa grips her handkerchief with trembling hands.
Fabian maintains a calm, stoic expression. Marcia formally agrees to the marriage contract.
Fabian remains silent for a long moment. A sudden sharp slide sounding marks Fabian excusing himself from the table.
He addresses Marcia with formal respect.
Marcia swallows nervously, her anxiety becoming visible. A sudden light click sounding occurs as Fabian opens a small jewelry box. Fabian drops to one knee and formally proposes.
He presents a stunning blue diamond ring.
Marcia looks completely stunned by the gesture.
The jewel sparkles with a brilliant light. Larissa watches the scene with tearful eyes.
Marcia gives her final definitive answer.
Fabian explains the significance of the ancestral ring.
Marcia looks at the ring on her finger. A sudden sense of unease washes over her.
Fabian offers a small, mysterious smile.
He outlines the final steps of their arrangement.
A sudden, sharp click sounding marks the door opening as Fabian calls for his aid. Portis enters the room and bows respectfully to his master.
Fabian prepares to finalize the legal paperwork. A sudden, crisp scratch sounding occurs as he signs the document.
Fabian presents the signed contract to Marcia. Marcia carefully reviews the conditions of the agreement.
She realizes she must sign the divorce papers immediately.
Marcia offers a small smile of relief.
A sudden, quick scratch sounding marks the moment Marcia signs her name. Marcia confirms that the documents are now complete. Both signatures are finalized on the legal paper. Fabian instructs Portis to deliver the papers to the king.
Portis promises to return with the king's signature quickly. Fabian officially acknowledges Marcia as his fiancée.
He confirms that she will soon be his wife. Fabian vows to ensure her safety throughout the marriage. Marcia looks overwhelmed by the sudden change in status.
A sudden, heavy thump sounding reflects her racing heart as she senses danger.
Fabian warns her to stay inside for the next 3 days. A stack of books sits on the table. Marcia reads a picture book to her sister.
Larissa eats quietly as the story concludes.
Marcia tells Larissa that the fairy tale is ended.
She looks at the young girl with deep affection.
Marcia asks Larissa about her favorite snack famers.
They share a bowl of sweet pink dessert.
A sudden light munch sounding occurs as Larissa enjoys the food.
Marcia is startled by a series of intrusive telepathic thoughts.
She realizes a young master has arrived at the estate. a sudden tight squeeze sounding Marcia's growing sense of dread.
Marcia suggests that they move to a different room. Marcia opens the doors and admits she suddenly doesn't feel very well.
Marcia smiles warmly and tells Larissa to eat slowly while she steps out.
Larissa looks up with wide, curious eyes while holding her glass.
A sudden sharp click sounding marks the arrival of a servant bringing the evening meal.
A maid enters accompanied by a sudden, steady step sounding from the hallway.
A black-haired boy enters the room with a sudden, heavy step sounding.
Marcia notes his expensive clothes and a sudden, light step sounding on the rug. The boy stares forward with cold, bright blue eyes.
The youth looks around the room as a sudden light rustle sounding occurs.
Marcia resolves to remain polite despite his sudden intrusion.
Marcia asks the boy for his identity. The boy claims to be the master's nephew and demands Marcia leave immediately.
A sudden, sharp snap sounding marks Marcia's anger as he mocks her simple dress. Marcia wonders why he is being so hostile. Marcia questions if the boy is actually the Makyo.
Marcia observes that he looks nothing like Fabian. Marcia asks if he is indeed Fabian Marect.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding escapes the boy as his face contorts in rage.
He shouts that he is Richard, the only real nephew of the house.
Marcia recalls that Fabian's cousin has a son about this age.
Marcia confirms that this boy is the relative Fabian mentioned earlier.
Marcia notes the physical similarities between Richard and Fabian.
Marcia laughs softly, thinking that Fabian looks much more like a prince.
Marcia looks at the boy with a quiet, measuring gaze. A sudden, low huff sounding accompanies Richard's grumpy expression.
Richard asks about the nature of her relationship with Fabian.
Marcia laughs and claims there is nothing special between them.
Richard mutters about family assistance as a sudden, low mutter sounding continues.
Marcia explains that they are guests staying with the Grand Duke's permission.
Marcia tells him firmly that he has no right to evict them. Richard clenches his fist with a sudden, tight creak sounding.
Richard leans in and reveals that the Grand Duke has passed away.
Richard tells Marcia to get lost since she isn't part of the family.
Marcia stops him in his tracks with a sudden, sharp word.
Richard calls Marcia an old woman and mocks her noble arrogance.
A sudden, sharp snap sounding occurs as Richard calls her a commoner.
Marcia considers whether Fabian hit her because of his complicated bloodline. Marcia thinks a child like him is unfit to be a dupe.
Richard yells at her with a sudden, loud shout sound.
Marcia worries about Larissa's safety in the next room. Marcia takes a deep breath and closes her eyes. Marcia warns him against kidnapping her with a sudden, firm pat sounding. Richard looks completely baffled by her strange accusation.
A sudden, light flinch sounding marks Marcia's surprise as Richard notices the two meals.
Marcia lies and says she's eating more because of her growing age.
Richard points out the 2 sets of forks and spoons on the table.
Marcia groans with a sudden sharp huff sounding as she grows annoyed.
Richard demands the truth about who else is hiding in the row.
Marcia considers threatening him or using a more practical, clumsy method.
Marcia wonders why the room has suddenly fallen into a heavy silence.
The boy looks completely bewildered.
Marcia looks at the boy in disbelief and shouts that there is no way this is happening. The scene shifts to Larissa as Marcia calls out her name.
The youth remains speechless and blushing.
Marcia turns to the silver-haired girl and asks if she is scared of being alone, apologizing for the situation.
Marcia looks surprised and expresses her shock, noting that this is quite unexpected.
Richard stares at the younger girl and asks if her name is Larissa.
The black-haired boy notes that the 2 sisters look remarkably alike. Marcia firmly introduces the girl as her little sister to Richard.
Standing protectively, Marcia asks the boy if he would mind leaving the room immediately.
Marcia claims her sister has a severe cold and is currently unable to speak. She warns Richard to keep his distance so he doesn't catch the illness himself.
Marcia continues to usher him out, insisting that he must leave the room at once.
She grabs his arm and tells him to hurry up. Richard tries to protest, asking her to wait for a second.
He argues that she should have mentioned someone was unwell and offers to send a doctor. Marcia counters that they already have a doctor visiting daily to provide care.
Richard says goodbye for now as he departs, followed by a sudden, loud bang sounding as the door slams.
Richard looks back with conflicted feelings.
Marcia joyfully tells Larissa that she can now eat as much as she wants. Larissa enjoys her meal in peace.
Marcia remarks that it is fortunate Richard left before the food became cold.
Their attention is drawn by a sudden, light knock sounding as a voice asks if the young ladies are inside.
Marcia asks what is wrong as a maid enters to deliver an invitation letter from Richard.
Marcia is surprised to receive an invitation letter.
She reflects that it hasn't been long since he last met.
The letter invites Larissa and her sister to a Laurent family dinner the following evening. Fabian places the paper on the table and tells Marcia she is free to refuse.
He explains that the invitation was sent because the household is planning a group dinner. Looking at the requirement to attend, Marcia admits she has no desire to go.
She worries that if she refuses, they will simply come looking for her late at night.
Marcia considers the consequences of their arrival. She worries that a confrontation would be awkward and distressing for Larissa.
Fabian offers to provide a separate room, but Marcia declines, noting it would still be too noisy. Fabian suggests sitting quietly, then agrees to appear alone after Marcia asks if he will be there, noting Larissa needs peace.
Marcia tells him that if he is present, everything will be fine.
Fabian remains silent, looking notably exhausted. He instructs her to change the topic if faced with difficult questions, which he acknowledges with a nod. Marcia agrees to the plan and tells him to wait until that time.
She tells him to handle his own tasks and promises to manage things independently later.
Fabian looks at her with a pensive expression while she wonders if he is getting enough sleep.
Marcia asks if he has a lot of work and points out that he looks very tired.
Fabian dismisses her concerns entirely. He apologizes for involving her in his family's complications, but she assures him it is all right.
Marcia shares a bright, happy smile.
She reflects that Fabian's relatives will soon become her own family after the wedding.
Fabian intends to use the dinner as an opportunity to assess the true nature of his relatives.
He notices her staring and asks if something was the matter.
Fabian claims nothing is wrong as a sudden sharp click sounding marks him closing the door, noting Portis will return soon.
He tells her to simply endure the situation until that time. Marcia contemplates her attendance at the party.
She realizes she lacks a proper evening dress. She envisions herself in a stunning gown.
Marcia decides she doesn't need prominence.
She worries her clothes look too calming.
Marcia wonders who would believe her title.
The room stands silent and elegantly decorated.
A sudden heavy thud sounding accompanies Fabian's gifts.
Marcia is stunned by the gift plalium. A sudden light rustle sounding occurs now. A note explains the Duke's thoughtful gift.
Marcia realizes Fabian addressed her clothing needs.
Marcia looks genuinely touched by his gesture.
Marcia excitedly calls for Larissa's presents.
Marcia presents the clothing as Fabian's gift.
Marcia encourages Larissa to open the boxes. A sudden bright shimmer sounding marks reveal. Marcia notes the premium quality and brands.
A sudden sharp knock sounding occurs.
Marcia is surprised by another family gift. A sudden heavy slide sounding accompanies Richard's gift.
Marcia eyes the box with growing suspicion.
A sudden quick snap sounding occurs out. Marcia looks inside and is completely shocked. Marcia shouts in horror at the gaudy Tess. She is appalled by the excessive lace. The dress sparkles with a tacky shine.
Larissa stares at the overwhelming outfit silently.
A sudden quick whoosh sounding marks discarding it. Narration notes the cloth highlights Larissa's cuteness. Simple white shoes complete the adorable ensemble.
A sudden light rustle sounding accompanies Peribbon.
A sudden bright bloom sounding accompanies Larissa. Marcia gushes that Larissa looks absolutely adorable.
Marcia praises the dress's fit and beauty.
A sudden light shuffle sounding marks hesitation.
Larissa looks slightly overwhelmed and uneasy.
A sudden gentle brush sounding occurs here.
Marcia takes Larissa's hands for comfort.
Marcia hopes for Larissa's recovery and voice. Marcia says she must adjust to change. Larissa stands quietly in her mutess.
She looks on with innocent green eyes.
Larissa is silhouetted against a glowing moon.
She sits alone among the night clouds. A sudden light step sounding marks walking. She looks out into the starry sky.
A sudden sharp creak sounding accompanies memories. A sudden tight squeeze.
She reflects that her tears have dried.
She feels trapped in a world of clouds, fearing the pain that awaits outside.
In a dimly lit cellar, a man stands before two cloaked figures in a tense silence.
Marcia reassures the trembling Larissa that she has nothing to fear.
Marcia pulls the girl close, promising to protect her no matter what happens. An innocent green eye reflects a glimmer of hope and uncertainty. Marcia comforts the silver-haired girl who is dressed in a formal blue gown and bonnet. The girl stands quietly, appearing elegant but uneasy in her elaborate dress. A sudden sharp click sounding accompanies the girl adjusting her formal attire. Lost in her grief, the child weeps softly into her hands. She rests among the stars, wishing she could find the strength to speak. The grand dining hall is prepared for a formal family banquet. A sudden light rustle sounding Marcia's nerves as she considers sneaking out. Dressed in a white evening gown, Marcia braces herself for the difficult evening ahead.
She takes her seat at the far end of the table, hoping to remain unnoticed.
Marcia recalls how Fabian warned her about the nature of his relatives. She casts a wary glance at the brown-haired woman seated beside her.
The woman enjoys her wine with a cold and dismissive smile.
Marcia questions the true intent behind the choice of her formal attire. A sudden heavy slide sounding occurs as a hand reaches for the cable. Richard asks if she received the specific gift he sent her. Marcia mocks his attempt to act like an adult while thanking him for the gift.
She questions if the gift was intended for tonight's formal dinner.
Richard is confused why she isn't wearing his present, while Marcia finds his lack of observation amusing.
A woman with a high bun asks Richard about the identity of their unknown guest.
A sudden quick clink sounding follows a snide comment about Marcia's outfit.
The woman insults Marcia's low status and asks Richard for more details about her. Flustered, Richard invents a complicated story about Marcia being a distant relative of an assistant. Lady Conrad dismisses her as a mere distant relative of the household staff.
Marcia politely mentions she is only a temporary guest staying at the mansion.
The aunt remains convinced there is no meaningful relationship between Marcia and the family. Lady Conrad insults Marcia's audacity for appearing at a banquet meant for the high nobility. A sudden, firm step sounding echoes as a new arrival approaches the table.
Fabian intervenes, reminding the woman that his family's hospitality has limits.
Marcia is surprised as the atmosphere shifts, and Richard offers a clumsy apology for the rudeness.
Fabian encourages her to enjoy the meal as he takes his place to protect her.
Marcia takes a sip of wine, feeling a small sense of relief in his presence.
A hateful internal thought describes her as a common girl who should simply obey.
Marcia is stunned as the woman continues to lecture her on the importance of noble blood.
An angry voice scoffs at the idea of noble blood, especially regarding those with mixed heritage.
The table erupts into a petty argument about status while Marcia watches in silence.
A sudden loud chatter sounding fills the room as the relatives bicker throughout the meal.
Marcia finally understands why Fabian was so desperate to rush his marriage. She looks over at the young boys sitting across the table from her.
A sudden, sharp gaze sounding occurs as Richard stares intensely at Marcia.
Marcia feels a wave of anxiety, wondering if the boy has realized the truth she is hiding.
Richard points out that he actually sent invitations for 2 people to attend.
He demands to know why Marcia decided to arrive at the banquet alone.
Marcia keeps a composed expression despite the boy's direct and suspicious questioning. She questions his memory, reminding him that she already explained the situation yesterday.
Marcia lies and explains that Larissa is still unwell and resting alone at home.
Richard asks if the doctor really visits the household every single day.
A sudden sharp sting sounding as Marcia worries while Richard questions why Larissa is bedridden today.
A sudden, light cough sounding marks Marcia's fake illness as she explains flu recovery takes time.
A sudden, light clatter sounding occurs as Richard accepts the excuse while others watch silently.
Lady Valerie Conrad insults Marcia, labeling her a lowlife who ruins her appetite. A sudden, light clink sounding follows the tense and judgmental silence at the table.
Marcia reflects that it was a wise decision not to bring Larissa to this dinner.
The relatives bicker as Dominic expresses jealousy toward Fabian's potential position as Grand Duke.
A sudden sharp top sounding marks Marcia's firm decision that there is nothing left to hide.
A sudden, heavy slide sounding accompanies Marcia pushing her chair back to stand up.
Marcia excuses herself from the table, claiming she has suddenly started feeling quite unwell. A sudden light hush sounding fills the room as the other guests watch relief. Marcia wonders if she can truly endure staying with these toxic people for 3 years. A sudden light shimmer sounding marks Marcia's plan to protect Fabian by interfering with the dessert.
She watches the maid approach from behind, worrying about the consequences of her next move.
A sudden sharp prick sounding accompanies Marcia's realization that Valerie is orchestrating a plot.
Narration notes that Emma Laurent is zoning out while Lady Valerie Conrad appears strangely comfortable.
A sudden, quick glance sounding occurs as Marcia realizes facial expressions reveal everyone's hidden secrets.
A sudden, bright glint sounding marks the arrival of the desserts Valerie personally prepared.
A sudden firm thud sounding occurs as Marcia intentionally bumps into the serving maid.
A sudden, loud crash sounding marks the tray and all the desserts falling to the floor.
A sudden, light sweat sounding accompanies Marcia's fake apology as she claims her dress is ruined.
A sudden, sharp click sounding occurs as Valerie mockingly wonders if this is Marcia's first dress.
A sudden, quick brush sounding marks Fabian approaching as Valerie continues to mock Marcia's infantile behavior.
Fabian kneels beside Marcia, looking at her with a calm and protective expression. A sudden, gentle grasp sounding occurs as Fabian takes her hand while she insists she's fine.
A sudden, low whisper sounding accompanies Fabian's warning to Marcia not to eat anything else tonight.
Fabian internally notes his certainty that someone has deliberately tampered with the desserts.
He expresses relief that Marcia was not injured during the staged accident. Fabian promises to escort Marcia to her room and personally bring her safe desserts later.
Marcia politely asks to be excused as she prepares to leave the dining hall.
A sudden, heavy silence sounding remains as the door closes behind Marcia and the maid.
A sudden, quick turn sounding occurs as Fabian turns back to face his relatives. A sudden, sharp laugh sounding echoes from the relatives as they mock Marcia's lack of grace. A sudden, deep sigh sounding marks Marcia's relief at finally being away from the table. Marcia apologizes to Larissa for the long wait as they sit together in private. A sudden light clink sounding accompanies the warm meal as Marcia wonders about the poisoned desserts. Marcia recalls a past event involving a poisoned knife and realizes the recurring danger.
A dark thought suggests that Valerie may have been the one who bought the poison.
Narration warns that stopping Valerie's plan doesn't guarantee safety since Dominic also wants the title. Marcia worries about the threat to Larissa and feels relieved to take the Duchess position herself. She resolves to maintain her role and protect her sister until the divorce eventually happens.
A sudden, sharp click sounding Fabian entering his private study in solitude. A sudden, light slide sounding accompanies Fabian as he sits down at his desk.
Fabian stares forward with a pensive expression, his mind racing with unanswered questions. He wonders how Marcia could have possibly discovered the secret plots within the Laurent household. A sudden, bright flash sounding marks a moment of intense internal realization for Fabian. A sudden, soft hum sounding accompanies Fabian's suspicion that Marcia clearly knew more than she admitted. A sudden, sharp glint sounding reflects in Fabian's eyes as his suspicion grows deeper. Fabian concludes that Marcia is definitely hiding something other than just Larissa's existence from him. Rain pours heavily over the ornate church at the Laurent mansion as the day begins. Emma Laurent casts a sideways glance toward the blonde women during the tense church service. Marcia reflects that she only knows the Laurent relatives and feels out of place among the high-ranking nobility. A resentful thought questions how a woman of Marcia's status could dare to attend the funeral. Dominic and Emma stand close together while Marcia remains focused on the service.
Emma dabs at her face while mockingly thinking that Marcia does not know her place.
Marcia maintains a calm and polite expression despite the hostile atmosphere. She realizes that everyone present view her as a bothersome nuisance.
Marcia's internal frustration grows as she tries to endure the judgmental glances.
She sits alone on the bench, appearing deeply troubled by the weight of the occasion.
Marcia is startled when someone suddenly addresses her from behind.
Richard asks if she has come to attend the Grand Duke's funeral as well. Marcia offers a polite greeting to the black-haired boy as he approaches her.
Marcia stands gracefully in her elaborate black mourning dress.
Richard asks if she bought the luxurious outfit for today, and Marcia explains that Fabian provided it. Richard looks away with a slight blush after receiving her direct answer.
Marcia offers a kind smile that catches the young boy off guard.
Richard is visibly stunned by her sudden and warm expression.
Marcia giggles softly, finding the boy's flustered reaction rather uneasing.
Richard defensively denies that he was asking any significant questions. Richard huffs and quickly turns away while claiming he has no interest in her affairs.
Marcia watches him leave, privately deciding that he is not a suitable match for Larissa.
Marcia looks around the large hall, wondering where Fabian has gone.
She spots Fabian standing alone and looking characteristically dignified.
Marcia observes that none of the attendees are speaking to Fabian or treating him as a successor.
Fabian looks on with a cold gaze, relieved that the contents of the will are still a secret.
An orange-haired man approaches Fabian and places a friendly hand on his shoulder.
Marcia watches from a distance, curious about the identity of the man talking to Fabian. She notes that they seem very close and assumes the orange-haired man must be an important noble.
Marcia continues to watch them, appearing thoughtful and slightly surprised by the interaction.
The solemn mass continues for 2 hours as the Grand Duke lies in state within his casket.
The attendees gather around the coffin to pay their final respects to the deceased.
The Laurent family members conclude their goodbyes as the ceremony nears its end.
Marcia stands before the casket and prepares to offer her own flower to the Duke.
Marcia bows her head, silently apologizing for using the Duke's will to her advantage.
She closes her eyes and prays for the Duke to protect Fabian and her sister.
The group moves to a lavish tea room to discuss matters following the funeral.
Marcia considers trying to speak with the orange-haired man who greeted Fabian earlier.
A sudden, sharp tap sounding occurs as Marcia stands up, desperate for fresh air to escape the overwhelming noise of the guests' inner thoughts.
Marcia leans against the balcony railing in the rain, whispering that she finally feels alive.
Fabian approaches from behind and warns her that she is going to get wet in the downpour. Fabian looks at her with a soft and protective gaze as they stand on the balcony.
Marcia tells him the rain is helping her mood, and Fabian questions her unusual perspective.
Fabian gazes out at the rain, noting that her eyes appear more vibrant than usual.
Fabian offers a rare and gentle smile as he stands beside her.
He asks if she heard from the post office, mentioning that a telegram is expected to arrive soon.
A sudden, loud bang sounding echoes as Fabian lunges forward and pulls Marcia into a tight embrace. Marcia is horrified as she realizes a gunshot has been fired and wonders if Fabian has been hit.
Fabian clutches his bleeding shoulder while a panicked Marcia asks if he is okay.
A sudden, light slide sounding accompanies Fabian reaching into his jacket to draw a hidden handgun as Marcia begs him not to move. A sudden, loud bang sounding marks the gun firing as Fabian pulls Marcia into a protective embrace.
A sudden, quick turn sounding occurs as Fabian stands on the balcony edge, aiming his pistol back toward the unseen attacker while Marcia begs him to wait.
The orange-haired man steps onto the rainy balcony and tells the blonde woman not to worry about that guy.
He confidently asserts that the man would still be fine.
The orange-haired man offers a reassuring smile and promises that he will come back safely.
Marcia looks down from the balcony in distress, noting that the wound seems severe.
The orange-haired man tells her not to worry and realizes he hasn't had the chance to ask for her name yet. The orange-haired man looks at her with a gentle and polite expression.
A sudden light slide sounding accompanies him reaching out his hand to ask if he may know her name.
Marcia identifies herself as Marcia Blick before a sudden loud scream sounding echoes as she is overwhelmed by a psychic shock. A sudden deep rumble sounding occurs as the orange-haired man calls out to Lady Marcia in a panic. Marcia falls backward into darkness, desperately thinking that she doesn't want to die. A sudden heavy thud sounding marks Marcia collapsing to the ground while the orange-haired man shouts her name.
Panicked voices call for a physician and cry out for the lady as she lies unconscious.
A sudden light blink sounding marks Marcia's eye opening as she begins to regain consciousness.
A sudden light cough sounding follows the maid's relieved exclamation that the lady is finally awake.
A sudden dull throb sounding accompanies Marcia clutching her head and wondering why she passed up.
Marcia recalls the moment Fabian shielded her and asks the maid how he is doing, only to be told he is being treated and she should drink her tea.
Narration reveals that the assassin killed himself before he could be captured.
Fabian stands in his room pulling on a white shirt over the heavy bandages on his torso. A sudden light sip sounding occurs as Marcia drinks from her glass while lost in thought. Narration notes the scream that shocked Marcia during the assassination attempt. Marcia realizes the cry was the sound of the assassin's heart as they died, marking the most horrible sound she had ever heard.
Marcia sits alone on the sofa, troubled by the fact that she heard nothing before the gunshot was fired.
A sudden light tremble sounding accompanies her shaking hands as she wonders if the assassin bore no malice and was simply working for money.
She concludes it makes sense that she couldn't hear his intentions if they were purely transactional.
Dark thoughts linger on the threat of more people coming to take Fabian's life.
Fabian enters the room, dressed and looking composed despite his recent injury.
A sudden firm step sounding echoes as Fabian walks toward Marcia. Fabian leans down toward Marcia, his proximity making her blush. Marcia feels flustered and wonders why he is suddenly acting so affectionate toward her. Fabian smiles gently and insists that his injury wasn't serious and was just a scratch.
A sudden soft hum sounding accompanies Fabian expressing his relief that she was safe.
The blonde-haired man with glasses stands with the orange-haired man as Marcia notes that Portis has returned. A sudden quick cough sounding occurs as Fabian clears his throat while Marcia reminds herself she must put on the ring.
The scene shifts to the grand hall where Fabian stands before the guests and announces he has something to say.
Fabian explains that they were all busy offering condolences to Duke Laurent and Lady Conrad, so he hadn't had the chance to speak with everyone personally.
He acknowledges that his timing might seem tactless, but insists on sharing his message.
Fabian stands tall in front of the gathered nobility, commanding the room's attention.
A sudden light gasp sounding ripples through the guests as they listen to him. A sudden sharp shout sounding echoes as Dominic demands to know how Fabian dares to speak his father's last words, while Emma questions the appropriateness of the private topic.
A sudden light chuckle sounding marks Fabian's calm response to his uncle and aunt.
Fabian mockingly suggests that if they wanted to shut him up, they should have hired a better sniper instead of being stingy.
Emma looks panicked and sweat breaks out as she asks why they would do such a thing and create more grudges.
A sudden, loud burst sounding occurs as Dominic lunges at Fabian, accusing him of spreading unfounded slanders.
The orange-haired man steps in and firmly restrains Dominic from attacking Fabian.
A sudden, firm step sounding follows Fabian as he notes that everyone has witnessed Dominic's violent reaction. Fabian gestures to himself, continuing his bold announcement before the crowd. A final statement reveals that he was the one designated to be the next Grand Duke.
Fabian stands bathed in light among blooming roses, appearing as the rightful and dignified successor.
Dominic questions if Fabian has already forgotten the specific requirement for the inheritance.
Dominic mockingly asks if any sane person would marry their daughter to the son of a witch.
Fabian and Marcia stand together before the stunned guests. Fabian calmly declares that he has already fulfilled the marriage requirement. Dominic is shocked and asks Fabian to repeat his surprising claim. A sudden, loud shatter sounding occurs as Emma drops her teacup in complete disbelief. Emma frantically asks if Fabian is truly a married man. Fabian confirms his status while the relatives watch with growing panic.
Portis and the orange-haired noble witness the confrontation.
Narration reveals that Fabian's marriage took place 3 days prior.
The testament confirms that Fabian will become the next Grand Duke.
Fabian formally introduces Marcia Blick as his legal wife.
Fabian offers a mocking smirk while admitting to a minor mistake.
The guests whisper amongst themselves, demanding proof of the woman's noble status. A guest scolds Fabian for his perceived misbehavior during the mourning period. Emma privately fumes at Dominic for failing to ensure the assassination was successful. Marcia observes the chaotic scene and concludes that Dominic was the mastermind.
Dominic argues that the marriage is void without a legal certificate to prove it.
Fabian takes a folded document from Portis to settle the dispute.
Fabian explains that the document has been signed by the king himself.
A sudden sharp top sounding marks Fabian slamming the certificate onto the table. Fabian invites the skeptical guests to examine the proof with their own eyes. Dominic is visibly shaken after inspecting the official document. Dominic desperately questions the legitimacy of the Blick family's noble title. Marcia explains that her ancestors were granted their title and territory by King Herman III.
Richard asks if Marcia's previous claim of being a commoner was a lie.
Marcia playfully teases the boy for falling for her earlier deception. Fabian officially declares that he is now the master of the Laurent household. Fabian welcomes the guests to finish offering their condolences for the late Duke.
He insists that he cannot allow guests to feel uncomfortable in his mansion.
Fabian coldly orders his aunt and uncle to leave the premises immediately. He tells them they must first clear their names regarding the assassination attempt.
Dominic reacts with pure hatred, calling Fabian a half-blood bastard. Fabian and Marcia walk away while the relatives scream in protest.
Marcia glances back with a look of concern and apprehension. Emma demands proof and accuses Fabian of slandering her with defamation. Dominic shouts for them to return as they exit the hall.
The couple walks down the grand, sunlit corridor together.
Marcia calls out to Fabian and asks him to wait for her. A sudden, tight squeeze sounding follows Fabian catching Marcia firmly by the hand.
Marcia reminds him of his previous promise to avoid touching her.
Fabian asks for clarification on whether all physical contact is truly forbidden.
Marcia suggests that common courtesies like dancing or escorting are the only exceptions. Fabian argues that holding hands should also be considered a category of courtesy.
A sudden light slide sounding accompanies Fabian firmly clasping her hand in his.
Fabian asks her what she thinks about their previous close contact during the shooting. Marcia thinks about how his touch was purely meant for her safety.
Marcia reflects on the possibility of future emergencies requiring more contact.
Marcia apologizes for her comment and asks him to ignore it.
Fabian suggests that they should establish clear boundaries for their relationship. Fabian leans in close to Marcia as they discuss the details of their new living arrangement. Fabian suggests they should only exclude intimate nightly activities from their deal, leaving Marcia completely flustered and blushing. Fabian asks for her opinion on the proposal, and Marcia sheepishly agrees to his terms.
A sudden, sharp bang sounding echoes as Dominic slams his hand on the table, desperately shouting that he is innocent.
Two guards forcibly drag Dominic away while the black-haired boy, Richard, sighs and wonders when the family will ever find peace. Richard asks the brown-haired woman, Eloise, what she intends to do now that the situation has changed. Narration notes how pathetic Eloise looks now that she realizes Fabian is a married man.
Eloise seethes with rage, wondering how a half-blood like Fabian could dare to reject her after she had been willing to accept him despite everything.
Looking at Fabian's back, Eloise feels utterly betrayed by his sudden marriage and the secrets he kept. A sudden sharp crunch sounding occurs as a foot stomps onto shards of broken glass while the name of Fabian is called out in anger.
Eloise stands abruptly, her eyes glowing with a menacing purple light as she declares that Fabian has made a massive mistake. Eloise looks visibly troubled as she questions if the position of Duchess truly belongs to the new woman. Eloise snaps at Richard to worry about his own future, reminding him of how their uncle was just dragged out of the mansion. Richard coolly asks if the same fate didn't already befall their hand.
Eloise admits she is aware of the situation, but insists that now is not the time for him to be laughing about it.
A vision of Fabian and Marcia with a child appears, highlighting the fear that if they have a son, everyone else loses their claim to the dukedom. Richard observes that Eloise seems incredibly tense, which only serves to irritate her more.
Richard explains that since his father was only the second son, he personally never cared about the title of duke anyway.
Richard admits that while he doesn't exactly regret the outcome, things have certainly become more complicated.
Marcia reflects on the day's events, realizing she needs to view Fabian in a completely different light from now on.
Eloise grudgingly admits that Fabian is competent for marrying the very moment the testament was proclaimed, while Richard waves her off. Richard suggests that his mother should head home first, though she asks if he intends to stay behind at the estate.
Richard offers a bright smile and tells her not to worry, noting that only their father and Aunt Valerie were truly banished. Narration explains that even though Fabian allowed the funeral guests to stay as long as they liked, the mood was sour. Not a single guest stayed for even one extra day, as everyone immediately began making excuses to leave the premises.
The scene focuses on the young, black-haired Richard as he remains at the Laurent mansion. The orange-haired Marquis Leonid Olaf is formally introduced as he remains behind to support the new duke.
Leonid offered his full assistance to Fabian, and Fabian accepted the offer without any refusal.
A sudden light clink sounding accompanies someone setting down a teacup as they ponder Richard's true motives for staying.
Marcia sits in her library, deciding she is fine with Richard's presence as long as he doesn't cross paths with her or Larissa. A sudden, soft sip sounding occurs as Marcia drinks her tea, confident that Fabian will personally handle any trouble Richard causes.
A sudden rhythmic knock sounding at the door prompts Marcia to invite the visitor to enter the room. The pink-haired butler, Alfred, enters the library followed by a maid carrying a massive tray of letters.
Marcia thanks Alfred for the delivery, but he playfully suggests she should stop using formal honorifics with him.
A sudden, deep sigh sounding escapes Marcia as she looks over the pile of invitations and visit requests from the curious nobility.
Marcia notes that the nobles are likely trying to test the waters since they believe the current situation can be easily manipulated.
The maid watches Marcia intently, while a thought bubble remarks on the audacity of a mistress in a bumpkin dress suddenly appearing. Marcia maintains a polite smile while noting the gossip that she showed up as a mistress only the day before yesterday.
Marcia continues her conversation with Alfred, who responds to her comments with a casual tone.
Marcia looks into a large storage box and expresses her relief at a piece of positive news.
She reflects on her initial plan to decline all the invitations, but decided to keep the letters just in case they became necessary later.
Marcia lifts the lid of the box, noting that it would be a huge problem to accidentally decline an important invitation.
A sudden, crisp rustle sounding follows Marcia picking up a letter and announcing her intention to head out for a while. Fabian is seen sitting at his massive, ornate desk in his study, deeply focused on his duties.
Without looking up from his stack of paperwork, Fabian tells the visitor at the door to come inside.
Marcia steps into the office carrying her box, offering her husband a warm and gentle smile. Marcia wonders if he is so overwhelmed with work that he didn't even bother to look up and see who was entering. Marcia looks at the busy Duke with a slightly puzzled and thoughtful expression on her face. Fabian remains hunched over his desk, his black hair falling over his face as he continues to write. A sudden, soft chuckle sounding escapes Marcia as she recalls a common saying about people with two hair whorls getting married twice. Marcia enters the room and offers a polite morning greeting to Fabian.
Fabian looks up from his desk and asks what the Duchess requires as she requests a moment of his time.
Agreeing to her request, Fabian inquires about the stack of letters she has brought with her.
The blonde-haired woman offers a gentle and warm smile in response to his question.
Marcia explains her concern about overlooking an important letter and asks if he wants her to filter through them.
Marcia admits her perceived shortcomings in her new role while expressing a desire to take charge of her own correspondence.
A flashback depicts Marcia enjoying herself at parties, noting that her past life was filled with dancing and drinking.
Marcia reflects on her temporary status, planning to leave once Larissa is old enough to become the true Duchess. Fabian shifts the conversation and asks if there is another favor she wishes to request of him. A chibi version of Fabian asks if the favor concerns Lady Larissa again, which Marcia confirms is correct. Marcia appears deeply concerned and nervous as she clasps her hands together before her chest. A thought bubble questions the adequacy of the current physician as the scene shifts to a maid tidying the room. The young, silver-haired Larissa is shown sleeping soundly while clutching a small gingerbread man toy.
Marcia considers the need for a specific kind of doctor who can address the child's deep emotional scars.
Fabian ponders the request, noting that he has never encountered a physician capable of healing such intangible wounds. Marcia realizes with a start that the current level of medicine lacks a foundation for psychological treatment. Marcia wonders if magic might hold the answer to healing emotional trauma, appearing visibly startled by the thought. Fabian remains silent as a dark, introspective thought bubble questions the direction of his own thinking. Marcia recalls that Fabian's mother was a magician and wonders if he possesses any secret knowledge of the craft. Marcia decides to postpone her questions about magic, focusing instead on finding a physician who can keep a secret. A sudden, firm squeeze sounding follows Fabian interlocking his fingers while recommending Dr. Bellman as a trustworthy choice. Fabian fixes his gaze on her and asks if she is hiding a secret from him. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding escapes Marcia as she looks up in shock, her face turning a deep shade of red. Flustered, Marcia stammeringly asks him what he thinks she is trying to hide from him. Fabian tells her to relax and assures her that he is not attempting to interrogate her. A close-up of hands reveals Fabian's internal suspicion as he wonders if Marcia herself was a victim of abuse. Marcia admits to herself that she was abused, but remains determined to keep the details a secret for her own sake. Narration describes the hidden nature of the goblin's tears, symbolizing the secrets that are not meant to be exposed. Fabian asks if she learned about her condition from a physician, but Marcia replies that no doctor has told her anything. Fabian looks away thoughtfully, stating that he has known the truth from the very first moment he saw her. The flashback continues as the sisters, finally safe, desperately ask for medicine to treat their physical wounds.
Marcia is stunned into silence by his keen observation and the realization that her past is not as hidden as she thought.
Fabian places a hand over his heart with a serious expression, his red eyes focused intently on his wife. The couple stands together in the sunlit study, the weight of their shared secrets hanging heavy in the air. Fabian makes a solemn declaration that he intends to fulfill all of his responsibilities as her husband. A sudden, warm flush sounding occurs as Marcia's heart begins to flutter in response to his unexpected promise. A sudden, light fiddle sounding follows Marcia nervously playing with her hands as she wonders what else he can do for them.
Fabian offers his help in a more practical manner, leaving Marcia confused as to what he actually intends to do.
A text bubble reveals his intent to permanently handle the people who were responsible for abusing Larissa. Fabian states that he will not be half-hearted about his actions, unlike the relatives who failed at the funeral. Horrified, Marcia asks if he is planning to assassinate the people who harmed the child. Marcia notes that such a drastic measure would certainly ensure that Larissa is never in danger again. Marcia's internal conflict is shown through flashbacks of the abuse, weighing the death penalty against her own guilt for letting it happen. Fabian asks if she was also a victim of the same treatment, but Marcia quickly and nervously denies it. Marcia pleads with him to simply stick to the terms of their original agreement and nothing more.
A flashback clarifies the agreement, that Larissa must never be handed over to any other noble family.
Fabian offers a slight smile and assures her that he has no intention of forgetting the document they both signed.
Marcia thanks him before changing the subject to ask about the current state of his health.
A sudden, sharp crack sounding accompanies a flashback of Fabian being shot at the funeral, though he dismisses the concern as nothing.
Marcia expresses concern over Fabian's pale complexion, but he dismisses her worry as unnecessary.
A heavy, introspective silence falls over the couple as they look at one another.
Fabian begins to offer proof of his physical condition to the skeptical Marcia. A sudden, sharp rustle sounding occurs as Fabian begins to unbutton his shirt to reveal his wound. Marcia frantically shouts for him to stop undressing in the middle of the study. Flustered, Marcia explained she was simply grateful that he took a bullet to protect her. Marcia reminds the Duke that he had lost a significant amount of blood from the injury. Fabian calmly assures her that his stitched wound will be fully healed in a short time.
Marcia recalls how he survived a carriage crash unharmed, wondering about his apparent resilience. Fabian tells her not to worry and grants her the freedom to act as she pleases regarding her duties.
A text bubble specifies that she only needs to attend official events where both their presences are required. The blonde-haired Marcia offers her sincere thanks with a polite and humble posture. Marcia vows to honor their agreement as she prepares to leave the room. A sudden rhythmic click sounding follows Marcia as she descends the grand staircase. A sudden light click sounding accompanies Marcia as she enters Larissa's room with a bright smile. A maid formally welcomes Marcia while the silver-haired Larissa sits quietly at the dining table. Marcia questions why Larissa is eating so late, prompting the maid to explain the child's earlier refusals. The maid notes that despite several attempts, the girl had repeatedly refused to have her meal.
Marcia wonders if her absence from the room caused the young girl to feel anxious.
Marcia sits beside Larissa and gently asks the child why she hadn't eaten earlier.
Marcia encourages Larissa to relax and enjoy her meal now that they are together.
Larissa reaches for her spoon, ready to finally begin her dinner.
Larissa quietly and slowly begins to chew her food under Marcia's watchful eye. The maid is visibly delighted to see that Larissa is finally eating now that Marcia has returned.
Marcia reflects that despite the silence and lack of eye contact, Larissa's appetite proves she is beginning to trust her.
Larissa looks up with wide, innocent green eyes as she continues her meal.
Marcia asks the girl if she has finished eating, and the child responds with a soft nod.
Marcia reaches out and gently grasps both of Larissa's small hands.
Marcia invites the silver-haired girl to join her for a refreshing walk through the estate.
Marcia offers a warm and affectionate smile, her green eyes shining with kindness. Marcia asks Larissa if she likes going outside as they walk together toward the gardens.
The pair stands together, admiring the vibrant colors of the setting sun.
Marcia comments on the pleasant weather, noting that the sun is warm but not too intense. Larissa looks down at the flowers with a quiet, thoughtful expression on her face.
Marcia notes the child's downward gaze and assumes she is still feeling a bit shy. Marcia excitedly points out the beautiful features of the garden to the young girl.
Narration marvels at the world's beauty, while Marcia wonders about the care given to the gardens. Marcia points out a remarkable baby angel statue nestled among the garden's greenery.
Marcia suggests they go look at the blooming daffodils, calling them a sure sign of spring. A narrative caption expresses the hope that Larissa can grow into a normal, happy child.
Marcia leans toward the flowers and asks Larissa if she wants to smell them.
Larissa appears hesitant as she looks at the bright yellow flowers in front of her.
A sudden, soft sniff sounding occurs as Larissa leans in to take in the flower scent.
Marcia laughs and remarks on how wonderful the blossoms smell to the young girl.
Marcia reflects on the trauma of Larissa's past and how every positive experience is a new discovery for her.
Marcia asks if Larissa would like to have some sandwiches as they continue their walk.
The pair sits together by the edge of a fountain, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. Marcia is startled when a voice suddenly addresses her by her former royal title.
The black-haired Richard appears, stating that he hadn't expected to cross paths with her again.
A sudden, deep sigh sounding escapes Richard as he comments on the unexpected meeting.
Marcia introduces Larissa as her little sister and a friend of Richard.
Marcia questions why Richard is still present after the Grand Duke's funeral.
Richard claims to be grieving, though Marcia notes he shed no tears.
Richard insists he will return to the academy in a few days regardless.
A sudden, quick rustle sounding occurs as Marcia bids him a polite farewell.
Richard shouts for Marcia to wait as she attempts to walk away.
Richard offers a bright and cheerful smile. Marcia finds the boy's unusual behavior quite strange.
Marcia notes she is the homeowner and he needn't stop her.
Marcia insists she knows the house's layout, but Richard warns it is too vast.
A sudden, light fidget sounding follows Richard, stopping her once more.
Blushing, Richard asks if she should officially introduce him to her sister.
Marcia wonders if he is specifically referring to Larissa.
Richard reluctantly admits that they have officially become relatives.
Despite his dislike for Fabian, Richard asks again for an official introduction. Marcia hesitates, stating that Larissa is still not quite herself. Larissa looks away with a quiet and somber expression.
Marcia questions if now is truly the right time.
Marcia agrees to the introduction if Larissa is comfortable with that.
Richard is visibly stunned by her sudden compliance. A sudden, sharp flinch sounding occurs as Marcia prepares to set family boundaries.
Marcia reminds him that she holds a higher family status.
Marcia notes Laurent's standards and compares the status of both siblings.
Marcia refuses to introduce her sister to someone who lacks proper conduct.
Richard apologizes for his behavior and promises to be more courteous.
Marcia laughs happily while hugging her silver-headed sister.
Larissa looks up with a wide-eyed and innocent expression.
Marcia introduces the boy as the Grand Duke's cousin.
Marcia clarifies that his name is Richard Laurent. Richard remains deeply flustered and turns his hand away. Marcia wonders if he has always been this easily embarrassed.
Richard formally introduces himself as the family's youngest member.
Marcia finds his attempt to impress her sister rather cute. Marcia explains that Larissa has not yet regained her voice. Richard wonders if a severe cold cost her silence. A dark thought bubble mocks the vulnerability of commoners to simple illnesses. Marcia hides the true reason for Larissa's trauma while holding her hand. Marcia takes her leave, leaving the stuttering Richard in the gardener. Marcia hopes the boy will eventually lose interest in Marissa.
Richard stares intensely after the pair as they depart.
Marcia asks a physician about the state of Larissa's wounds.
The doctor assumes she received a report from the Grand Deep.
A sudden, firm thud sounding occurs as the doctor closes his medical case.
Marcia confirms she is following his advice, but the doctor remains serious.
The doctor warns that severe abuse might leave lasting after effects.
Stunned, Marcia repeats the news about the child's potential complications.
The brown-haired doctor explains that the trauma may cause seizures. Marcia is visibly shaken by the news of potential seizures. The doctor advises her to be prepared for any future developments. Marcia realizes she must constantly reassure Larissa that the past is over. Marcia reflects on the importance of the present moment while observing the silver-haired Larissa.
The blonde-haired Marcia realizes she still has a great deal to accomplish in the coming years.
A quiet corner of the room serves as the backdrop for the news that Larissa has only 3 years remaining. Marcia sits comfortably on the bed and holds Larissa's small hands in her own. A sudden bright glow sounding accompanies a tray of freshly baked gingerbread cookies that look incredibly delicious.
Marcia is pleasantly surprised that the baking session in the kitchen finished so quickly and neatly.
The silver-haired girl stands in the kitchen surrounded by a group of friendly, applauding cooks. The head cook marvels at how skillfully the young girl worked with her small hands.
Marcia watches the scene from a distance, delighted to see the child engaging in a fun activity.
The chef praises her work while Marcia admits she was initially hesitant about letting the girl in the kitchen.
Marcia beams with joy and holds her face in her hands, feeling proud of the child's progress. A sudden, soft tap sounding follows Larissa as she presents a small gift to the blonde woman.
Marcia asks if she has already finished with her task as the girl stares back at her intently.
Marcia reacts with wide-eyed shock and blushing cheeks at the child's sweet gesture.
Larissa holds out a small bag containing 2 of the gingerbread men she decorated herself.
Marcia asks with a touched expression if the special treats are meant specifically for her.
The blonde-haired woman looks overjoyed as she receives the gift from the quiet girl.
Marcia offers her heartfelt thanks to Larissa for the thoughtful and sweet present. Marcia reflects on how much progress they have made since they first struggled to meet each other's eyes.
Marcia thanks the head chef for his help as he prepares to take the remaining cookies away. The chef insists he was happy to help because the kitchen hasn't been this lively in a long time.
A sudden, loud laugh sounding erupts from the kitchen staff as they invite the pair to return soon.
Marcia asks Larissa if she would like to come back to the kitchen for another session later.
A sudden, light nod sounding accompanies Larissa as she silently agrees to the suggestion. A sudden, firm squeeze sounding occurs as Marcia holds the child's hand, grateful for the day's events.
A sudden, rhythmic step sounding follows Marcia as she invites Larissa to have dinner in the dining room.
Marcia vows to do her best to help the child get used to the estate one step at a time.
Marcia thinks of Fabian as the only person she can eventually trust with Larissa's future. Marcia realizes that Larissa's personal happiness and her own choices are the most important factors. A formal letter appears while Marcia contemplates the necessity of Larissa's future remarriage after a divorce. Marcia hopes that one day she, Larissa, and the Duke can all share a meal casually together. Marcia is suddenly startled and wonders if the person she sees is actually the student council president. A sudden, soft creak sounding occurs as Marcia cautiously peers into the grand dining room.
The red-haired Count Olaf explains his prestigious school position while the black-haired man listens.
Marcia recognizes the red-haired man as a descendant of the prominent Olaf family.
Marcia spots the black-haired man's back and wonders if he is Fabian or the younger Richard.
A sudden, quick turn sounding accompanies the black-haired man looking back as the red-haired man greets the Duchess.
Marcia greets Count Olaf and asks if he is planning to stay for dinner as well.
Marcia introduces the silver-haired girl by her full name, Larissa Blick, to the red-haired man.
Count Olaf politely greets the young girl, who looks back with a shy and curious expression.
A sudden, deep bow sounding follows Olaf being respectful as Marcia explains the child's shyness. Olaf invites them to take a seat at the table spread with a large roasted bird. A sudden, sharp cough sounding escapes the black-haired Fabian as Marcia looks at him in confusion. A sudden, bright blush sounding warms Fabian's face as Marcia wonders if he wants an introduction. A sudden, sharp huff sounding accompanies Marcia as she decides against a second introduction and walks away. Olaf questions Fabian's presence at the table, prompting an annoyed retort from the black-haired man. Olaf mentions he has been studying in the library and only wants a light meal for the evening.
Fabian scolds the younger man for not understanding the supreme importance of a proper dinner.
A sudden, soft mumble sounding follows Fabian as he complains about the lack of proper noble manners. Marcia is visibly annoyed, lamenting that their rare dining room visit was interrupted by an encounter with Fabian. Marcia realizes she must change the subject and thanks the red-haired Count Olaf for his previous help. Marcia smiles at Count Olaf, recalling how he supported her so she wouldn't fall during the late Grand Duke's funeral.
A sepia-toned memory reveals a grieving Marcia in a black gown, noting she lacked the social experience to greet him properly at the time.
Count Olaf laughs and dismisses it as a small gesture, but Marcia insists she felt uncomfortable for not formally thanking him.
The silver-haired Larissa looks up from her meal with a startled and wide-eyed expression.
A warm and inviting bowl of soup rests on the table, steaming gently.
A close-up shot focuses on a small hand reaching for a silver spoon.
Marcia observes the scene at the dining table and comments on how delicious the meal is.
A sudden, soft flush sounding warms Larissa's cheeks as she continues to eat her soup.
Marcia watches the silver-haired girl with a gentle smile, noting that she must find the food quite tasty since she hasn't stopped eating.
Marcia leans her head on her hand and thinks about how truly adorable the young girl is.
The black-haired Fabian sits at the table, blushing intensely while holding a piece of bread.
Marcia is visibly irritated by Fabian's behavior, internally questioning what is wrong with him. Marcia grows protective, telling him to stop staring at Larissa and reminding herself that the girl is destined to marry the prince.
Marcia decides to ignore Fabian's intentions and turns back to Count Olaf to ask what they were discussing.
Olaf explains they were reminiscing about the academy, noting that he is the senior of the black-haired man and that Fabian also graduated from there.
Olaf laughs as he recalls meeting the black-haired man when he was a cute boy, wondering how old he was back then.
A sudden rhythmic step sounding follows the black-haired Fabian as he stands behind the seated blonde Marcia. Fabian scolds Olaf for claiming to be with his superior's wife when he was actually here, while Olaf begs him not to phrase it so poorly. A sudden, sharp flinch escapes Fabian as Olaf retorts that it was Fabian's fault for missing the dinner after his own wedding.
Surprised, Marcia looks at Fabian and asks if he hasn't eaten yet, assuming he had already finished his meal.
Fabian admits he hasn't eaten and suggests that they should all share their meals in the dining room together from now on. Marcia waves her hands and claims she doesn't want to hinder his work, though she internally worries about the duty of preparing meals for the household.
Count Olaf smiles at Marcia and mentions that she arrived at the perfect time because he has a question for her.
The tall, black-haired Fabian stands silently behind the blonde Marcia as she sits at the dining table. Marcia asks what he needs and prepares to explain her temporary absence from the estate. Fabian interrupts to explain that they happened to cross paths during her absence and that Marcia saved his life.
Marcia looks delighted and sparkles with joy, relieved that his explanation will prevent any pointless misunderstandings.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding escapes Marcia as Fabian adds the shocking lie that he was love-struck and invited her here for that reason.
A sudden, loud spit sounding erupts from Count Olaf as he spits out his wine in complete shock at Fabian's claim.
Marcia is overwhelmed with embarrassment and anger, realizing Fabian is making it look like they fell in love at first sight.
Marcia remembers their actual first meeting, noting that he only helped because he wanted to avoid a ruckus, and she never got a chance to explain. Marcia looks at the innocent, silver-haired girl and is thankful that Larissa doesn't understand the implications of Fabian's lie. Larissa looks back with a curious and unbothered expression, seemingly unaware of the adult's tension.
Marcia is internally fuming and shocked that Fabian would say such things without any warning.
A sudden, frustrated sigh sounding escapes Marcia as she wishes they had at least discussed the cover story beforehand. Marcia takes a drink of wine and tries to calm herself, concluding that the lie was a necessary evil to protect her position.
Olaf asks if the story is true, and a sweating, nervous Marcia is forced to confirm his ridiculous claim.
A vase of flowers sits on a dresser as Marcia wonders what exactly is going on with the household's dynamics.
Olaf remains skeptical, noting that Fabian doesn't seem like the type of person to be so careless around a girl he just met.
Fabian thinks to himself that it was thanks to her yelling in his face that he managed to survive the encounter.
A sudden, rhythmic clink sounding follows Fabian's hands as he cuts into his food, recalling how he detected the threat.
Olaf wonders if it was keen intuition that saved him, but Fabian clarifies that it wasn't exactly intuition that led him to her.
Marcia laughs and suggests that it was likely more of a survival instinct than anything else.
A close-up of Marcia's bright green eye captures her sudden realization about the events of that day.
Fabian offers a small, mysterious smile while suggesting that their meeting could also be seen as destiny.
Fabian reveals the dark truth that there was actually a poisonous knife hidden inside the bag during their first encounter.
Marcia is suddenly startled and asks him to wait as she processes this new piece of information.
Marcia questions if he had ever mentioned the knife before, realizing he has never shared such dangerous details with her. A sudden, light top sounding occurs as Marcia wonders if someone was actually trying to get the drop on her back then. A moment of quiet tension follows as the conversation at the dinner table deepens.
Marcia reacts with genuine shock, expressing disbelief that the beggar had carried such a lethal weapon.
Marcia puts on a shameless performance of ignorance at the table while the men observe her skeptically. Internally, Marcia worries about her poor acting skills but hopes the black-haired Fabian won't notice her deception. Fabian looks at her skeptically, questioning if she has prepared a script for this performance.
He goes further, wondering if she hired actors to stage their meeting and demanding to know how she detected the poison.
A sudden, sharp scoff sounding accompanies Marcia as she defensively crosses her arms, asking if she wasn't permitted to be aware of the danger.
The black-haired man admits he only confirmed the culprit's identity after his arrival, his gaze fixed intently on her. A sudden, sharp scrape sounding follows as Fabian stands up, demanding to know why she would risk following a stranger.
Marcia is taken aback by his sudden intensity, her eyes wide as she looks up from her seat.
A sudden, loud spit sounding erupts from Count Olaf as he reacts to the chaotic exchange between the pair.
Olaf finds the story of the rescue amusing, concluding that their meeting must have been a case of love at first sight. Fabian turns away with a dismissive comment, suggesting there is more to the story than a simple romantic encounter.
Memories of their meeting surface, with thoughts of being intrigued by someone's nature from the very first moment.
A bright and happy image of Marcia smiling fills his mind, contrasting with the tension of the present. Olaf laughs heartily, declaring that Marcia is clearly an extraordinary woman to have left such an impression. Olaf teases that she must be quite the charmer to win Fabian over so quickly, while Marcia humbly dismisses the praise. Olaf reflects on how difficult it usually is for anyone to capture the interest of the stern Duke.
A sudden, soft mumble sounding follows as someone continues their meal in silence.
Fabian remains quiet as he eats, his expression unreadable while he processes the conversation.
Marcia's gentle smile is framed by soft flowers, symbolizing her growing presence in the household.
A sudden, rhythmic scratch sounding follows Fabian as he sits in a study focused on his paperwork. He pauses his writing, unable to shake the memory of Marcia's genuine smile from his thoughts.
Fabian reflects on his initial impression of her, recalling that he once thought she was a very cold and rigid woman. He notes that her smiles in the past always seemed forced or performative rather than sincere. He admits to himself that he never truly understood what was going on in her mind.
Another flash of her bright, warm smile appears, highlighting how much his perception of her has changed.
He remembers her look of pure astonishment, a reaction that felt far more real than her usual mask.
A sudden, crisp rustle sounding occurs as Fabian handles the documents on his desk.
Fabian resolves to wait and see how things develop, a small smile appearing on his face as he looks at the paper.
A close-up of his eye reveals his newfound certainty regarding the events that have unfolded.
A vision of the child beggar and the hidden poison serves as a grim reminder of the danger he faced.
Fabian remains in deep thought, his profile illuminated as he focuses on his work.
Count Olaf enters the study, leaning over the desk to ask what has captured his friend's attention so completely.
A sudden sharp flinch sounding accompanies Fabian as Olaf points out that the quality of his writing has become messy.
A sudden loud laugh sounding follows Olaf as he teases Fabian about being distracted by thoughts of his wife.
Fabian looks up with a blush, defensively asking what Olaf is trying to imply with his comments.
Olaf looks smug, convinced that his teasing has hit close to the mark regarding Fabian's feelings.
Olaf suggests that Fabian should communicate more openly with her, noting that she spoke of him throughout the entire dinner.
A sudden soft cough sounding escapes Olaf as he notices Fabian's growing embarrassment.
A sudden sharp flinch sounding follows Fabian as Olaf asks if the couple has yet to share their first night together.
Olaf grins, taking Fabian's flustered reaction as a confirmation that his suspicions were correct.
A sudden, soft mumble sounding follows Fabian as he tells his friend that his private marital affairs are none of his business.
Olaf becomes more serious, reminding Fabian that his primary duty is to ensure the future of his line by producing an heir.
Olaf jokes about how little time it takes for such things, prompting Fabian to order him to be quiet.
Olaf grows inquisitive about the assassination attempt, and Fabian confirms that Marcia truly did save his life.
He elaborates on the lethality of the poison used by the child assassin, emphasizing the magnitude of the threat.
Olaf asks if he has any theories about her abilities, his expression turning more contemplative.
A sudden rhythmic tap sounding follows Fabian's fingers as he acknowledges her keen powers of observation.
Fabian wonders if she can actually read minds, yet he notes she remains surprisingly oblivious to her own situation.
Fabian reflects on Marcia's lack of acting talent, though he notes she is remarkably self-assured.
He considers how she struggles to manage everything on her own and contemplates hiring a personal maid for her.
Fabian lapses into a pensive silence, his hand resting thoughtfully against his chin.
Count Olaf breaks the silence, calling out to Fabian as he notices the Duke's deep distraction.
Olaf laughs and teases his friends, suggesting Fabian is hopelessly smitten and destined to be with her forever.
The scene shifts to Marcia, who wears a serene and gentle expression in the soft light.
Larissa lets out a large yawn, clearly exhausted from the day's excitement.
Marcia finishes helping the sleepy child change into her nightclothes, marveling at how adorable she looks.
Marcia tucks the young girl into bed, reflecting on all the new, positive memories Larissa made that day. Marcia reaches out to extinguish the lamp, hoping to provide the child with a restful and undisturbed sleep.
As Larissa sleeps, she begins to shiver and whimper, visibly distressed by an unseen terror. Marcia notices the child's distress and worriedly asks if she is feeling rolled.
Marcia gently strokes the girl's hand, offering soothing words and the comfort of her presence.
Marcia's expression darkens with concern as she realizes the child might be suffering through a nightmare.
She wonders if the fear of the dark is what continues to haunt the silver-haired girl.
Marcia recalls the trauma Larissa endured while imprisoned in a dark basement for so long.
She acknowledges that it will take more time for the young girl to heal from the phobia ingrained in her. Marcia spots something unexpected hidden beneath the child's puddle.
A gingerbread man cookie is revealed, tucked carefully away under the edge of the pillow.
Marcia realizes Larissa used her old handkerchief as a makeshift blanket to keep the cookie safe.
Marcia is moved, realizing the child cherished the cookie-making experience so much that she wanted to sleep near it.
Watching the child sleep, Marcia expresses a desire to share many more happy milestones with her.
Marcia reflects on her bond with Larissa, acknowledging that the girl has become her entire world.
Marcia leans down and kisses Larissa's cheek, silently wishing for her constant happiness.
In a dreamlike vision, a surprised Larissa looks up with large, questioning eyes.
Marcia speaks softly, concerned that her gentle gesture might have accidentally woken the girl.
The blonde woman sits close to the bed, watching over the young child with a tender gaze. Marcia smiles warmly and promises to remain by the girl's side through the net. Marcia gives the child a final affectionate pat on the hand while wishing her a sweet sleep.
A whimsical dream unfolds as a large gingerbread man walks across soft clouds toward a seated Larissa.
In the dream, the gingerbread man asks why someone would press their lips against her cheek.
The cookie man becomes worried, asking if the person intends to eat her.
Dream Larissa explains that the gesture is simply a goodnight kiss meant for comfort. She elaborates, telling the cookie man that a kiss on the cheek is a way to wish someone peaceful rest. Larissa looks contemplative as she processes the meaning of the affection she received.
A subtle blush spreads across the girl's face as she dwells on the warmth of the moment.
Back in the room, Marcia watches over the sleeping girl while a mysterious new feeling takes root.
Dream Larissa sits amidst a field of flowers, appearing shy and deeply affected by the memory.
The giant cookie man calls for her attention, pointing back toward the waking world. He notes that Marcia is gently patting her, a gesture the dream Larissa identifies as a caress.
The young girl wonders about Marcia's identity and the nature of the kindness being shown to her.
Larissa remains lost in thought, her gaze focused as she tries to understand her surroundings.
Larissa suddenly wakes up, her bright green eyes wide with a mix of wonder and confusion.
She sees that Marcia has fallen asleep by her side and reaches out a trembling hand to touch her hair.
Marcia continues to sleep peacefully, unaware of the child's soft, tentative touch. Larissa looks at the blonde woman with a newfound sense of awe and curiosity.
Startled, Larissa quickly scrambles away from the bed while clutching her precious cookie.
Marcia wakes up and lets out a sudden, startled gasp as she realizes she overslept.
As she walks, Marcia laments her decision to give Larissa so much space, missing the chance to see her face upon waking. A determined miniature Marcia glows with passion, vowing to make Larissa smile every single day. Marcia greets Larissa with a warm smile as the morning begins.
Marcia kindly asks the young girl if she was able to sleep all.
The silver-haired girl sits in silence, appearing calm amidst a backdrop of blooming flowers.
Marcia's overwhelmed with affection, her heart practically skipping a beat at the sight of the child.
Marcia takes the girl's hands in her own, offering gentle comfort and care. A close-up of Marcia reveals her soft, genuine expression of motherly love.
A sudden, quick clink sounding accompanies the various dishes and pastries laid out for breakfast.
Marcia encourages Larissa to take her time while eating the meal.
Marcia looks out at the bright day while a sudden light chirp sounding comes from the garden.
Marcia enjoys a morning drink while reflecting on the peaceful atmosphere. Marcia invites Larissa to play in the front garden while a sudden light knock sounding echoes at the door. A cheerful brown-haired maid enters the room with a pleasant smile. The maid explains that the Duke sent her to serve Marcia, which leaves the blonde woman momentarily surprised. The new maid bows politely, introducing herself as Sophia. Marcia reflects on how Fabian has been thoughtful enough to provide for them despite his busy work schedule. Marcia expresses her gratitude and says she looks forward to having Sophia's support. Marcia smiles warmly, pleased by the unexpected kindness from her husband.
Sophia offers to assist with anything needed while Marcia thanks her for the help.
Sophia excitedly asks if Marcia is ready to inspect the newly prepared quarters. The scene shifts toward a quiet fireplace and bookshelf, indicating a comfortable and well-kept space.
Sophia notes that the room had been empty for a long time and required significant renovation.
Sophia adds that the furniture can be rearranged and the room decorated to fit Marcia's personal taste. Marcia is taken aback, wondering if the space is more akin to an entire mansion than just a single room. A sudden sharp creak sounding follows Sophia as she opens the doors to a grand dressing room. A sudden bright gleam sounding catches the light as Sophia promises to immediately change anything Marcia finds unpleasant.
Marcia stands in utter shock at the sheer number of outfits provided for her.
Sophia gestures toward a vast collection of spring dresses ready for use. She continues the tour by pointing out the extensive selection of casual everyday wear.
Sophia explains that the Duke gave specific instructions to ensure Marcia had a wide variety of choices.
Marcia is stunned by the Duke's wealth, realizing it would take her a decade to wear every dress provided. Marcia asks Sophia to help her select a comfortable outfit suitable for a walk in the garden. Sophia asks if Marcia has any specific preferences for how Larissa's clothing should be handled. Marcia decides that she wants to personally choose the outfits for the young girl. Sophia realizes that Marcia has been consulting the doctor to ensure Larissa's recovery and well-being are prioritized. Sophia asks what should be done with the separate room she prepared for the child on the floor below. Marcia knows in her heart that the silver-haired girl is not yet ready to stay in a room by herself. She understands that the girl's fear of the trophic makes sleeping alone impossible for now. Marcia hopes that the child will eventually gain enough confidence to sleep without help. Marcia resolves to keep the girl with her until she is fully healed and ready for independence. Marcia instructs the maid to leave the extra room as it is so it remains available for whenever the girl is ready.
Marcia's attention is caught by another set of grand, ornate doors nearby.
A sudden soft creak sounding follows as Marcia asks if that particular door leads into a guest suite.
A sudden heavy thump sounding punctuates Sophia's reveal that the room is the master bedroom for Marcia and the Duke.
A flustered Marcia asks for clarification on whether the space is truly meant for both of them to share. Sophia confirms it is the Duke's primary bedroom and is intended for the couple's use together.
Marcia panics and blushes, vowing to herself that the room will remain untouched and gather dust.
Marcia quickly dismisses the idea of moving any of her belongings into the shared space, appearing very flustered.
She remains firm in her internal decision that she will not be utilizing the grand bedroom. Marcia nervously suggests that any necessary items for the Duke should simply be kept there for his own use.
Marcia hastily changes the subject, announcing her intention to head out for a walk in the garden.
Marcia and Larissa walk together down the grand staircase of the mansion.
The two of them continue through the hall, their backs to the viewer as they admire the interior. Sophia, a brown-haired maid, carries a woven basket with a pleasant expression. Larissa looks up with a soft smile, appearing at ease in her new environment.
Marcia hums happily, wondering if the massive estate is more of a palace than a mansion.
Marcia's expression freezes in horror as a cold, familiar voice calls her an ungrateful girl. She turns her head frantically, terrified that the person from her past has found her.
Marcia clutches Larissa's hand as the voice threatens that she cannot hide from him forever. Marcia panics, realizing news of their location reached the Blix territory far faster than expected.
Marcia urgently tells Larissa to return to her room immediately, desperate to hide her.
A man's voice bellows for both Larissa and Marcia as Marcia vows to keep the child safe.
A sudden, heavy boom sounding accompanies the man's grand and menacing entrance.
The man gleefully refers to the two women as his precious pashers. The scene shifts as a dark backdrop displays various symbols and credits text.
Igor stands flanked by guards, exclaiming that his treasure has finally been located.
Marcia gasps in fear as Igor celebrates finding what he believes belongs to him.
Marcia reflects on Larissa being a living human being and not a mere object to be owned.
Larissa hides behind Marcia, trembling as the blonde woman asserts the child is not Igor's possession.
Marcia realizes that if Igor files a lawsuit, Fabian could lose custody of the underage girl.
Marcia steps forward defiantly, demanding that the intruder stop his aggressive behavior.
Marcia instructs Sophia to take the child away while Igor expresses his outrage at being ordered around.
Igor yells out in a fury, demanding to know where they are taking the girl. He reaches out toward them, desperately calling out Larissa's name.
Marcia tries to stop him by calling him father, but he violently brushes her off.
A sudden, vibrant flash sounding highlights the high tension of the moment.
Marcia is shoved aside by the man's forceful rejection of her request to talk.
Marcia falls to the floor as Sophia cries out in concern, while Marcia fears the maid's title for her will reveal too much.
A sudden, heavy stomp sounding follows Igor as he stomps toward the fleeing child.
Larissa cowers in Sophia's arms, terrified of being hit and remembering past pain. Marcia looks up with burning resolve, deciding that her own safety doesn't matter compared to Larissa's.
She stands up and prepares to fight back, determined to escape with the child at any cost.
Marcia confronts Igor, asking if he truly thought she would let him take the girl back to that place. Marcia grabs the man's arm and firmly repeats her demand to speak with him.
Larissa watches in awe, amazed at the strength and change in the woman she once knew.
A sudden light chuckle sounding breaks the heavy silence in the hall. A young boy looks down from the upper floor, laughing at the chaotic scene below. Richard mockingly asks how such a man could claim to be the Grand Duchess's father.
Igor stops and looks up in confusion, wondering who is interrupting him.
Richard leans casually against the railing, staring down at the intruder.
Richard insults Igor's lack of a title and education, assuming he is Larissa's father.
Marcia looks up at the boy as he continues to belittle the man's upbringing. Richard notes that he has never seen someone scream so loudly in front of servants.
Igor tries to reclaim his dignity by shouting that he is still a noble despite his rank.
Richard gazes with cold blue eyes, calling the man an unwanted visitor.
A sudden, firm grip sounding catches Igor as a guard seizes his arm.
Guards restrain Igor as Marcia thinks about the difficulty he will face trying to leave the estate. Marcia looks up at the boy, wondering if Igor is only just realizing the situation.
A sudden, quick footstep sounding precedes a new arrival, calling for everyone to wait.
A man in a vest approaches and asks Igor to identify himself. The man announces that the Grand Duke has summoned both Igor and Marcia to his office.
Marcia and her father stand together in a tense, silent room.
A servant's voice requests patience, stating the Grand Duke will arrive shortly.
Her nerves are frayed as a sudden quick clink sounding follows her setting down the teacup.
Igor lounges on the sofa, casually scanning the room while Marcia watches him warily.
Marcia takes a steadying sip of tea as her father offers a backhanded forgiveness for her past actions. Igor crudely admits he would have sold her regardless of her age, though he commends her for seducing the Duke.
A sudden, light thud sounding punctuates Igor's firm declaration that he will never forgive her for taking Larissa.
Marcia maintains a cold composure, assuring her father that the child is being well cared for. Igor's face contorts with rage as Marcia defiantly asserts that Larissa is not his possession.
Igor slams his hands onto the table, looming over Marcia in an attempt to intimidate her.
Igor lets out a mocking, derisive laugh at her attempts to stand up to him. A bitter memory flashes of the child being neglected while others looked on with apathy.
Igor cruelly reminds her of the basement room where the girl was kept in isolation.
Marcia looks away, her heart aching as she recalls the child's immense suffering. A sudden, loud bang sounding follows Igor's hand striking the table as he calls her shameless. He remains obstinate, swearing that he will reclaim the child regardless of Marcia's words.
The atmosphere shifts as Fabian enters the room, his presence cold and imposing.
Fabian stands in silence, his sharp red eyes fixed on the intruder.
Marcia realizes her greeting lacks any warmth, sounding more like a formal address than one to a husband.
A sudden soft rustle sounding follows as Marcia performs a stiff, respectful curtsy for the Duke.
Marcia and Igor are momentarily silenced as they wait for the Duke to speak.
A sudden, firm step sounding underscores Fabian's stern warning for the man to watch his behavior.
Marcia is visibly confused by the Duke's unusually quiet and intense demeanor. She wonders if she has inadvertently offended him as he continues to stare.
Fabian looms behind Marcia, offering a silent but powerful sense of protection.
Igor quickly changes his tone, acting like a worried father searching for his lost children.
He paints a false picture of the youngest girl, claiming she is too shy to ever leave home.
Igor mentions a mysterious informant, causing Marcia to freeze in shock as he credits that person for his news. He dramatically exclaims that he was terrified of losing his family forever.
Marcia is filled with dread, wondering who could have betrayed her location to her father.
Marcia demands to know the identity of the person who provided the information.
Igor smugly keeps his secret, privately deciding that Marcia will eventually be forced back to his side. A name burns in Marcia's mind as she realizes the truth about Eloise Conrad.
Eloise Conrad, the Duke's cousin, stands in a regal purple dress with a cold, calculating gaze.
Marcia suspects that Eloise deliberately orchestrated this confrontation to cause chaos. Igor begins to shout again, his facade of a grieving father quickly slipping. Igor yells for his daughters to return, though Marcia knows he only views them as assets to be traded.
Marcia stands firm, stating clearly that neither she nor Larissa will ever return to him.
A sudden, low chuckle sounding comes from Igor as he begins to formulate a new, sinister deal.
He mockingly offers to let the Duke keep Marcia as long as the younger girl is returned.
Igor points aggressively toward the door, demanding the child be handed over immediately. Marcia is disgusted by his transparency, realizing Larissa was his only objective from the start.
A sudden, tight grip sounding follows as Marcia clutches her dress, listening to her father lie about the child's needs.
A sudden, quick turn sounding accompanies Marcia's desperate glance toward the silent Fabian.
Marcia panics internally, worried that the Duke has forgotten their secret pact to protect the child.
She screams in her mind, pleading for Fabian to remember his oath and intervene.
Fabian's presence becomes overwhelmingly heavy as he stares down at a sweating Igor.
Igor attempts to laugh off the tension, claiming his outburst was simply born of fatherly love. The Grand Duke's red eyes glow with a terrifying intensity that leaves the room chilled.
Igor trembles under the Duke's silent, predatory gaze, asking if he has said something wrong.
Igor extends his hand, claiming his right as a father to take Larissa back with him.
A sudden, light chuckle sounding comes from Fabian as he mockingly asks how Igor intends to stop him.
Fabian gazes coldly with his red eyes, calmly acknowledging the man's words.
Marcia watches warily as Igor's expression shifts into one of deep realization.
Igor stares in shock, feeling as though he has encountered those piercing eyes once before. Igor recalls a past encounter and yells that Fabian lied about not seeing his daughters, accusing the Duke of kidnapping.
Marcia questions her father's treatment of his daughters, wondering why they were forced to flee in the first place.
Igor loses his temper and prepares to strike Marcia while shouting a crude insult.
A sudden, firm snap sounding accompanies Fabian catching the man's arm before he can land a blow.
Fabian admits his past behavior at the restaurant was discourteous, but maintains that everything he said was the truth. Fabian stands protectively over Marcia, his imposing presence silencing the intruder.
A sudden, quick flinch sounding follows as Igor pulls back, visibly shaken by the Duke's intervention.
Fabian maintains a calm, almost predatory smile while looking down at the blonde man. Fabian casually suggests they all sit down to have a proper conversation. Fabian explains that he fell in love with Marcia at first sight, claiming a man in love can act quite foolishly.
He confesses that he didn't even realize he had proposed to her until he finally came back to his senses.
An artistic silhouette depicts the moment of the Duke's sudden and passionate proposal to the blonde woman.
Fabian acknowledges his rambling, but insists on sharing his inner thoughts with his supposed father-in-law.
He describes his desperate need to capture Marcia in his arms and make her his goddess.
Fabian notes that Marcia didn't initially agree, as she desired her father's approval before marrying.
Fabian looks at Marcia with a deceptive warmth, playing the role of a doting husband perfectly. Marcia offers a tight, nervous smile while trying to play along with the Duke's elaborate lies.
Igor listens impatiently as Fabian explains that he lost contact due to the sudden passing of the previous Grand Duke. Fabian claims he was buried in paperwork following the funeral, leaving no time to reach out to Igor.
A sudden, quick clink sounding follows Fabian setting down his tea as he identifies these documents as matters of high national importance.
Fabian explains that his duties are so critical that the king would have to handle them personally if he didn't intervene.
A sudden, light shudder sounding escapes Igor as he feels overwhelmed by the Duke's authoritative explanation.
Marcia is stunned by Fabian's skill at lying, feeling her heart race at how terrifying he can truly be.
A sudden, light clink sounding accompanies Fabian's further apology for failing to consider the time needed for his work.
Igor rubs his head in frustration, begrudgingly approving the marriage and telling Marcia she may do as he pleases.
Igor offers to leave in peace as long as he is allowed to take Larissa back with him. Fabian expresses his relief at the approval but shifts the focus to how Igor intends to travel home.
Igor requests a carriage for comfort, to which Fabian agrees before offering a significant caveat.
Fabian asserts that Larissa is far too weak to survive a long journey and must stay at the estate.
Fabian points out that Larissa's terrified reaction in the lobby was not typical of a child who loves her father.
A memory of the trembling, white-haired girl surfaces as Fabian mentions her inability to even move properly.
Fabian asks a cutting question about whether the child has ever truly loved her father. Fabian's smile remains fixed as he repeats his doubt about Larissa's affection for the man.
Igor is left speechless and outraged by the Duke's blunt and insulting observation.
Fabian concludes that Larissa will remain at the mansion as it is now her sister's home.
Marcia agrees firmly, telling her father that the child cannot possibly travel such a great distance in her state.
Igor clenches his fist in rage, realizing Marcia must have told the Duke the truth about their past.
Igor fumes internally about Marcia trying to monopolize the girl while Marcia offers the services of a skilled doctor. Igor feigns confusion, asking what the blonde woman means by her suggestions.
Marcia looks at him coldly, asking if he was even paying attention to her serious words.
Igor shouts that they are trying to monopolize Larissa while Marcia reflects on his lack of true love.
Igor grits his teeth, his face contorted with suppressed anger and frustration.
Fabian acknowledges the man's disappointment and announces he has prepared a small present to ease the transition. A sudden, light slide sounding accompanies Fabian presenting a small black box to the intruder.
A sudden quick click sounding follows as the man reaches out to open the mysterious chest.
Fabian presents the title deed to a massive gold mine in Kepir, leaving Marcia shocked by the immense value of his so-called small present.
Igor greedily asks if the Grand Duke is truly granting him the property rights to such a valuable mine. Fabian smiles while hoping the gift consoles Igor's lonely soul while Larissa stays at the mansion to recuperate.
Igor weighs his options, realizing that while he wants the girl, gold is an asset he can handle immediately compared to the long process of diamonds.
Igor is visibly outraged, shouting about the sudden mention of a 3-year period as the blonde woman in the red dress watches him.
Marcia confronts her father, questioning if the gold mine he already accepted from the Grand Duke is still not enough for him.
Igor yells that it is certainly not enough, but Fabian cuts him off by addressing him as his father-in-law and stating they will finish their talk later.
Fabian stands tall and imposing, coldly noting that he saw Igor attempt to strike Marcia earlier in their conversation.
A sudden, loud slam sounding follows Igor's hand hitting a surface as he argues that he has every right to discipline his own daughter.
Fabian maintains a sharp, unwavering gaze as he declares that while Marcia was once a daughter, she is now his wife. Fabian clenches his fist, suggesting that the man was intentionally acting dense until the situation was made perfectly clear.
Fabian looms with a terrifying aura, stating he only tolerated the man's presence for Marcia's sake and orders him to take the offer and leave immediately.
Fabian calls for Portis as the brown-haired man with glasses bows respectfully in the background.
Fabian orders Portis to escort their guest to the gate in the most polite way possible while Igor shouts in protest.
Igor is physically hauled away by 2 guards in red uniforms, shouting and demanding to know what right they have to take his daughter.
Fabian watches them depart, reiterating that Larissa will only be sent away after her full recovery and warning against any further commotions.
The scene shifts to the exterior of the sprawling white stone estate standing under a clear blue sky.
Marcia looks up in surprise as the Duke mentions his intention to call for a doctor. A sudden, soft brush sounding follows as Fabian reaches out a hand toward Marcia's face. Fabian gently cradles Marcia's face in his hand, observing that her cheek is starting to swell from the earlier confrontation. Fabian darkly suggests that sending an assassin would be best, though Marcia frantically waves her hands and insists she is fine.
Marcia smiles warmly up at the tall man, thanking him for keeping the promise he made to her.
Fabian blushes and looks away, claiming there is no need for thanks since he was simply following the agreement they signed. A close-up reveals Fabian's intense red eye as he remains lost in a moment of deep, private reflection.
Fabian suddenly offers a sincere apology, leaving the blonde woman in the red dress looking bewildered.
Fabian vows that he will certainly protect her as long as she remains in his mansion, regretting his failure to intervene sooner.
Marcia performs a graceful curtsy and offers a kind smile as Fabian begins to walk away from her.
Marcia reflects on the gold mine transfer, realizing it has secured her sister's presence by her side for at least 3 more years.
Fabian touches his chin thoughtfully, wondering if the abuse in the family was truly limited only to Larissa. Fabian suspects that Igor would have abused both sisters even if Marcia didn't realize it herself, while Marcia beams with joy.
Fabian looks determined, stating he will inform everyone to prevent such an incident from recurring and vows to never forgive anyone who messes with his woman.
Marcia stares in stunned silence, her face flushing a deep pink at the Duke's bold and protective declaration.
A sudden, quick step sounding follows as Fabian walks across the ornate blue carpet while looking back over his shoulder.
Marcia remains rooted to the spot, looking confused and surprised by the Duke's sudden departure.
Fabian offers a soft, rare smile and tells her to stop calling him Lord, requesting that she use the name Fabian when they are alone.
Marcia is left alone with her thoughts, wondering if the protection and care she is receiving is something she has always wanted.
A sudden sharp creak sounding accompanies the opening of a pair of large decorated double doors.
A red-haired man holding a wine glass greets the newcomer with a cheerful, slightly mischievous smile.
Fabian enters the room with a cold and stern expression, while Portis follows behind him looking somewhat nervous. Fabian scolds his staff for serving the Marquis liquor against his orders, though Portis admits he couldn't refuse the man's request. A sudden light clink sounding follows the red-haired man swirling his wine as he dismissively calls Fabian a punk who used to be a timid child. Fabian notes that the man's arrogant behavior makes it seem like he is 7 decades older than him rather than just 7 years. Fabian sits on the sofa across from the red-haired man, explaining that he gave Igor money to finally get rid of him. A sudden quick tug sounding accompanies Fabian loosening his tie while remarking on how strange Marcia's family is. The red-haired man closes his eyes, noting the oddity of a father claiming love while his daughters reject such an affection.
Fabian looks down thoughtfully, wondering why Marcia and her father both seem to care so intensely about the younger sister.
Igor's past outrage is recalled as Fabian realizes the man's behavior toward his daughters was never love, but a twisted obsession. Igor is depicted clutching his chest and yelling about Larissa while Fabian questions why he is so obsessed specifically with the younger girl.
The Marquis questions if Marcia's intense care for her sister is born of the same reason as a beast, while Marcia is shown in the foreground.
A sudden heavy sigh sounding escapes Fabian as he remains deep in thought, his face partially obscured by shadows.
Fabian thoughtfully considers the deep affection Marcia holds for her younger sister.
The red-haired Marquis suddenly spits out his wine in total shock.
The Marquis remains stunned, his mind reeling as he processes the mention of a duchess.
Fabian looks on with distaste, bluntly ordering the man to clean himself up. A look of quiet confusion crosses Fabian's face as he observes his guest's reaction. The Marquis mocks the couple's public claim of love at first sight, labeling their marriage a total lie. The Marquis reflects on Fabian's nature, noting that he is not a man who falls for others easily.
The Marquis recalls that the former Grand Duke required Fabian to marry before inheriting the title.
Memories of the blonde woman saving Fabian's life suggest their bond may be more than just a contract.
The Marquis observes that despite the lie, the couple seems to care for one another deeply.
The Marquis continues to snicker to himself, much to the annoyance of the Duke in the background.
Fabian demands to know what the red-haired man finds so amusing about the situation.
A sudden light thud sounding follows Fabian placing a hand to his neck in frustration. The Marquis leans in close with a playful smirk, leaving Fabian looking completely flustered.
The red-haired man insists he is being entirely serious despite his mischievous demeanor.
The Marquis warns that the staff is constantly watching and urges Fabian to perform the role of a loving husband perfectly.
Fabian remains silent and troubled, wondering if his lack of affection was truly that obvious to others.
Fabian realizes they must maintain the appearance of a real couple to protect the stability of his title. Fabian reflects on his total lack of romantic experience, admitting that no woman has ever shown him affection.
Fabian rubs his forehead as he contemplates the difficulty of acting like a romantic partner.
An idealized vision of Fabian presenting flowers to a seated Marcia appears, highlighting his inner conflict. A sudden light clink sounding accompanies Portus noticing the Duke's exhausted state as he serves tea. Fabian thanks his aide but remains quiet, prompting Portus to ask if something is bothering him. Fabian shifts the topic, asking for the results of the secret investigation he ordered. Portus presents a report on Bill Blick, describing him as a man even more vicious than his father.
A sudden light shudder sounding escapes the Duke as he listens to the disturbing details about Marcia's brother.
Portus reveals that Belaine has vanished without a trace following the youngest sister's escape. The scene shifts toward a large, ornate chest as Portus continues his report. The chest is revealed to be empty, signifying the disastrous state of the Blick family's finances. Portus explains that the family status collapsed after Igor's failed investments and Marcia's jewelry began appearing on the black market. It is revealed that the brother sold his sister's belongings to fund his gambling addiction.
A sudden loud slam sounding follows Fabian clenching his fist in a fit of silent rage.
Fabian's expression turns murderous as he realizes the true extent of the abuse Marcia endured. Fabian concludes that the sisters were treated more like prey than family members by the men in their lives.
A sudden, loud bang sounding follows a maid bursting into the room in a state of panic.
The maid frantically reports that Lady Larissa is having a seizure, leaving Fabian horrified.
A sudden sharp tap sounding accompanies the Duke's hurried footsteps as he rushes to investigate.
Narrative panels explain that Marcia stayed by her sister's side all night until they both collapsed from exhaustion.
A sudden quick thud sounding follows Fabian arriving at the hallway outside the girls' room.
Fabian approaches the door with a grim expression as a maid notices his arrival.
A sudden soft rustle sounding follows the group of maids bowing deeply as the Duke passes.
A gray-haired maid tearfully apologizes, blaming herself for the child's sudden decline in health.
A sudden quick step sounding follows Fabian walking past the servants toward the bedroom.
Fabian pauses at the entrance, hesitating to enter and disturb the sisters' private moment.
Fabian reflects on the strict terms of their marriage agreement and Marcia's desire for privacy. Fabian watches through the doorway as Marcia comforts the trembling girl, his heart aching at the sight. Fabian concludes that it is his duty as a husband to provide comfort to his wife in her time of need. Fabian looks determined to strengthen their bond, seeing it as a necessity for their shared future.
A sudden light click sounding follows Fabian finally reaching out to turn the door handle.
A sudden sharp creak sounding accompanies the heavy door swinging open to reveal the room inside.
A sudden quick thud sounding follows the Duke's heavy boots stepping onto the ornate carpet.
Fabian's eyes widen in silent shock as he catches sight of the scene unfolding before him. Fabian looks on in quiet wonder at the scattered toys and blue roses, softly noting their presence. Fabian pauses as he hears Marcia's voice gently reassuring her younger sister. Marcia's soothing words echo through the quiet room as she promises Larissa that she is safe now. A sudden soft rustle sounding follows Marcia stroking the girl's hair, explaining that Fabian has already handled their tormentor. Marcia leans in close, encouraging her sister to meet her gaze and find comfort in her eyes. Marcia looks down with a loving expression, repeating her promise to be there for the girl. Marcia continues to comfort the trembling girl, offering her hand to help steady her nerves. Marcia warns Larissa not to bite her tongue as Fabian watches the intimate moment with a pained expression.
A sudden pained n sounding escapes someone as Marcia remains focused on her sister's recovery.
Marcia holds the girl close, guiding her to breathe slowly and find her calm once more.
Marcia offers a warm, tearful smile as she vows to never leave her sister's side.
Fabian realizes that the deep bond between the sisters is a private sanctuary he cannot intrude upon.
Fabian looks on with a heavy heart, wondering about the depth of the suffering they have endured.
Fabian decides he must stop observing their private moment and give them the space they need. Fabian stands alone in the room, his expression a mix of concern and deep contemplation. A sudden light scuff sounding follows Fabian deciding to exit and announce his presence properly by knocking.
A sudden light thud sounding catches Fabian's attention as he wonders if he has stepped on something.
Fabian looks down to discover a broken gingerbread man cookie lying on the floor.
Fabian stares at the shattered cookie, questioning its presence in the hallway. A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows Fabian picking up the head of the broken gingerbread man. Fabian notes that the cookie appeared to be broken long before he stepped on it, leaving him puzzled. Fabian remains lost in thought, the small token in his hand weighing on his mind. A sudden, quick step sounding follows Fabian walking away from the room while Marcia remains by the bedside. A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows Fabian carefully wrapping the broken cookie in a piece of cloth. The heavy double doors stand closed as the scene shifts toward the main hallway.
Dr. Bellman offers an apology to the Grand Duke, who thanks the man for his hard work.
Fabian acknowledges the long night the doctor and maid spent caring for Larissa, but the doctor admits she had a seizure while he napped. Fabian suggests the man check on his own condition given the stressful circumstances. The maid explains that Larissa becomes anxious when anyone but Marcia approaches her, making it difficult for others to help. The narrative mentions that even the staff avoids the room after hearing the warnings about the girl's fragile state.
Larissa is seen huddled under her blankets, appearing deeply shaken by the recent events.
Fabian demands to know why the situation wasn't reported immediately, but the maid explains that Marcia didn't want to disturb him. Fabian remains silent, his eyes reflecting a deep sense of guilt and frustration. A sudden, quick turn sounding follows Fabian ordering his staff to inform him of any future incidents regardless of the time. Fabian insists he will not be the last to know about events in his own home as the doctor and maid bow respectfully. A brown-haired man greets Fabian by name as he walks down the corridor. The young man hesitates for a moment, looking uncertain as he faces the Duke. The man asks about the well-being of the Duchess and Larissa, having heard of the younger sister's seizure. Fabian looks skeptical, questioning why the man is showing such a sudden interest in their affairs.
The man protests his lack of information as a family member, while Fabian dismisses him before the man mentions his return to the academy.
A sudden, sharp shout sounding follows the man accusing the doctor of letting their grandfather die, leaving Fabian stunned. Fabian defends Dr. Bellman's actions, suggesting the only way a patient could die under his care is through assassination.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows the young man reeling at the mention of a potential assassination.
A sudden, light scuff sounding follows the man stepping back in fear, wondering if a murder truly occurred. A sudden, quick turn sounding follows Fabian ordering the man back to his room while promising updates on Larissa's health. The scene shifts to the stables, where a man in a straw hat is busy tending to the stalls. An unseen speaker orders a horse to be prepared for a ride. The stable hand with light brown hair offers a polite smile and agrees to the request. Fabian's intense gaze reflects a moment of deep silence as a thought bubble asks why he has chosen such a plain outfit. A sudden rhythmic clop sounding accompanies the Duke riding his horse toward the stables as the light brown-haired stable hand asks if anything is wrong. A sudden quick thud sounding follows the Duke galloping away across the grassy hills as he leaves the stables behind.
The stable hand watches in confusion, noting that he has never seen the Duke ride in such common attire and wondering about his well-being.
A sudden heavy gallop sounding echoes as the horse's hooves kick up blades of grass during the Duke's rapid journey. A memory surfaces of Marcia cradling her sister, her gentle words of reassurance providing comfort to the trembling girl. Fabian reflects on the impossibility of explaining Marcia's self-sacrificing nature to others while he continues his ride through the bright forest. The narrative explains that Marcia allowed Larissa to bite her hands to prevent the girl from injuring herself during a seizure, resulting in visible wounds. Despite the pain, Marcia remains silent and focused entirely on comforting her younger sister throughout the ordeal. Fabian recalls a past filled with figures like Frederick, Dominic, Valerie, and Eloise, realizing that his life was once defined only by hatred and coldness. Fabian contrasts his past with Marcia's devotion, noting that her only true concern in life is the safety and future of her sister. A vision of Marcia's joyful interactions with Larissa appears as Fabian considers her desperate hope for a good doctor and a better life for the girl. Fabian recognizes that Marcia viewed their entire marriage agreement as nothing more than bait to ensure her sister's protection. Fabian worries that Marcia's extreme selflessness might eventually cause her to lose everything, including her own sense of self. Fabian wonders what makes one person such a special and vital existence to another as he envisions the sisters in a field of white flowers. A peaceful sky filled with floating feathers underscores the Duke's internal question regarding how one can love so completely.
Fabian remains lost in his thoughts, his expression softening as he contemplates the nature of his wife's heart.
A sudden quick thud sounding follows the horse's hooves continuing their steady pace through the vibrant green meadow.
Fabian stops by his horse, a sudden realization dawning on him as he looks toward the sunlit horizon.
Fabian concludes that Marcia's willingness to do anything for her sister is the ultimate definition of true love. Fabian wonders if this deep love will eventually hold Marcia back or if she is destined to continue sacrificing her own happiness.
Fabian questions whether Marcia would choose to sacrifice herself even if it meant doing so with a smile on her face.
Fabian leads his horse through the shadows of the forest, fearing that Marcia's selfless love will only lead to further suffering. Fabian looks determined as he wonders if he has the strength to protect Marcia from the hardships her devotion might bring. An idealized image of Marcia laughing in a beautiful gown appears, representing the happiness Fabian hopes to provide her. Fabian's eyes narrow with resolve as he thinks that Marcia will not be able to run away from him regardless of their arrangement. Fabian smiles slightly, deciding that his commitment to her exists independently of their marriage contract. The scene shifts to the manor, where Fabian, Marcia, and Larissa share a quiet and seemingly peaceful tea time together. A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows a hand flipping through a newspaper report announcing Fabian as the new Grand Duke. A hand trembles with rage over a portrait of Marcia, while the text mentions the public's curiosity regarding the woman the Duke chose as his wife. A sudden, loud slam sounding follows a fist hitting a desk in fury, spilling a glass of liquor across the wooden surface. Belaine Blick, the blonde-haired man, breathes heavily as he stares at the report with a look of pure, murderous frustration. Belaine reflects on the day Marcia ran away from their home, the memories still fresh and irritating to him. A sudden, quick step sounding follows a servant frantically informing Belaine and Igor that Larissa has gone missing from her cell. Belaine recalls their failed search for the sisters, noting that they disappeared without a trace despite the strict security of the Blick estate. Belaine puzzles over how the sisters escaped unnoticed, as he believed they had handled everything with the utmost caution.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding follows Belaine wondering how Marcia could have possibly met and married the Grand Duke under such circumstances.
Belaine assumes the Duke intends to exploit Larissa, imagining a basement even more secure and cruel than the one in the Blick mansion. Belaine decides that he must investigate the situation at the Duke's manor personally. A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows Belaine gripping the paperwork, realizing he would never be granted entry to the Duke's home through normal means. Belaine turns his attention to a document detailing the genealogy of the Laurent family.
Belaine resolves to seek out Dominic Laurent, the man who was passed over for the title of Grand Duke, to find a way into Fabian's life.
A sudden, soft sigh sounding follows Larissa finally falling into a deep, peaceful sleep in her bedroom. Marcia watches her sister with a tired but relieved expression, glad that the terrifying episode has finally passed.
A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows Marcia deciding to tidy the room while her sister is safely asleep.
Marcia pauses as something on the floor catches her eye, her expression shifting to one of surprise.
Marcia discovers a broken gingerbread man cookie on a cloth, realizing it must have fallen during the chaos of Larissa's seizure.
A flashback shows a maid being ordered to clear the room and replace a chair after the incident earlier that night. In the memory, a maid cries out in surprise as she notices the small gingerbread man cookie tumbling to the ground. A sudden, light thud sounding follows the cookie hitting the carpet while Larissa remains huddled and shaking in her bed. A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows Larissa looking up in alarm.
Marcia reflects that Larissa's seizures worsened after the gingerbread cookie was crushed, noting the girl's habit of keeping it close even in sleep.
Marcia realizes that Larissa panicked because of Igor's appearance and that the shock was far too much for her fragile state.
Marcia recalls that Larissa made the gingerbread man herself as a sign of her recent improvement. Marcia remembers their promise to escape the dark basement and finally enjoy a life of good food and fun. Marcia remains determined to find a way for them to live in a safe and peaceful world.
Marcia is relieved that Larissa only had a few seizures and observes that the girl no longer trembles when the maid, Sophia, enters.
Marcia reflects on the news from Sophia that Richard has already left the mansion. In a memory, the dark-haired Richard explains he must return to the academy but asks that Lady Blick be told to take care of herself. Marcia decides that there is no need to tell Larissa about Richard's departure until the girl has fully recovered. Marcia looks at her bandaged hand and resolves to focus on her work despite the lingering pain. The grand chandelier illuminates the opulent room.
Larissa's green eyes slowly flutter open.
A sudden soft rustle sounding follows Marcia noticing Larissa is awake and greeting her gently.
Marcia asks Larissa how she feels and if she is experiencing any pain.
A sudden sharp gasp sounding follows Larissa staring intently at the object in Marcia's hands. Marcia explains she wanted to make a beautiful gingerbread man for her sister and admits she can't hide it now that it's been seen.
Marcia presents a handmade stuffed gingerbread man to Larissa with a bright smile.
Marcia admits she isn't very good at crafting and that the new doll doesn't look exactly like the original cookie. Marcia offers the soft toy to her younger sister. Marcia promises Larissa that this version of the gingerbread won't break like the cookie did. A sudden, light top sounding follows Marcia stroking Larissa's hair and promising they can bake real cookies together soon. Marcia encourages Larissa, believing she will do even better at baking the next time they try.
The two sisters share a tender and quiet moment of comfort.
Marcia smiles warmly, her eyes full of love for her sister.
Larissa holds the new doll close, her expression unreadable.
A sudden, light chuckle sounding follows Marcia laughing and admitting she should have asked a maid to help her.
Marcia is stunned to see tears welling up in Larissa's eyes.
A sudden, sharp shout sounding follows Marcia frantically asking Larissa why she is crying and if she is hurting.
Marcia reaches out in a panic, desperate to soothe her sister's distress.
Marcia's eyes reflect her deep worry and confusion.
Larissa cries silently into her new doll as a heavy silence fills the row.
Marcia pulls Larissa into a tight hug, telling her it's okay to cry and promising to let no one else inside.
A sudden, soft sigh sounding follows Larissa, eventually falling into a deep, peaceful sleep while holding the doll.
Marcia watches over her sleeping sister, deciding to feed her once she eventually wakes up. A sudden, light clatter sounding follows Marcia's surprise as small diamonds begin to fall from the folds of her dress.
Sparkling jewels scatter across the floor in a shimmering display.
A sudden, sharp swallow sounding follows Marcia as she stares at the unexpected treasure.
Marcia realizes that with such a large amount of diamonds, she could live the rest of her life without any worries.
Marcia decides to keep the diamonds a secret for now and begins to gather them into a small bag.
A sudden, soft rattle sounding follows Marcia, carefully dropping the jewels into her pouch.
The title card signals a transition in the sisters' story.
Dominic Laurent sits across from Belaine Blick, asking if he is indeed the oldest son of House Blick.
Dominic asks Belaine why he requested such a sudden eating.
Belaine explains that as an older brother, he came to take his two sisters back home.
Belaine suggests that the situation is unfair, claiming that everything Dominic should have inherited is now gone because of that person. A sudden, sharp twitch sounding follows Dominic's eyes narrowing with intense fury at the suggestion.
A sudden loud shout sounding follows Dominic erupting in anger, blaming Belaine's sister for ruining everything.
Belaine looks taken aback, asking Dominic what he means by his outburst.
Dominic reveals that according to the testament, the title of Duke of Laurent would still be vacant if Belaine's sister hadn't married Fabian.
Dominic Laurent asks Belaine why he didn't oppose the marriage since it lacked the approval of Marcia's parents.
Belaine suggests an easier method would be to simply point out Marcia's flaws to invalidate the union.
A sudden, sharp swallow sounding follows Dominic asking Belaine what he wants from this arrangement.
Belaine admits that his only goal is to take Larissa back. Belaine smiles and claims that Marcia has absolutely nothing to do with him or his plans.
Belaine offers to reveal more about Marcia if he has helped in reclaiming his youngest sister.
Dominic decides he wants to think about the proposal first and promises to contact Belaine later.
A sudden quick step sounding follows Belaine leaving his address and taking his leave. A sudden light click sounding follows the door closing as Nikos enters the room to attend to Dominic.
Dominic calls out to Nikos, who promptly acknowledges his master.
A sudden light top sounding follows Dominic questioning why a struggling family wouldn't be happy to lose two daughters. A sudden light top sounding follows Dominic deciding to make Belaine wait for his answer. Dominic orders Nikos to keep a very close eye on the Blick family. Dominic looks intense and suspicious as he considers the true motives of his visitors.
A sudden light click sounding follows a pair of tweezers carefully picking up a tiny object.
A sudden soft sigh sounding follows Marcia, celebrating that she has finally collected all the diamonds.
Marcia holds a small cloth pouch, looking triumphant and excited.
Marcia decides to save the jewels to ensure she and Larissa can live comfortably on their own. A sudden light knock sounding follows Marcia, frantically deciding she must hide the treasure immediately. A sudden light click sounding follows Marcia reaching for the door handle.
A sudden soft creak sounding follows Marcia opening the door to find Fabian standing in the hallway.
Fabian stands tall with a serious expression, his black hair framing his face.
A sudden soft mumble sounding follows Marcia asking Fabian why he came personally instead of reading the report.
Fabian asks Marcia how Larissa is doing.
Marcia informs him that her sister has fallen asleep and wonders why he didn't send word instead. Marcia suggests they step outside to talk so they don't disturb the sleeping girl.
A sudden light click sounding follows Marcia closing the bedroom behind her.
Marcia notices a sweet, strong scent coming from Fabian and wonders if he is wearing cologne. Marcia reports that Larissa is much better and is no longer afraid of seeing other people.
A sudden soft mumble sounding follows Fabian stating he is glad to hear that she is improving.
A heavy, awkward silence stretches between the two of them.
A sudden soft mumble sounding follows Fabian admitting that he had another reason for his visit.
A sudden soft rustle sounding follows Fabian reaching behind his back.
Fabian reveals a large, vibrant bouquet of purple and yellow flowers.
Marcia is delighted to see the orchids and realizes they were the source of the sweet scent.
Fabian explains orchids last a long time, so they should still be blooming when Larissa fully recovers.
Marcia notices fresh scratches on Fabian's hands, realizing he must have picked the flowers himself. Marcia stares at him in silent realization, her green eyes wide with surprise.
Marcia thanks him warmly, noting the pleasant scent and how much Larissa will love the gift. Fabian asks if they share the same tastes, questioning how he could have known what her sister likes.
A sudden sharp gasp sounding follows Marcia, realizing she accidentally made a verbal slip.
Marcia laughs and asks if he knows a lot about flowers, which Fabian quickly dismisses as nothing. Fabian asks if she needs anything else, but Marcia cheerfully declines.
Marcia beams with happiness as she clutches the beautiful bouquet to her chest. Fabian turns away with a blush, muttering that the gesture was nothing much. Marcia looks confused by his sudden change in demeanor. A sudden, quick step sounding follows Fabian shouting that the gift was truly nothing much. Fabian promises to bring daffodils tomorrow, leading Marcia to wonder if he plans to visit again. Fabian looks away, his face flushed with embarrassment. Fabian secretly reflects that the flowers were actually intended for Marcia all along.
Marcia looks down at the beautiful bouquet, her expression full of quiet surprise.
A sudden light tap sounding follows Marcia's attention being drawn to the door.
Marcia asks Larissa if she can manage to eat alone for a moment while she goes to see a visitor.
A sudden soft creak sounding follows the grand bedroom doors slowly swinging open. Fabian stands in the entrance holding a second, even larger bouquet of bright yellow flowers.
Marcia looks stunned at his sudden reappearance and the gift he carries.
Marcia is amazed that he actually brought the flowers he had promised earlier.
Fabian looks slightly flustered, his gaze shifting away from Marcia's surprised face. A sudden soft rustle sounding follows a small hand reaching out to grip the fabric of Marcia's blue dress.
Marcia turns her head quickly, her eyes widening in surprise.
Marcia calls out to Larissa, who has bravely stepped out into the room on her own.
Marcia explains that Larissa came out by herself and seems to have no trouble being around others now.
Larissa looks at the flowers with a gentle and happy smile.
A sudden soft rustle sounding follows Marcia affectionately stroking Larissa's silver hair. Marcia invites Fabian to come in and sit down, offering to prepare some tea for everyone. Fabian looks at her with a soft expression and agrees to join them. A sudden quick step sounding follows Fabian following Marcia further into the room. The three of them settle around a small table for a quiet and peaceful tea time.
Marcia leans in to show the vibrant yellow daffodils to her younger sister. Larissa leans down and takes a deep breath, enjoying the sweet scent of the flowers.
Larissa sits happily with the large bouquet in her lap, looking completely at ease.
Marcia reflects that Larissa looks like a beautiful flower fairy while holding the daffodils.
Marcia imagines that Larissa would look just as lovely surrounded by a garland of roses.
A sudden, light chuckle sounding follows Marcia's private thought that Fabian has surprisingly good taste.
Marcia observes Fabian, thinking that his gentle expression makes him look even more handsome.
Fabian sits quietly, looking thoughtful and composed as he watches the two sisters.
Marcia continues to admire him, noting how much more attractive he is when he isn't being stern.
A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows Fabian quickly looking away as he notices Marcia's gaze. Fabian asks if it is true that Count Olaf has already departed. Fabian waits for an answer with a serious and steady expression on his face.
Marcia looks confused by the sudden mention of the Count's departure.
Fabian remains focused on her, his red eyes reflecting a deep intensity.
Marcia admits she couldn't see him off, but notes that he was a great help to her family.
Marcia mentions that they will likely cross paths again at future social gatherings. A sudden, light clearing of the throat sounding follows Fabian looking slightly displeased by her words.
Fabian tells Marcia to make sure he accompanies her to any future meetings with the Count.
Marcia looks at him with a puzzled expression, wondering why he is being so insistent.
Marcia asks Fabian if he actually enjoys attending banquets and parties.
Marcia admits she quite likes them and enjoys the opportunity to have fun and dance. Marcia confesses that she hasn't had much time lately and lacks a regular dance partner.
Marcia recalls a happy memory of being spun around on a dance floor.
Marcia shares that banquets are a way for her to escape from things she doesn't want to hear. A maid asks Larissa to hand over the flowers so they can be placed safely in a vase.
Larissa looks at the single yellow daffodil left in her hand, her expression turning somber.
Fabian asks Larissa if she would like to see the rest of the flowers growing in the garden. Larissa looks down at the flower and worries that all of them will eventually wither and die.
Marcia looks shocked and concerned by her sister's sudden sadness. Fabian watches Larissa closely, his gaze filled with a quiet understanding. Fabian gently tells Larissa that she doesn't have to worry about the flowers fading away.
Fabian explains that even if the blooms are cut, the roots remain alive and strong in the earth.
Fabian reassures Larissa that the flowers will eventually return once the cold winter passes. He explains that despite being cut, these flowers will always bloom again with their original beauty.
Larissa looks contemplative, her bright green eyes reflecting deep thought.
A close-up highlights the intricate lace and deep blue fabric of Marcia's elegant dress. Fabian offers a rare and gentle smile while surrounded by a backdrop of blooming purple flowers. A formal contract rests on a surface marked with a prominent red wax seal.
Marcia affectionately pats Larissa's head while promising they will enjoy the next bloom together once she recovers.
The conversation shifts as someone mentions that the magnolia petals will soon be ready for brewing tea.
Fabian notes that it would be a shame not to use the fragrant petals for their tea time. Marcia encourages her sister to think about going outside to enjoy the garden and the petal tea.
Fabian explains that the petals add a unique scent of ginger and cinnamon to the drink.
Marcia observes that he seems to have an extensive knowledge of different types of flowers.
Fabian reveals that he lived in a forest during his youth, much to Marcia's surprise.
He keeps his response brief, simply stating that it was a very long time ago while he drinks.
Marcia reflects on his claim that he asked for nothing in return for his help. Marcia laughs and compliments the magnificent forest she saw at the Grand Duke's manor.
Fabian asks if she would like to go hunting there, leaving Marcia visibly stunned. He explains the tradition of using trained animals for hunting, and Marcia finds the concept exciting. Marcia admits she has no skills in archery or riding, but laughs at the idea of learning.
Fabian reassures her that noble ladies often prefer hosting tea parties in the forest instead of hunting. Marcia expresses a preference for hunting over tea parties, leading Fabian to offer her personal lessons. Marcia promises to consider his offer while they continue their afternoon together. Fabian looks pleased and composed as he watches her. Marcia continues to study him, appreciating the peaceful and handsome expression he now wears. She reflects on how she has spent the last 4 days secluded in the room to care for Larissa. Marcia recalls the exhausting days they spent running from their father without any chance to rest. Marcia wonders about the truth behind Eloise and the importance of keeping their history a secret. She thinks of the man with the light hair and blue eyes, his expression appearing troubled. Marcia tries to understand what could possibly happen between the two individuals.
A sudden, sharp gar sounding follows Eloise throwing a pillow in a fit of absolute rage.
A sudden rhythmic puck-puck sounding follows Eloise pounding her fists against her bed in frustration.
Eloise fumes over her failed plan, angry that Fabian took Marcia's offer instead of rejecting her.
She finds it unacceptable that Fabian claimed to fall in love with Marcia at first sight.
Eloise clenches her bedsheets in jealousy, questioning why he didn't choose her instead.
The night sky is filled with a sudden, soft murmuring sounding from the distance.
A sudden, light tap sounding follows soldiers rushing to bring a young boy into the manor. A sudden, heavy thud sounding follows the messy-haired boy being shoved onto the ground as a young Eloise watches.
Young Eloise looks on with wide, fearful eyes while hiding behind her nanny.
A sudden, soft rustle sounding follows the young boy silently walking away from the group.
Eloise continues to watch him, her curiosity piqued by the silent and disheveled boy. The young boy's face is smudged with dirt, but his red eyes remain sharp and intense. The nanny explains that the boy is the Grand Duke's grandson and Eloise's future cousin.
Cruel whispers label him a witch's son and the devil's disciple, calling him lower than a commoner.
A man shouts angrily at his father, questioning why the boy was ever allowed to live. He demands the boy's death, calling him a disgrace to their noble family. The boy walks past Eloise, seemingly indifferent to the insults and the child's silent observation.
Years later, she realized that tragic day was when Fabian's mother had passed away.
Fabian famously refused to attend the funeral of his own father, Count Dominic. The young boy stares ahead with a somber and hardened expression. Marcia pauses as a sudden, soft, dull cock sounding follows someone calling out to the young master.
A silver-haired maid welcomes Fabian home as he enters with his coat in hand.
Fabian looks at Marcia and asks her how she has been while she stands stunned.
Eloise reflects on her difficult journey toward having her feelings for Fabian reciprocated.
She recalls Fabian's past reputation as the disgraced son of a witch.
Eloise fumes over Marcia appearing and stealing the man she believed would inevitably be hers.
She dismisses the possibility of Fabian actually falling in love with Marcia at first sight. A sudden, sharp quack sounding follows Eloise clenching her bedsheets in stubborn denial. A sudden, low kaduk sounding follows Eloise gnashing her teeth while cursing Marcia's name.
Eloise looks over her shoulder and asks who is interacting her.
A sudden, quick bell tuck sounding follows Eloise sitting up in bed with a look of surprise. Someone off-screen orders for the visitor to be brought to the reception room.
The blonde man introduces himself as Carl Cleve and expresses his honor at meeting Lady Conrad.
Eloise finds Carl's appearance mediocre and thinks he is a perfect match for Marcia.
Eloise asks Carl if he has heard any news about Marcia, and he repeats the name.
Carl mentions that he and Marcia broke off their engagement a long time ago. Eloise smiles over her tea while asking for the reason behind the broken engagement.
Carl admits he simply didn't want to get entangled with Marcia's family.
Carl scoffs that Marcia was unfit to lead, and Eloise reflects on how despicable he is. Carl explains that he has no reason to keep informed about Marcia since their split. A sudden, soft doll cock sounding follows Eloise offering to fill him in on the recent news. Eloise sits with her hands folded, looking serious and focused. Carl looks completely shocked by the information Eloise has shared with him. Carl looks dazed as he repeats the claim that the man was his fiancé.
Eloise thinks to herself that she would have married Fabian if it weren't for Marcia. Carl asks if Marcia stole his fiancé, and Eloise confirms that she did. Carl touches his chin and remarks on how remarkable Marcia's social climbing is.
A sudden, tight quack sounding follows Eloise clenching her dress while plotting to ruin Marcia.
Eloise tells Carl she's counting on him and asks for his help with her plan. Carl looks at her with a smirk and asks why he should hope.
Carl notes he doesn't covet other men's women and doesn't need money since inheriting a title.
Eloise looks at him with suspicion and asks what he wants in return.
A sudden, dark, sick sounding follows a close-up of Carl's growing, sinister smile.
Carl shocks Eloise by stating that he wants to make her his wife.
Eloise wonders if Carl is trying to overwhelm her with his sudden proposal.
A maid tells Carl to conduct himself, and he laughs it off as a joke. Carl says he only wants introductions to aristocrats, and Eloise looks stressed by the request. Eloise agrees to the deal, but insists that her involvement in his actions remains a secret. A sudden, soft tack sounding follows Carl setting down his cup and mocking Marcia's new partner.
Eloise identifies Marcia's new partner as Grand Duke Lorette.
A sudden, sharp hurrium sounding follows Carl stammering in absolute terror at the Grand Duke's name. Carl panics about the social consequences of the plan, but Eloise reassures him that Marcia will take all the blame. Eloise claims she must protect her image while working against the people she supposedly supports.
Carl settles back and agrees that the deal sounds right to him after all.
Carl formally accepts the deal on the condition that Eloise finds him a bride.
The scene shifts back to the manor as Eloise promises to help him wholeheartedly. A blonde servant wearing glasses brings a stock of afternoon letters to Fabian.
A sudden, soft cum-cum sounding follows the servant, suggesting a change of mood for the Duke.
A sudden, quiet cum sounding follows Fabian looking up and requesting a dance teacher. Fabian recalls Marcia's earlier confession that she enjoys the fun of partying and dancing.
Fabian mentions that since he is now the Grand Duke, he can no longer avoid the social responsibilities that come with his rank. Fabian demands a male dance teacher to avoid touching women, making his servant point out that he must dance with noblewomen at the ball. The blonde servant nervously promises to find a male teacher as his master requested.
A cheerful smile crosses the servant's face as he sorts through the stock of letters.
A sudden, curious gasp follows the servant, spotting something unusual in one of the letters. The servant urges Fabian to read a specific letter immediately, prompting the Duke to ask what is so important.
Fabian's expression hardens as his servant reveals the letter is from Carl Cleve. The letter begins with a disturbing address to Marcia, calling her his beloved.
The words, "Marcia, my beloved," are written in an elegant, mocking script. The letter speaks of the pain of separation and the act of pretending to love another while waiting for a reunion. The writer reveals a plan involving an opera house balcony and a potion to be mixed into a man's food.
A visual of Marcia and Carl together accompanies the writer's wish for a day when they can be together openly.
The message concludes with an affectionate sign-off from her supposed true love. A sudden, tight quack sounding follows Fabian violently crumpling the letter in his fist.
Fabian demands to know the sender's identity, but the servant notes the name on the envelope is likely a fake.
The servant explains the letter originated from the Duke's own post office and promises an immediate investigation. A sudden, heavy quack sounding follows Fabian slamming his hand down before questioning Marcia's history.
Fabian asks if Marcia has any secret relationships, clearly bothered by the implications of the letter.
The servant admits he only knows of Marcia's devotion to Larissa, which Fabian already knows. The servant reveals a significant discovery made during his background check on Marcia. A simple statement over a bed of roses confirms that Marcia was once engaged to another man. An image of Marcia and her former fiancé holding hands at the altar appears in the Duke's mind.
Fabian's eyes narrow with jealousy as he repeats the fact that she was engaged.
The servant clarifies that the engagement was terminated long before Marcia ever met the Grand Duke.
The servant identifies the former fiancé as Carl Cleve and explains the breakup was due to the family's financial situation.
Fabian rests his chin on his hand, deeply contemplating the information. Fabian deduces the letter is a fraud designed to make him doubt Marcia, noting the sender knows nothing of their actual lives.
Marcia stands in a garden of blooming flowers, radiating joy.
A sudden, low kaduk sounding follows Fabian gnashing his teeth in confusion over his own anger.
A sudden, bright la-la sounding follows Marcia, marveling at the delicious spread of desserts.
Marcia takes a bite of food, thoroughly impressed by the Grand Duke's hospitality. Marcia encourages Larissa to eat her fill, explaining that a full stomach leads to restful sleep.
Larissa eats quietly, her eyes wide as she enjoys the treats provided.
Marcia reflects on how adorable her sister looks while eating.
A sudden, soft cook sounding follows Marcia, laughing gently as she watches Larissa.
Marcia's attention is caught by a mysterious object hidden beneath her teacup. She discovers a hidden note instructing her to come alone, leaving her baffled. Marcia tells Larissa she is going to get tissues and urges the girl to keep eating. A sudden, quick to-dock sounding follows Marcia hurrying out of the dining room. A sudden, sharp bolt-tuck sounding follows a door being thrown open. A sudden, soft talk sounding follows the door closing as Marcia enters the empty hallway.
A sudden, rapid do-gun sounding follows Marcia's heart racing as she prepares to read the message.
A sudden, light by Surak sounding follows Marcia unfolding the small piece of paper. The note summons her to the Duheb Opera House at 7 o'clock that evening. The message warns her of a blackmail threat regarding the basement's secret, signed with the letter H. Marcia is shaken, wondering how anyone could know about the basement or who H could be.
She quickly rules out her former acquaintances, knowing they have no reason to threaten her this way.
Marcia worries the threat concerns Larissa's past imprisonment or her magical diamond tears. The moon hangs over the silent manor as Marcia ponders the identity of the person named H. Recognition flashes in Marcia's eyes as she realizes there is only one person who fits the description. Marcia recognizes the woman before her as Halri, the longtime caretaker of her sister, Larissa. The blonde woman realizes that the smug man holding the wineglass is the true sender of the letter, as only he would know about her sister's secret tears.
A light, quick swish sounding as Marcia turns away, determined to leave for her meeting immediately.
A firm, quick squeeze sounding as Marcia grips her floral dress, resolving to face whatever danger lies ahead for her sister's sake. A sharp, sudden gasp sounding as Marcia is startled to find Larissa standing outside her door. The lavender-haired girl gazes up at her sister with a silent, questioning expression in her green eyes. Marcia gently explains to Larissa that she must go out to handle an important matter, and asks if the girl will be all right. A soft, gentle pat sounding as Larissa remains silent, offering only a small nod as her sister prepares to depart.
The young girl looks on with a mixture of sadness and anxiety, clearly worried about Marcia leaving the safety of the mansion.
A steady rhythmic tap sounding as Fabian walks through the grand hallway, clutching the suspicious letter in his hand.
The black-haired man considers destroying the fraudulent document, feeling that it lacks any real conviction or truth.
Fabian hesitates, remembering that Marcia specifically asked him to check the mail, making him wonder if the letter holds some hidden value to her.
A firm, quick knock sounding as Fabian arrives at Marcia's door, deciding he will apologize for reading the mail and politely explain its contents.
A sharp, sudden halt sounding as Fabian stops himself, gripped by the painful thought of what he will do if Marcia actually loves the man who sent the letter.
The Duke looks conflicted, his red eyes filled with a quiet desperation as he wonders what his next move should be.
A sharp, quick creak sounding as Fabian pushes the door open, only to be met with a surprising sight.
Fabian turns to a brunette maid and urgently asks if his wife is still inside the room.
A sharp, sudden flinch sounding as Fabian looks around frantically, his heart sinking at the thought that Marcia has already left.
The maid apologizes and informs the Duke that the lady left without saying where she was going, only asking for a carriage.
The servant adds that the blonde woman departed the mansion immediately after making her request. The maid recalls seeing Marcia through the carriage window and notes that the lady appeared to be very anxious. A firm, tight squeeze sounding, followed by a sharp, quick swish as Fabian's hand curls into a fist before he turns to follow her.
A heavy, resonant ring sounding as the bells of a grand opera house chime through the city air. A heavy, resonant ring sounding alongside the quick clip-clop of hooves as Marcia's carriage arrives at the theater.
Marcia sits tall in the carriage, reminding herself that she must protect the secret of Larissa's diamond tears at any cost. A heavy, resonant jolt sounding as the carriage hits a bump, causing Marcia to flinch in sudden fear.
The blonde woman reflects on her trauma, admitting that she is still terrified of carriages after nearly dying in an accident years ago.
A heavy, resonant jolt sounding as Marcia stares at her trembling reflection, struggling to maintain her composure. A firm, quick squeeze sounding as Marcia grips her dress, telling herself she cannot afford to be paralyzed by fear right now.
The sun sets over the grand opera house as Marcia prepares to enter the lion's den to safeguard her sister's future.
An usher leads Marcia through the ornate interior, announcing that her reserved seat is ready for her.
Marcia wonders why the nanny, who worked for the mysterious Igor and had access to the family's basement, chose such a public place to meet.
A light, quick bow sounding as a waiter greets Marcia at the door of her private box, while she suspects there is a hidden reason for this location.
A sharp, quick creak sounding as Marcia steps into the dim room and is surprised to find that her contact has not yet arrived.
Marcia looks out over the balcony, questioning if it is truly safe to meet in such a prominent and visible spot.
A soft, quick rustle sounding as Marcia checks the paper once more, worrying that she might have misinterpreted the instructions. A sharp, sudden flinch sounding as an unknown voice calls out to Marcia from the shadows of the box.
A sharp, quick creak sounding as a mysterious figure steps forward, noting that Marcia has arrived earlier than expected.
A quick clip-clop of hooves sounding as a lone rider gallops toward the theater under the darkening sky.
A quick, heavy step sounding as Fabian leaps from his horse and rushes toward the entrance of the opera house.
A theater official blocks Fabian's path, apologetically stating that the performance has already begun and he cannot enter. Ignoring the man's protest, Fabian urgently asks if he knows the location of a specific person who made a reservation. A quick, sharp tap sounding as the official realizes he is speaking to the Grand Duke and immediately offers to find the individual.
From atop his horse, Fabian describes Marcia as a beautiful lady with yellow hair and green eyes. The man's eyes widen as he confirms he saw the lady, but hesitates to continue his sentence. Fabian's red eyes narrow as the man explains that there was already someone else waiting in the reserved seat with the lady. Fabian is caught off guard by a high-pitched voice calling him brother from the side.
A young woman with brown pigtails and pink eyes smiles brightly as she approaches the Duke in a golden gown.
Fabian offers a stiff greeting, surprised to see the girl and noting that he was unaware of her interest in the opera. The brunette woman suggests they go in together, insisting that missing the opening act is of no consequence to her.
The brunette woman in the golden dress clutches a dark cloak while reflecting on a scene she has witnessed many times before.
A sharp, quick gasp sounding as the brunette woman touches the Duke's arm while he remains stoically silent.
A sharp, quick swish sounding as Fabian turns away from the brunette woman and demands to be led to Marcia's balcony.
The brunette woman watches him leave with a determined look, resolving to uncover the truth of the letter on her own.
Fabian enters the theater while the woman observes him, thinking that his presence here means her plan is partially successful.
The brunette woman watches from a distance, hoping that by performing her role well, she will earn a warmer reception from him.
Approaching the Duke again, the brunette woman invites him to her reserved balcony, claiming it offers the best view in the theater.
The scene shifts to the theater's grand interior as she suggests they might witness an interesting performance today.
A sharp, sudden flinch sounding as Marcia gazes up in shock at the man who has just entered her private box.
A heavy, resonant thump sounding as Marcia recognizes the ash-blonde man as Carl, while he notes that she still remembers his name.
Marcia ignores his pleasantries and demands to know the whereabouts of the nanny she was supposed to meet.
The ash-blonde man, Carl, casually holds a letter as Marcia realizes he may have lured her here with a false name.
A
A sharp, sudden flinch sounding as Marcia concludes that the man deliberately used the wrong name to ensure her arrival.
Marcia confronts him about whether he was the true sender of the letter, but Carl feigns ignorance at first.
A sharp, quick top sounding, followed by a sharp, quick gasp as Marcia tries to snatch the paper back from his grip.
Carl holds the document out of her reach, teasingly suggesting it is too dark for him to read the name written on it.
A sharp, quick rip sounding as Carl tears the letter in half, admitting he wrote it simply to lure her out to meet him.
The scene shifts to the opposite side of the theater where Fabian and the brunette woman stand overlooking the crowd.
A soft, quick rustle sounding as the brunette woman points toward the seats, noting that they can see everything from their vantage point.
Fabian's red eyes narrow as he scans the private boxes across the theater, his expression turning grim.
A moment of quiet tension as he spots the yellow-haired woman standing with a man on the opposite balcony.
Fabian watches the distant pair, wondering exactly who his wife is speaking to so privately.
A sharp, sudden flinch sounding as the sight of Marcia and Carl together causes the Duke's heart to race.
The brunette woman watches Fabian's reaction with a secret smile, asking him how he feels about the scene.
Fabian is visibly agitated, a cold sweat breaking out as he stares at the interaction across the theater. Carl leans intimately close to Marcia, while the Duke's internal voice questions if he has finally found her.
A sharp, quick tap sounding as Marcia strikes out in anger, demanding to know why Carl destroyed her only lead.
A soft, quick rustle sounding as pieces of the torn letter flutter to the floor, with Carl telling Marcia not to look at him with such hatred.
A sharp, sudden glare sounding as Marcia rejects Carl's suggestion that she should smile for him after so much time.
A soft, quick rustle sounding as Carl gestures toward his chest, claiming he has felt nothing but regret since their last meeting.
Carl explains that he went to her former residence out of desperation, only to discover that she had disappeared.
A soft, quick rustle sounding as Carl offers a bright smile and asks if Marcia would consider reconciling with him.
Marcia scoffs at his proposal, reminding him firmly that their engagement was canceled long ago and she has no interest in him.
Marcia looks down at the torn letter on the floor, thinking that while his words are nonsense, she cannot leave until she knows the truth.
The scene shifts back to Fabian, whose silent and intense gaze remains fixed on his wife across the theater.
Marcia realizes that Carl likely didn't write the original message himself, making her wonder who is truly pulling the strings.
The brunette woman points toward Marcia's box, mockingly questioning why the Duke's wife didn't accompany him to the opera.
A soft, quick swish sounding as the brunette woman uses her opera glasses, noting how close Marcia seems to be with the mysterious man.
A soft, quick chuckle sounding as the woman observes Fabian's growing anxiety, pleased that her provocations are working. The brunette woman notes that Fabian's silence is a clear sign of his inner agitation and jealousy.
She calls the situation an excellent opportunity, accusing Marcia of using the opera as a pretext to cheat on the Duke.
The brunette woman raises her voice, declaring that Marcia is unfit to be his wife and doesn't deserve his status.
A sharp, sudden flinch sounding as she adds that Marcia's behavior is a stain on the family name, causing Fabian to tremble. A loud, sudden laugh sounding as Fabian bursts into unexpected hysterics, leaving the brunette woman confused and startled. Marcia commands Carl to stop speaking nonsense, but he insists he is being completely honest about his feelings.
A soft, quick melody sounding as Marcia finds it ridiculous that he would make such advances to a married woman.
A brief memory surfaces of Carl acknowledging her status as the wife of a powerful duke. A sharp, quick clap sounding as Carl admits that a mere successor to a viscount is no longer a worthy match for her.
A steady, rhythmic tap sounding as Carl steps closer, claiming he doesn't expect an immediate divorce or reconciliation today.
A steady, rhythmic tap sounding as Carl corners Marcia, stating that for now he simply wanted the chance to see her again.
Marcia looks skeptical as Carl offers her his friendship.
Carl encourages Marcia to reach out if she ever needs assistance in her new home.
A sudden, soft suuk sounding follows Carl touching Marcia's face while promising to grant her every wish. A sudden, sharp suuk sounding follows Marcia looking away while plotting to find Carl's accomplice.
A sudden, quiet joyoung sounding follows Carl appearing troubled as Marcia studies him intently.
A sudden, tense kumtul sounding follows Carl asking Marcia why she remains so hesitant. Carl suggests they should meet more frequently while Marcia ponders his true intentions. A sudden, sharp chet sounding follows Marcia having a startling realization.
Carl offers a drink while Marcia envisions Eloise, the daughter of Marquis Conrad.
The blonde woman murmurs in understanding as she pieces the mystery together.
A sudden, devious sick sounding follows Marcia smiling when she understands the full scope of the plot.
A sudden, loud ha-ha sounding follows Fabian laughing mockingly over the balcony railing.
Eloise asks what is wrong as Fabian recalls the negotiations for their marriage. Fabian reflects on how he previously promised her access to unimaginable luxuries.
Fabian remembers telling her she could do whatever she wanted with his resources.
Fabian recalls agreeing to let her tarnish his family name if she wished.
Eloise points toward the lower floor and questions Marcia's worthiness for marriage.
Eloise demands to know if he is angry about the current situation.
A sudden, sharp chiak sounding follows Eloise pointing out Marcia's inadequate and flirtatious behavior.
A sudden, quick suuk sounding follows Fabian dismissively questioning why any of it matters. Fabian gazes at Marcia below and considers her to be obviously impure. A sudden, quick umjul sounding follows Eloise flinching as Fabian suddenly addresses her. A sudden cold "sa" sounding follows Fabian accusing Eloise of being the mastermind behind the scheme.
Fabian watches Marcia and concludes she isn't having an affair because of her obvious anxiety.
Fabian admits to his own irrational behavior while staring down at the image of Marcia and Carl.
The dark-haired man prides himself on always being a rational person.
Marcia stands surrounded by roses, looking completely happy and radiant.
Fabian admits that his emotions always spiral out of control whenever Marcia is involved.
A sudden, quiet cuck sounding follows Fabian, reflecting on how close he came to losing his mind.
Eloise defends herself frantically, questioning why he would suspect her involvement.
A sudden fast quick sounding follows Fabian ordering Eloise to leave once the play ends.
Eloise is left stunned as Fabian announces his immediate departure. A sharp crash sounds as Eloise's opera glasses shatter while she screams her loves.
Eloise demands to know why he continues to look down on her.
Eloise shouts that everyone is aware of her love and that she is the only one who respects him. A sudden, loud Bieltuk sounding follows Eloise panicking over his sudden marriage to another woman.
Eloise lists her superior qualities and claims Marcia is completely inferior to her.
A sudden, quick sounding follows Eloise recoiling as Fabian rejects her for eternity. A sudden, tight quack sounding follows Eloise clenching her dress and accusing him of discarding her for a title.
A sudden, heavy juk-buck sounding follows Fabian walking away while denying any interest in his title.
Fabian leans in close and bluntly states he has never loved her.
Please provide the text you would like me to read.
Fabian tells her she only covets his appearance and has no interest in his true self. Eloise looks terrified while Fabian notes she only acted out because her desires were thwarted.
Eloise desperately claims he is the most charming man she has ever known.
Fabian stares down at her and dismisses her feelings as a simple obsession.
Eloise brings up their separate bedrooms as evidence of his lack of love for his life.
Eloise claims the marriage was a cold business deal driven purely by a will.
Eloise insists she is the most suitable partner and questions his feelings for Marcia.
Fabian gazes at her coldly and asks who said he doesn't love Marcia.
The brown-haired woman stares ahead in stunned silence.
Fabian flinches as a voice from off-screen asks if he truly loves her.
Fabian watches silently from the balcony as the blonde man and Marcia interact below. Marcia reflects on the situation, realizing she has finally figured it all out.
Fabian gazes off to the side and admits to himself that he does love her.
He hesitates for a moment, his lips slightly parted as he prepares to speak.
The brown-haired woman in the yellow dress shouts that she will force him to love her if she must.
Fabian turns his head slightly and calls out Marcia's name.
A sudden, sharp splash follows the blonde man throwing his drink aside in a panic.
The blonde man is distressed as Fabian approaches, causing a shock to ripple through the room.
A single drop falls from above as a soft gasp escapes.
Marcia demands to know what the blonde man is doing and expresses fear over the mysterious drink.
The blonde man seized with frustration, claiming the drink was merely champagne and juice.
Marcia mockingly reveals she suspected the drink was drugged and stood in public intentionally to expose him.
The blonde man's temper finally snaps as he raises his hand to strike her.
Marcia laughs mockingly and challenges him, expressing disbelief that he would actually try to hit her.
Marcia goads him further, stating she wants him to continue his outbursts to ruin the marriage. Marcia's attention is caught by a sudden, quick glance toward the side.
Marcia realizes her escape routes are blocked and concludes that the blonde man has planned this trap. Marcia decides she must strike him decisively in a specific spot to end the confrontation.
Marcia looks him directly in the eye and dares him to try and hit her.
The blonde man trembles with uncontrollable rage, his face flushing as he seethes.
He shouts a final desperate warning, questioning if she truly thinks he won't follow through.
The blonde man is frozen in shock as Fabian suddenly intercedes.
Marcia's attention is taken by a sudden, soft gasp of confusion.
The blonde man is baffled, wondering why Fabian has suddenly appeared to interfere.
Fabian demands to know how he dares to touch his wife, leaving Marcia completely stunned.
Marcia looks at him in wide-eyed surprise, beginning to speak his name.
Fabian stands tall and imposing, his presence completely dominating the hallway. Marcia gasps as she stares at him, her expression filled with a mix of shock and realization.
Marcia is bewildered and asks how he appeared so suddenly when there are no doors nearby.
Fabian admits he is unfamiliar with the theater and decided to jump from the balcony instead. Fabian holds Marcia firmly and admits that he simply could not stand by and do nothing.
Marcia blushes deeply as she gazes up at him in stunned silence.
The blonde man is horrified, wondering why anyone would be crazy enough to jump from a balcony.
The blonde man realizes he is in over his head, dealing with a dangerous man who holds a high title.
He laments that he could have handled Marcia alone, but the Duke's arrival changed everything.
The blonde man is terrified by Fabian's eyes and wonders what the final plan was.
He tries to flee but is interrupted by a sudden, sharp axe sounding as he is grabbed from behind.
Fabian stares down at him with a cold, piercing gaze and calls him by his full name.
Fabian repeats the question with a mocking edge, addressing him as young Duke Carl Cleef.
Carl is struck with fear, wondering how the Duke managed to learn his identity.
The brown-haired woman recalls being told that family ties would prevent any fighting between them.
She is overcome with regret, questioning her own sanity for believing those deceptive words. Fabian's red eyes glow with a cold, predatory intensity.
Please provide the text you would like me to read. Carl struggles desperately in Fabian's grip, claiming he never intended to harm the lady. Carl tries to shift the blame, shouting that he only came at another woman's request.
Marcia closes her eyes and confirms she has already obtained all the information she needed from him. Fabian reaches out with a swift, decisive movement toward the cowering man.
A sudden, sharp arg sounding follows the dark-haired man roughly seizing the blonde man by the collar.
Carl flees down the hallway, shouting a frantic reminder for Fabian to take care of his cousin while cursing Marcia in his thoughts. The blonde man's face is twisted in a sneer as he vows never to forgive Eloise Conrad for the failure of their plan.
Marcia watches Carl's retreat with a worried expression, fearing that he will never leave Eloise in peace after this humiliation.
Carl continues his desperate escape through the theater, certain that Eloise's life is now in complete ruin. Fabian turns his attention to Marcia and asks her to explain exactly what has been happening in his absence.
The dark-haired man looks away, his face deeply flushed with a mixture of intense anger and embarrassment.
Marcia stares at him in silence, her green eyes filled with a mix of shock and confusion over his reaction. Fabian dismisses Carl's offer to cancel the engagement, stating firmly that he is already well aware of the situation.
The blonde woman looks skeptical, wondering if his anger is actually directed at her for secretly meeting another man.
Fabian stands in tense silence, his hand clenching his belt as he processes her questions with visible frustration. Fabian grips Marcia's shoulders and desperately asks her what he should do if she were to be harmed. Marcia blushes deeply as she wonders if he is truly as concerned about her well-being as he appears to be.
The Duke warns her that Carl is a dangerous person and insists she should never travel through the city without a servant.
Marcia explains that she acted alone because she could not leave Larissa, though Fabian still wishes she had left a note.
The dark-haired man looks down and places a hand on his chest, struggling to contain his overwhelming emotions for her.
Marcia tries to ease his concern by insisting that nothing bad actually happened to her during the encounter.
Fabian reminds her of the repeated threats she has faced, proving he has been watching over her far more closely than she realized.
Marcia argues that things have changed since their last meeting, but Fabian demands to know exactly what is different now.
Fabian gently lifts her chin and prepares to deliver a final serious warning about her future behavior. The Duke leans in close with a devious smirk, promising that his reaction next time will be far more severe than this.
He lingers near her face, the unspoken tension between them reaching a breaking point as he finishes his threat. Marcia boldly questions if his anger only stems from her being alone or if he suspects her of having an affair.
Fabian responds with a rare, genuine smile that softens his intimidating presence and catches her off guard.
Marcia remains frozen in place as he pulls away, unable to find the words to respond to his sudden change in mood.
The blonde woman reflects on the hidden truth of their marriage, knowing Fabian remains unaware of her true motives.
A vibrant floral pattern surrounds her thoughts as she reaffirms her commitment to placing Larissa's happiness above all else.
Marcia envisions silver-haired Larissa sleeping peacefully, the one person she is determined to protect at any cost.
Marcia stares at the dark castle and fears that revealing the Blake family's secret would lead Fabian to kill her.
She gazes up at her husband and wonders if he would feel any regret if he knew the whole truth.
Fabian speaks her name softly, drawing her attention back to the present moment and away from her dark thoughts. He points toward the theater's upper level and invites her to use the private Laurent balcony whenever she wishes.
A sudden, quiet ahem sounding follows Fabian, suggesting that they and Larissa should all attend the opera as a family in the future.
Marcia looks toward the side and realizes that Eloise's meddling might actually serve a useful purpose in her plans.
The scene shifts to the hallway below, where the brown-haired woman watches the couple in a state of utter despair.
Eloise sinks to the floor in defeat, her spirit completely broken by the intimate scene she just witnessed.
The woman's face is a mask of horror and disbelief as she desperately asks herself why everything has gone wrong.
Eloise stands alone in the vast empty corridor, reflecting on her failure as the couple departs together. Tears stream down the brown-haired woman's face as she contemplates her future and asks herself what she should do.
Eloise admits to herself that she can no longer think of any way to steal Fabian's heart away from Marcia.
She is haunted by a vision of Fabian and Marcia laughing together in a field of roses, looking perfectly happy.
The image of the happy couple walking arm in arm through a garden torments her mind and confirms her defeat.
Eloise's purple eyes are wide with grief as the reality of her isolation finally sinks in. She reflects on her brother's certain wrath, knowing he will never forgive her for failing to secure the Duke.
Fabian's cold and distant profile remains etched in her memory as a symbol of her ultimate rejection.
The sound of heavy footsteps echoes in the hall as a man approaches the cowering and weeping woman. The blonde man appears by her side and coldly informs her that her carriage is ready for her departure.
Carl adjusts his cravat with a mocking air as he prepares to lead the defeated woman away.
The blonde man looks down at her with a chilling expression and addresses her formally as Lady Conrad.
The ash-blonde man, Carl, invites the brunette woman to depart, addressing her as Lady Conrad. The brunette woman watches him with suspicion, wondering why he has appeared him. She observes Carl's disheveled state, noting his messy clothes and soaked appearance.
Her eyes narrow as she questions if Fabian is responsible for the man's condition.
Carl advises her to return home immediately, suggesting that her secrets may already be known.
A sharp, quick tap sounding as the brunette woman attempts to grab Carl's arm.
Carl turns away and leaves the woman standing alone in the shadows.
The brunette woman sits within the carriage, her expression filled with confusion and worry. Looking out the window, she suddenly realizes she is not in her own carriage.
Carl appears in the doorway, ominously correcting her that this is indeed the right carriage.
A sharp, sudden flinch sounding as the brunette woman gasps in terror at his reappearance.
Carl commands the journey to begin as he takes a seat across from her.
A heavy, resonant jolt sounding as the carriage wheels begin to turn rapidly.
The brunette woman demands to know what Carl is trying to accomplish with this abduction. Carl looks away, contemplating his next moves as they travel into the night. He warns her that rumors of her behavior will likely spread to the north.
Carl reminds her of a previous promise regarding the responsibility of her marriage.
He scoffs at the idea of her being match-made into another prestigious family.
A soft, quick swish sounding as Carl closes the heavy curtains of the carriage.
Carl explains that he has already developed a grudge against the Duke and Duchess.
The brunette woman is left speechless, a cold sweat breaking out as she listens to him. A steady, rhythmic tap sounding as Carl shifts his weight and leans toward her.
Carl proposes a new idea, claiming he fell in love with her at first sight.
The brunette woman is revolted by his words, her internal voice labeling him a liar. Carl mocks her situation, offering himself as a gentleman who can provide comfort.
He details a plan where they would run away together as a disgraced lady and a weak ran.
Carl reveals his true greed, admitting that he intends to claim her property through marriage.
He adds that her beauty is an additional benefit to his selfish plan.
A soft, quick rustle sounding as Carl reaches out to touch her chin.
Carl corners her, insisting that he loves her despite her obvious rejection.
The brunette woman demands that he let go of her, calling him a jerk.
Carl persists, telling her that she will soon forget about Duke Laurent.
Panicking, the brunette woman yells for the carriage to be stopped immediately.
A heavy, resonant jolt sounding as Carl explains they are heading to a distant mansion.
He mocks her demands, challenging her to see if he dares to go through with his plan.
Carl promises that she will find satisfaction once their cohabitation begins. A soft, quick rustle sounding as the brunette woman realizes how deeply wrong this situation has become. A heavy, resonant jolt sounding as she considers jumping from the moving carriage to escape. A heavy, resonant jolt sounding as she hesitates, realizing the speed makes a jump too dangerous.
She worries about being lost in an unknown location and getting caught again.
A firm, quick squeeze sounding as the brunette woman grips her dress while trying to think. Closing her eyes in desperation, she silently pleads for anyone to come to her rescue. A heavy, resonant jolt sounding as the carriage is suddenly interrupted, startling both of them.
The brunette woman looks up in shock, wondering if Cynthia has actually come to save her.
Outside, several figures in dark cloaks holding torches block the path of the carriage.
Carl panics, deciding he must use the lady as a hostage to secure an escape.
A sharp, quick click sounding as a cloaked man points a revolver directly at Carl's head.
A heavy, resonant jolt sounding as the cloaked man demands that Carl step away from the lady.
Carl is forcibly dragged away from the carriage by the mysterious group of men.
The brunette woman is left trembling in the seat, staring in disbelief at her sudden rescue.
Portis extends his hand toward her. Portis offers to escort the woman home.
The pair walks toward the waiting horses.
Portis promises to ride alongside and escort her home, while the woman expresses her gratitude.
The blonde woman asks for a thing. The man identifies himself as Portis.
Marcia promises to deliver his message. She reaffirms that she will tell the Bantam.
Marcia mentions the carriage is nearby and Fabian grants Portis permission to follow while the man on horseback reassures them.
The carriage departs into the night. Marcia wonders how to explain the situation. Portis pursues the fast-moving carriage.
Marcia hesitates to ask the Duke for errands.
Fabian remains silent as Marcia admits her dislike for rental wagons.
Fabian decides to call for a carriage.
Fabian suggests they share a single horse.
Fabian notes he'd ride his horse anyway.
Fabian refuses to leave her with strangers.
Fabian notes her reluctance to use wagons.
Fabian suggests the horse ride as a change.
Marcia blushes and accepts his offer.
Fabian smiles, calling it his great honor. Fabian tells her to hold on tight. The horse gallops forward into the day.
Marcia is startled by the horse's height.
Fabian grips her waist firmly from behind.
Marcia regrets her lack of riding experience.
Fabian decides to slow down for her. Marcia asks how he knew the location.
Fabian explains he found a hidden letter. Fabian explains that the letter requested a meeting at the theater and admits to having a bad thought, while both apologize for their roles in the misunderstanding.
Marcia smiles at the favorable turn of events. Marcia realizes the letter allowed him to help.
Fabian mentions Miss Conrad as Marcia reflects.
Marcia concludes Eloise left the letter intentionally.
Marcia suspects a spy remains in the mansion. She worries about agents still loyal to Dominic.
Marcia notes Eloise's agents are also present. They discuss management changes and servant responsibility.
Marcia is relieved her former engagement broke. Marcia hopes Portis reaches Miss Conrad in time.
Marcia considers her husband a shrewd man.
Marcia feels sympathy for the rejected Alois.
Marcia asks how he tracks carb leave. Fabian's gentle demeanor makes her heart flutter.
Fabian apologizes for the missed dinner and suggests they return to the mansion to eat, noting that Larissa will already be asleep by the time they arrive.
Their hands rest closely on the reins.
Marcia flinches but agrees tomorrow's sign.
Fabian smiles warmly at his wife.
Marcia blushes deeply in Ecclesavin.
The blonde woman looks down in shame, admitting to herself that she cannot even bear to look back.
Fabian stands close behind her, his gaze fixed on her with intense focus.
The dark-haired man wonders to himself if her nervousness is simply caused by being uncomfortable in his presence.
As they ride through the night, Fabian asks Marcia if she has any prior experience riding a horse.
Marcia claims that riding is a standard art for noblewomen while secretly feeling embarrassed about her total lack of skill. Talk about a masterclass in the fake-it-till-you-make-it strategy of nobility.
Fabian mentions that his family had a cult at their home back when he was a young child.
He recalls how his father's business failures eventually forced the family to sell the animal one day.
Marcia laughs and explains that she simply lost her natural interest in horses as she grew older.
The blonde woman secretly wishes she had learned to ride properly as his hand rests near hers on the reins. A sudden, firm movement follows the dark-haired man gripping her waist to steady her position. Fabian warns her that if she continues to stay so tense, her entire body will ache by tomorrow.
He urges her to trust him and delivers a solemn promise that he will never let her fall. Marcia looks back at him and insists that such a heavy promise is completely unnecessary.
The blonde woman blushes deeply and clarifies that she isn't actually afraid of falling from the horse.
Fabian responds with a rare and genuinely warm smile that softens his features.
Marcia quickly turns her head away, her face flushing with a deep and visible blush.
Fabian expresses his relief while pulling her closer as they continue their journey through the woods. A quick, steady clip-clop sounding accompanies the horse galloping swiftly through the dark landscape.
Fabian vows that he will identify whichever servant was responsible for spreading lies once they reach the mansion.
Marcia watches him in silence, wondering if he has always had to carry such complex and heavy burdens alone.
She reflects on the passage of time, noting that 3 years have gone by since Fabian truly began to mature.
The blonde woman considers Larissa's future growth and notes the 6-year age gap between herself and her husband.
Marcia ponders the original narrative and how an early meeting between the main characters might alter their destiny.
She views Fabian as the only prince capable of truly protecting Larissa from the dangers that surround her.
Marcia worries about the potential consequences for Fabian if he is forced to fulfill that heroic role. The blonde woman clenches her eyes shut, feeling a strong sense of dislike for those grim and uncertain possibilities.
A sudden startled jolt catches Marcia as she becomes acutely aware of her husband's physical proximity.
Fabian notices her sudden reaction and asks if she is feeling all right or if something is wrong.
Marcia's ear turns bright red as she realizes just how incredibly close his voice is to her face.
She apologizes for any discomfort her seating position might cause him, but the Duke reassures her that it is fine.
Fabian tells her to trust in him instead of the horse, though she maintains her claim of not being afraid.
The Duke delivers a final request for her to never attempt to resolve such dangerous situations on her own again.
Fabian looks at his wife with a steady gaze and reminds her that they are now a married couple.
Marcia stares at him in realization, noting that he truly and genuinely views her as his official wife.
She concludes that he must actually like her while reflecting on the mansion and staff she has at her command.
Marcia simply agrees with a firm yes, leaving the dark-haired man looking confused by her response.
She reflects on how secure she feels despite the attack by Igor and the threatening letter she previously read.
Marcia admits to herself that protecting Larissa entirely on her own has become an almost impossible task.
Their hands remain close together on the reins as they navigate the path toward home.
The blonde woman offers a bright and genuine smile, finally feeling a sense of peace. Fabian is pleased when she promises to never put herself in such a reckless and dangerous position again.
Marcia looks out toward the horizon with a serene expression, the wind blowing through her hair.
Fabian gazes at his wife with an intense and thoughtful look, his eyes full of unspoken emotion.
The blonde woman notices his lingering stare and looks back at him with a curious expression.
Fabian asks her what is on her mind, but she quickly dismisses the question as being about nothing at all.
Fabian recalls memories of Marcia fighting to protect her sister, appearing far more mature than her years.
He observes her current state and realizes that while she was once strong for others, she now appears soft and vulnerable. He remembers his own isolated youth where the elite avoided him and he never once participated in a dance.
Fabian reflects on how the stigma of his mother's bloodline turned him into a social pariah whom no one wanted to marry. He watches Marcia and admits to himself that he expected people to grow up according to a much stricter timeline.
Marcia gazes thoughtfully into the distance with a serene expression.
Fabian realizes that adulthood is much smaller than he previously imagined.
He recalls how mature she appeared while protecting her younger sister. Her internal strength belies the youthful age she currently possesses.
Fabian vows to himself that he must protect her happiness. The pair arrives back at the grand mansion later than expected.
Marcia explains that they traveled slowly because he was caring for her.
The blonde woman smiles as she expresses her sincere gratitude.
Fabian tells her to rest and recover from the long journey.
A rhythmic, steady top sounding accompanies her walking through the quiet hallway.
Marcia worries that using the same bedroom might wake her sister.
A sudden, sharp creak sounding follows her finding the bed completely empty.
She panics, wondering why Larissa is not in her room as expected.
A loud, sudden bang sounding echoes as she searches the mansion frantically.
Marcia spots her sister standing silently alone by the window.
The young girl stands perfectly still in her slippers while holding a doll.
Marcia calls out to her younger sister with visible concern.
A soft, muffled rustle sounding follows as they share a relieved hub.
Marcia asks the young girl if she's feeling sleepy.
She wonders why the child was standing alone in the dark room.
A soft, rhythmic nodding sounding follows Larissa admitting she waited up.
A long, tired yawn sounding escapes the exhausted young girl.
Marcia looks at her with a look of pure sisterly adoration. She pulls her sister into another firm and loving embrace.
The blonde woman feels a profound sense of relief and comfort.
Marcia decides it is finally time for them to put to sleep.
A soft, rhythmic pat sounding accompanies her tucking Larissa into bed.
A gentle, rhythmic breathing sounding follows as the girl falls asleep.
Marcia smiles warmly, her heart full of love for her sister. Marcia walks through the hall with a servant following closely behind.
The maid admits she feels ashamed for being unable to help earlier.
Marcia reassures her that everything is all right and not to worry.
A soft, tearful sniff sounding accompanies the maid's humble expression of thanks. Marcia reflects on the challenges of her very first day back.
She notes that even children are capable of becoming dangerous spies.
The maid trembles, realizing a hidden master is behind the recent plot. Marcia wonders how to best trick the person responsible for the betrayal. The servant looks on in terror as Marcia's tone becomes cold. A soft, quick slide sounding follows her touching the desk while reflecting.
A sharp, rhythmic top sounding echoes as Marcia mentions her past reputation.
The maid claims total ignorance regarding Marcia's history at the mansion.
Marcia is determined to find the accomplice and end the threat.
She questions if the servant is truly a fool or just acting.
A cold, shivering rustle sounding follows the maid's visible and intense fear.
Marcia's expression darkens as she contemplates her next move with a smile. She reminds the captured maid that she is the Blick clan's villainess.
A sharp, metallic ring sounding follows her, grabbing a fire popper.
A roaring fire sounds as Marcia looms over the terrified servant.
She warns that no one would notice if the maid suddenly disappeared.
A sudden, quick whistle sounding accompanies the red-hot poker being moved.
Marcia threatens to burn the truth out of her terrified captive. The bound maid desperately begs the blonde woman for forgiveness.
A muffled, desperate whimper sounding follows the maid cursing her traitorous partner.
A sharp, knowing click sounding accompanies Marcia's victorious and cold smirk.
Marcia decides to deal with the accomplice first as the maid panics. A cold, calculating snap sounding follows Marcia vowing to verify their stories. Marcia demands the name of the mastermind despite her internal fear.
The scene shifts to a memory of a brown-haired woman. The captive reveals that Lady Eloise was the one who sent her.
She confesses to reporting the blonde woman's daily activities to Nico.
Marcia confirms Eloise's involvement and calls for her loyal maid, Sophia. Marcia orders Sophia to bring the accomplice from the factory immediately.
The captive is stunned to realize her accomplice has also been captured.
A bright, cheerful giggle sounding follows Marcia admitting she tricked the maid.
Marcia dismisses her concerns while preparing to interrogate the next prisoner.
Marcia instructs Sophia to handle the traitor using the Duke's procedure.
The captive lets out a final, desperate cry for her lady's mercy.
Marcia sits alone in the quiet, blue-lit drawing room.
A soft, heavy sigh sounding follows Marcia reflecting on her own tension.
She worries that any slip-up will expose her younger sister's secret.
Marcia resolves to handle her duties with absolute and perfect care.
Sophia returns with news that Sir Portus has safely arrived back.
The maid reports Lady Conrad's return and Viscount Cleve's official capture.
Fabian confirms that the Grand Duke has already dealt with the situation.
A short, dry cough sounding follows Marcia discussing the fallen Cleve clan.
Marcia reflects on finally identifying the true mastermind behind the plot.
She focuses on determining exactly how much information the enemies possess.
A loud, piercing scream sounding echoes from the Grand Mansion at night.
2 hours pass after the woman named Nico is dragged in.
The prisoner insists she is telling the absolute truth to Marcia.
Nico admits she was bribed by Eloise to betray the Blick family.
Marcia realizes the information regarding her family remains dangerously unclear.
She learns of a mysterious maid delivering food to a hidden room.
Marcia guesses that Fabian's father and brother are hiding the girl.
She puzzles over the mysterious initials found on a drafted piece of paper.
Marcia is relieved that Larissa's diamond tier ability remains a hidden secret.
She worries that greedy men will try to monopolize her sister's power.
Time skips forward to several days after the interrogation ended.
Marcia notes with satisfaction that no one has come for Larissa. The blonde woman feels that everything is finally getting much better.
Fabian asks his wife how she has been doing lately.
Marcia apologizes for the sudden visit and asks for any Hank.
She observes Fabian retrieving tea from an expensive locked wine cabinet.
Marcia secretly wishes she could admit her true preference for wine.
The blonde woman watches her husband with a focused, admiring gaze. Fabian's red eye glows with a warm and gentle light. Marcia thinks to herself that her husband is incredibly handsome.
She considers how Fabian possesses every quality a woman could desire.
Marcia realizes she wants a lover exactly like the dark-haired man.
A soft, contented sip sounding follows Marcia praising the tea's aroma.
Marcia thinks Fabian makes good tea and wonders if there is anything he cannot do. Fabian asks her if there is anything she wants to time.
Marcia claims it is nothing at all while thinking his voice is also amazing.
A soft, rhythmic clack sounding follows Marcia placing her tea down. Chibi Fabian asks what she meant by her previous remark.
Marcia declares that she is speaking about their marriage life together.
Fabian is visibly startled by the seriousness of her sudden proclamation.
Marcia notes the rumors in the mansion that they are not a real couple.
A soft, heavy whoosh sounding follows Fabian's long and weary sigh.
Fabian realizes someone must have noticed the distance between them. Marcia warns that their fake marriage might be canceled if the truth spreads.
She worries that she and Larissa will be in an awkward situation.
Fabian asks for her solutions as they discuss their next moves. A sharp, wet cough sounding follows Fabian choking on his tea in shock.
Marcia quickly adds that sharing a bedroom would only be a temporary measure. She suggests they can pretend to have a quarrel to justify their distance. Marcia feels like she is going crazy while proposing such ideas.
A short, dry cough sounding follows Fabian looking away in embarrassment.
Marcia promises to sleep on the sofa and do nothing to him.
A long, heavy sigh sounding follows Fabian closing his eyes in resignation.
Marcia worries that her husband might actually be angry with the plan.
Chibi Marcia reminds herself that she is not a real wife.
A soft, hot breath sounding follows Fabian, blushing intensely at the thought.
Fabian firmly states that they cannot stay awake together all night.
A soft, weary whoosh sounding follows Fabian, hiding his face in his hand.
Marcia asks him to share any better ideas he might have instead.
Chibi Marcia considers Plan B, which involves going on a honeymoon together. Another potential plan involves throwing a grand and fancy party. The final plan is holding a ball and acting sweetly before everyone. Marcia admits she hates all three plans as they make things too complicated. A soft, thoughtful sounding follows Fabian's quiet contemplation. Fabian finally agrees that sleeping together is not a bad idea. The scene shifts from a cloudy day to the mansion at night. A soft, rhythmic kiss sounding follows Marcia kissing her sleeping sister goodnight. A quick metallic click sounding follows Marcia standing ready in her nighttime.
Marcia apologizes to the sleeping Larissa while borrowing a game box. She carries a large box while wondering if her sleepwear is appropriate.
The chandelier glows as Sophia calls out to her lady.
Marcia asks the maid if her pink nightgown makes her look ready. Sophia is flustered as Marcia asks about wearing sleepwear to the bedroom.
Marcia admits that she honestly does not plan to take the nightgown off.
She prepares to take the game box with her into the suite.
Sophia suggests the lady will not even use the items she is bringing.
Marcia tells the maid she has misunderstood and she intends to use everything. A soft, steady slide sounding follows Marcia reaching for the bedroom door.
Marcia pauses outside the couple's bedroom, feeling a bit worried.
A sudden, loud creak sounding follows the bedroom door swinging open. Marcia's green eye widens in absolute shock as she enters the room. The grand bed is completely buried under a mountain of rose petals. Marcia is speechless at the sight of the romantic floral display. Rose petals and candles create a romantic atmosphere.
Marcia is stunned by the elaborate floral display.
The blonde woman moves frantically in her pink nightgown. Marcia questions the season and the ridiculousness of the decorations. A sudden, sharp click sounding startles the flustered Marcia. Fabian enters the room, noting her early arrival. The black-haired man's red eyes glow intensely.
Marcia blushes while clutching her large game box.
Fabian looks away, visibly embarrassed by the situation. Fabian questions her movements and suggests she is stretching. Marcia's face turns a deep shade of red. Marcia accuses Fabian of being a traitor while kneeling. Fabian questions the appropriateness of her chosen sleepwear.
The man suggests she wear more comfortable sleeping clothes.
Marcia invites Fabian inside and tells him to rest. Fabian contemplates his next words while looking at her. Marcia's green eye widens as she focuses on him. A close-up reveals the purple jewel on Fabian's cravat.
Marcia suggests that Fabian should loosen his tight collar.
She notes that the formal attire must be uncomfortable. Fabian reaches up to adjust his own neckwear. A short, dry cough sounding follows Fabian's awkward reassurance.
Marcia wonders if she has done something wrong.
Fabian sits down at a table covered in documents.
Marcia asks if he intends to work on Laiwa.
Chibi Marcia suggests that they should spend time together.
The blonde woman smiles, noting the night has just begun. Fabian looks at her with a soft, blushing expression. Marcia prepares to play games to pass the time.
Fabian realizes his own misunderstanding and looks flustered.
They sit across from each other at the small table. Marcia offers to talk throughout the night instead.
She asks if they should discuss their respective childhoods.
Fabian deflects and insists they simply play the game. Marcia wonders if he is avoiding the topic of his mother.
Marcia suggests they focus on having fun with the cards.
Fabian proposes making the game more interesting with a bet.
Marcia agrees and asks what the terms should be.
She declares that the winner gets to make a demand. Fabian agrees but worries if the request will be difficult.
Marcia laughs while suggesting a drinking penalty for the loser.
Fabian firmly refuses to allow any alcohol for the night. Chibi Marcia looks bewildered by his sudden and serious rejection. Marcia laughs and asks why he is being so serious.
She clarifies she was joking and suggests a considerate wish.
The two sit together, enjoying the lighthearted moment. Fabian watches her with a warm and gentle gaze.
Chibi Marcia explains that the lowest card will be victorious.
Marcia stares intently at the cards on the table. A soft, rhythmic top sounding follows Marcia reaching for a card. Fabian looks down at the cards, thinking that his short nails make it difficult to flip them. Chibi Marcia excitedly offers to flip the card for him.
The black-haired man's hand brushes against Marcia's as they reach for the card together.
A soft, quick thump-thump sounding follows Marcia's heart racing as she wonders if this is a romantic scene from a book. A soft, steady swish sounding follows Fabian pulling his hand back and apologizing for the contact. A long, weary pew sounding follows Marcia trying to calm her nerves, thinking it was just a simple touch.
Marcia decides she does not have to worry about anything unpleasant happening tonight.
Fabian stares intensely at his hand and tells Marcia to lay her card down if she can.
A quick, rhythmic clack sounding follows the cards heading the table as Marcia notes Fabian has already lost 3,000 gold. Chibi Marcia celebrates her incredible luck while thinking about how much money she has made. A soft, rhythmic jingle sounding follows gold coins falling as Marcia reflects on how long it takes an ordinary person to earn such wealth.
Another soft, rhythmic jingle sounding follows more coins falling while Marcia gleefully watches her savings grow.
Marcia realizes that 500 gold is an insignificant amount to a wealthy Grand Duke like Fabian. The blonde woman thinks her husband is even more attractive because he was born into such high status.
Marcia asks Fabian if he is bored of losing and suggests they try a different game.
A quick, crisp shuffling sound follows Fabian shuffling the deck and asking for one more round. A sudden, sharp snap sounding follows the two chibi characters focusing intently on the next play. A soft, excited whoa sounding follows Marcia's cheers as Fabian finally wins a hand. Fabian looks at his cards and asks Marcia what her wish will be.
The man changes his mind and asks Marcia to answer just one question for him instead.
Fabian asks why she is so determined to make Larissa the Duchess. Marcia reflects on her past, thinking that she must make Larissa happy so they can both survive.
She remembers their time as servants and how they have nowhere to run if they are caught.
A soft, heavy squeeze sounding follows Marcia gripping her pink nightgown while hesitating to tell Fabian the truth.
The blonde woman looks down with a pensive and somber expression.
Marcia considers that while Fabian is a fairy tale prince, she herself is not the true female lead. Fabian admits he cannot answer her, and Marcia quietly acknowledges his refusal. Chibi Fabian decides to save his wish for later, prompting Marcia to call him petty. Fabian reminds her she was the one who took his money, while Marcia thinks he is acting stingy. A short, dry ahem sounding follows Marcia awkwardly asking if he bet a large amount on the game. Chibi Fabian confirms it was a lot, but Marcia tries to brush it off as just a fun card game. A sudden thought strikes Marcia as she gazes toward her husband. Fabian's red eyes soften as he gives her a warm and gentle smile amidst a floral background. Marcia turns away quickly while trying to stay focused and not be mesmerized by his handsomeness. A soft, steady slide sounding follows Marcia reaching into the box and asking to play a new game.
A soft, magical sparkle sounding follows Marcia explaining a game of falling bricks while Fabian suggests playing without bets.
Marcia looks around the room and asks if the bedroom walls are completely soundproof. A soft, low whisper sounding follows Marcia explaining that they cannot let any crashing sounds be heard outside.
Marcia worries what others would think if they knew the couple was playing with gold bricks in their bedroom.
A sudden, soft poof sounding follows Fabian's face turning bright red as Marcia suggests letting the servants' imaginations run wild. A soft, hot hiss sounding follows Fabian hiding his face in embarrassment while Marcia looks on in confusion. A quick, rhythmic crackle sounding follows the logs burning as Fabian wonders exactly what she meant by that remark. The man calls out his wife's name as the night continues in the grand room. A soft, steady slide sounding follows Fabian leaning in closer to the blonde woman. The scene shifts to several chess pieces lying on the board after they have played all night. A soft, steady breathing sounding follows Marcia falling asleep on the table, prompting a weary pew sounding from Fabian.
Marcia mutters in her sleep as she rests her head peacefully on her arms.
Fabian thinks to himself that her appearance is different than usual, and he had to restrain himself many times. He recalls the beautiful, glowing smile Marcia gave him during their time together. Fabian stands at the threshold, reflecting on the first time he has opened their bedroom door. Marcia's alluring appearance in her pink nightgown creates a palpable sense of tension for Fabian. A sudden, hot hiss sounding follows Fabian's face turning red as he recalls how Marcia's hands kept touching his during their game. A soft, steady slide sounding follows Fabian standing up from the table where the blonde woman has fallen asleep. The black-haired man looks down at his sleeping wife and admits to himself that the situation feels strange. A soft, light rustle sounding follows Fabian recalling that holding hands never used to affect him like this. He reaches out to gently touch a lock of Marcia's long, golden hair as she rests.
A sudden, heavy squeeze sounding follows Fabian clenching his fist as he struggles to maintain his composure.
Fabian gazes at her with a tender expression while she sleeps peacefully beside the chessboard. He worries that Marcia will hurt her neck if she continues to sleep in such an uncomfortable position. Fabian carefully lifts the blonde woman into his arms to move her to the grand bed. A soft, quick rustle sounding follows Marcia stirring slightly in her sleep while being carried. Fabian looks visibly nervous and flustered as he holds his sleeping wife close to his chest. A close-up reveals the man's red eyes glowing with a mixture of affection and inner turmoil.
Marcia remains soundly asleep, unaware of her husband's intense emotional reaction.
Fabian wonders if she is exhausted from constantly pretending to be strong for everyone else's sake. He recalls Marcia's fierce determination when dealing with difficult family members and protecting her sister. The black-haired man carefully carries Marcia across the room toward the large bed.
He gently lays her down onto the soft pillows, being careful not to wake her.
Fabian pulls the white covers up to Marcia's chin to ensure she stays warm throughout the night.
A soft, rhythmic crackle sounding follows the logs burning in the fireplace as the room remains quiet.
Fabian sits in a chair beside the bed, watching over his sleeping wife with a pensive look.
He reflects on how Marcia is a sensitive person who always prioritizes her little sister's needs.
Fabian wonders if she is truly unable to recognize the romantic feelings he has for her. He contemplates their future together and his firm decision to never allow a divorce.
The man concludes that the harmony of their relationship doesn't matter as long as they stay together.
Fabian leans in closer to the blonde woman, drawn to her peaceful expression in the moonlight.
He reaches out once more, his hand hovering near her face as he hesitates to touch her.
A soft, steady slide sounding follows Fabian, stroking her hair with a light and loving touch.
He thinks about how Marcia always maintains faith in herself even during the most dangerous circumstances.
Fabian remembers a happy moment of them sharing tea together in the garden. He recalls the genuine love Marcia showed while hugging her white-haired little sister, Larissa.
The black-haired man looks deeply enamored, finding every moment spent with her to be sweet.
A long, weary pew sounding follows Fabian leaning in very close to her sleeping face.
Fabian's red eyes soften with desire as he focuses entirely on the sleeping woman. A soft, light stroke sounding follows Fabian gently cupping Marcia's cheek with his hand. The man sits back and admits to himself that his patience is far weaker than he ever realized.
A soft, quick click sounding follows Fabian reaching out to turn off the lamp by the bedside.
He sits alone in the darkened room, watching the sleeping Marcia while holding a letter.
A heavy, exhausted exhaust sounding follows Fabian looking at the documents while trying to stay focused.
A soft, quick cheep sounding follows the sun rising as a new morning begins in the grand suite.
Marcia wakes up and wonders why her bed feels exceptionally fluffy and comfortable today.
The blonde woman slowly opens her green eye as the bright morning light fills the room.
Chibi Marcia sits up in a panic, wondering what time it is and how she ended up in bed. She realizes she overslept and laments that she failed to stay awake all night as planned.
Marcia looks around the empty room and wonders if Fabian has already left for the day.
The bedroom door opens as a maid announces that all the morning preparations are complete.
Two maids enter the suite pushing a large ornate breakfast cart filled with treats.
Marcia offers a nervous and blushing smile as she learns Fabian ordered breakfast for him. The brown-haired maid Sophia asks Marcia how she is feeling after her night with the Duke.
A soft, tired sigh sounding follows the maid's whispering about how the Duke seemed to have had a very long night. Sophia notes that Marcia seems exhausted from her long wait.
Marcia thanks the maid and prepares to enjoy her tea.
The blonde woman rests while drinking. She gazes pensively over her cup. A quiet sigh fills the room. Sophia brushes Marcia's hair while the blonde woman wonders how to handle her husband tonight.
Marcia asks if the tea is ready and the maid confirms it is almost done.
The blonde woman inquires about a prior request and Sophia enthusiastically confirms everything is prepared.
Marcia asks about Larissa's current activities and Sophia explains the girl is watching the garden.
Sophia adds that the silver-haired girl is currently holding the book Marcia had read the previous day.
Marcia reacts with a look of surprise.
The woman wonders if the girl can read and concludes that she certainly can.
A hand firmly holds the open book. Marcia recalls how Larissa chose her own book at the library but still asks to be read to.
Sophia suggests the girl might just enjoy hearing Marcia's voice, leaving the blonde woman puzzled.
Marcia realizes that children often want to be read to even if they can read themselves. The woman silently accepts this new realization.
Marcia remembers her conversation with Dr. Bellman and wonders why the girl hasn't spoken yet.
Marcia asks if Larissa is mute, but the doctor clarifies her vocal cords are perfectly healthy.
The blonde woman ponders the girl's reading ability.
The doctor prepares to offer his opinion.
Bellman explains that the girl is rejecting speech due to a deep-seated mental issue. Marcia reflects on the term mentatio.
The doctor reassures her of a recovery but admits he cannot predict exactly when it will happen.
Marcia recalls hearing that magic users might be better at healing broken hearts than traditional doctors.
Dr. Bellman is visibly startled and asks where the blonde woman heard such a thing.
The scene shifts to a formal portrait.
The doctor demands to know her source while Marcia is taken aback by his intense reaction.
Marcia remembers Fabian thinking that a witch would be better suited to heal a broken heart.
Sophia warns that the topic of witches healing hearts is not something to be discussed openly.
The blonde woman remains in deep thought. Marcia questions why magic users cause such panic since they simply possess magical abilities.
She laments still not finding a way to help the silver-haired girl heal. Larissa stands peacefully amidst blooming flowers.
Marcia asks Sophia if she has ever encountered a witch, surprising the brown-haired maid.
Sophia asks for clarification while wondering why the blonde woman would mention such a subject.
Marcia assumes Sophia is nervous about family history or her own rural upbringing regarding fairy tales.
Sophia questions if witches truly use magic and mentions that magicians have similar powers.
Marcia recalls Fabian explaining that men with red eyes and specific bloodlines can become magicians.
The blonde woman wonders why titles differ by gender and if it relates to healing hearts.
Marcia asks about the differences between the two titles, but Sophia admits she never considered it. The blonde woman realizes the distinction is unclear.
Marcia decides she must investigate the matter.
A bright sun shines over the garden.
Marcia brings Larissa out to the garden.
The blonde woman excitedly points out a swing.
Marcia asks if this is the first time the girl has seen such a seat.
Marcia tells Larissa to sit down and hold on tight while she prepares to push.
The blonde woman promises to push lightly while gently placing her hand on the bro. Marcia reassures the silver-haired girl that there is absolutely nothing to be afraid of.
Marcia pushes Larissa on the swing and asks if she is enjoying herself.
Marcia observes that although Larissa eats well lately, she remains quite thin.
Chibi Marcia clenches her fist, determined to help the girl eat more.
Sophia offers to take over the swing, and the blonde woman gladly accepts.
The brown-haired maid happily begins pushing Larissa through the air. Larissa takes on a look of intense determination as the swing moves.
Marcia is relieved to see the silver-haired girl looking truly happy.
A maid mentions preparing magnolia tea, and Marcia thanks her for the gesture. Marcia sips her tea, noting the strong cinnamon scent Fabian had described. She remembers the black-haired man explaining the ginger and cinnamon notes of the drink. The blonde woman blushes while wondering why his memory feels so vivid. Marcia drinks quietly while recalling their shared moments before she fell asleep. Sunlight glitters over the garden table laden with various tea-time treats. She remembers Fabian gently placing her into bed after she drifted off.
Marcia plans to invite him again, noting Larissa's love for the swing.
Sophia laughs about Larissa's messy hair as Marcia finds her sister completely adorable.
A delicate magnolia petal floats gently atop the warm tea.
Larissa stares quietly into her own small cup of tea. Marcia offers to read a fairy tale to her sister while they drink. The two sit together on the hammock while Marcia reads aloud from the book. A soft, light rustle sounding follows the leaves moving under a clear blue sky.
Fabian approaches the sisters in the garden and calls out Marcia's name.
He notes she finally has time to rest, surprising the blonde woman.
Marcia observes that Fabian looks surprisingly refreshed despite his long night.
The blonde woman offers a warm greeting as her husband arrives.
Marcia asks the black-haired man if he would care for a cup of tea.
Fabian reveals he brought a small gift for both her and Larissa.
Marcia is taken aback by the mention of a present.
The man gestures for her to look behind him with a slight smile.
Marcia gasps in shock at what her husband has brought to the garden.
A close-up highlights the deep, obsidian-colored eyes of a magnificent animal. A beautiful white horse stands proudly with a shimmering silver mane.
Fabian presents a large white horse and a small brown pony to the family. He explains the gifts commemorate Larissa finally being able to enjoy the outdoors.
An overjoyed Marcia asks her little sister if she wants to try Ryan.
Larissa's eyes sparkle with awe as she looks at the horses.
Fabian notes the animal's friendly nature makes it perfect for learning to ride.
Marcia is stunned, wondering if the magnificent white horse is for her.
The blonde woman excitedly calls out to Larissa to come closer.
She encourages the silver-haired girl to hurry and see the gift.
Marcia explains that the smaller pony is a special gift from the Duke. Larissa points to herself, looking completely bewildered by the sudden gesture.
The blonde woman confirms that the girl is indeed the owner of the pony.
Larissa's face turns red with a mixture of shock and shyness. A small hand hesitates as it reaches toward the new animal friend.
The silver-haired girl is suddenly overwhelmed with comedic terror as the pony approaches.
Fabian chuckles, suggesting the pony might be just as nervous as Larissa is.
The black-haired man holds out his hand to show them how to interact.
He gently pets the pony while offering it a small snack from his palm.
Fabian explains that horses are quite fond of sugar cubes.
Fabian asks Larissa if she would like to try feeding the pony.
The silver-haired girl watches the animal with wide, curious eyes.
A soft, quick rustle sounding as sugar cubes are offered in an open palm.
The pony takes a treat directly from the man's hand.
A rhythmic thumping sounding as Larissa watches the interaction with a pounding heart.
The silver-haired girl looks on with shyness.
Fabian holds out treats for Down.
A light, gentle whoosh sounding as he encourages the girl to reach out.
A sudden, wet lick sounding as the pony reaches for her hand. Larissa is visibly startled by the unexpected contact.
A loud, heavy thud sounding as the girl falls backward in fright.
Marcia calls out her sister's name in a moment of sudden panic. Fabian asks if she is hurt while the others rush over to help. A soft, warm glow sounding as Larissa looks up with a deep blush.
A smooth, quick glide sounding as Marcia asks if the girl is all right.
A deep, heavy thud sounding as Fabian and Marcia check on the girl.
A resonant, heavy thump sounding as Larissa stares back at them in awe.
Fabian explains the horse's excitement and asks if the girl is in pain. Marcia wonders if the fall was caused by fear of Fabian.
Larissa clutches her hands to her chest while questioning. A soft, affirmative nod sounding as the girl gives a shy smile. Fabian officially gifts the pony to Larissa and says it is now hers. The girl looks at the pony in awe.
She stares quietly at her new companion.
Fabian asks if they like the gift, surprising the blonde Warren.
Marcia praises the beautiful horses and notes that Larissa is much happier now. Marcia hopes the girl will eventually ride freely and travel even further.
The blonde woman offers a heartfelt thank you to her husband.
An elegant headband adorns her blonde hair. Marcia offers a bright, radiant smile. Fabian reacts with a soft plush.
A quick swish sounding as Fabian notes he is simply fulfilling his husbandly duties.
Fabian suggests that Marcia should choose a name for her horse. Marcia reacts to the suggestion with stunned surprise. A quick splash sounding as Fabian mentions her need for a riding tutor. Fabian admits he wants to teach her himself due to a lack of trust.
A sharp thud sounding as Portis is shocked to learn he will be tutoring.
Fabian promises to reduce Portis's workload and double his pay for the task.
Marcia laughs and suggests they visit the mansion stables first. A firm, tight squeeze sounding as a hand clutches fabric.
Marcia asks what is wrong after noticing the girl's sudden hesitation.
A quick peek sounding as the girl looks back toward the table.
Marcia looks back with a patient smile. Portis and Fabian stand together in distance.
A light whoosh sounding as Portis accepts his new role with honor. The group enjoys tea at a garden table.
Portis informs the Duke it is time to return and Fabian acknowledges.
Fabian bids the sisters a good time before he departs.
Marcia calls out to Fabian as he leaves. The blonde woman smiles amongst bright flowers.
Standing in the garden, Fabian offers a sincere apology for his behavior the previous night. Marcia admits that she had expected their time together to last until the morning.
A heavy, silent gulp sounding as Fabian stares down at the ground with a conflicted expression.
He reassures Marcia that she is under no obligation to continue their arrangement in that manner. Visibly taken aback by his sudden distance, Marcia asks him to explain what he means.
Covering his face in a moment of vulnerability, Fabian claims that their single night was enough for him.
His red eyes filled with intensity, he proposes they sleep in separate rooms to avoid further difficulty.
Fabian asks if she has any other concerns, but Marcia quietly confirms she has nothing more to say. He offers to escort her back to her quarters, his posture remaining stiff and formal.
Marcia politely declines his offer, thanking him for the time they spent together that day.
Fabian stands alone in the garden, watching in silence as Marcia walks away from him.
As she walks through the estate, Marcia reflects on the difficult nature of their public facade and private distance. A soft, quick sigh sounding as Marcia reminds herself that they are not truly a couple.
She pauses to look out at the horizon, watching the sky turn a deep orange as evening approaches. The scene shifts into a soft purple-hued transition, marking a change in focus. High above in a dreamlike realm, a small cloth doll notes that their cloud is shrinking.
Sitting on the fluffy surface, Larissa agrees that their surroundings are getting smaller.
Larissa explains that the clouds are made of her recent tears and are disappearing as she stops crying.
Marcia embraces the young girl who feels that the world has changed since they met.
Larissa recalls a lonely past where her constant sorrow only caused the oppressive clouds to grow. When the doll expresses fear of falling, Larissa reassures it that its cloth body won't be hurt.
She points toward a vision of a child who has been gifted a magnificent horse. Looking down from the clouds, the doll remarks that the scene looks exactly like a fairy tale.
Larissa admires the sparkling eyes and elegant features of the beautiful golden animal. A close-up of the horse reveals its gentle gaze and the shimmering light in its eyes.
Larissa notes that the horse's blonde mane is the exact same color as Marcia's hair.
Feeling a sense of envy, she wonders if she could become the horse's friend after falling from the clouds.
Larissa is suddenly startled as she sees Marcia standing before her in the waking world.
A sharp, sudden gasp sounding as Larissa experiences the sensation of falling back into reality.
She hears her name being called out, further tethering her to the present moment. Terrified of being hurt again, Larissa tightly squeezes her eyes shut in anticipation of a blow.
Marcia and Fabian stand together with the horse, asking Larissa if she is all right.
Opening her eyes, Larissa gazes up at Marcia with a look of pure astonishment and wonder.
The group stands together in the sunlight, creating a picture of warmth and safety.
Larissa remembers the first time Marcia led her out into the bright, open world.
She recalls the comforting scent of clean clothes and the gentle way Marcia cared for her.
Memories of Marcia kneeling to hold her hands and offer support fill her mind.
Larissa thinks of how Marcia stayed by her side all night to protect her from her fears.
Clutching her brooch, Larissa is overwhelmed with emotion at the kindness she has received.
Marcia and Larissa stand together by the horse, sharing a moment of quiet happiness.
The grand architecture of the palace is bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Back inside the palace, Marcia looks on in shock at an unexpected delivery. A maid presents a large pile of gift boxes that the Duke has sent for Marcia. Marcia is bewildered to find that every single box contains high-quality riding clothes and equipment. She examines the expensive garments, wondering if the Duke is being thoughtful or simply showing off his wealth. The maid reminds Marcia of her scheduled riding lesson and asks her to pick an outfit.
Larissa appears in a classic professional riding suit paired with a matching hat.
Next, she models a more delicate outfit featuring a lace-trimmed bonnet and a brown vest.
Finding both options incredibly charming, Marcia struggles to decide which one is better. With a bright, happy expression, Marcia calls out to Larissa to begin their afternoon activity.
Marcia asks Larissa if she wants to go and learn how to ride a horse with her.
The interior of the stables stands quiet and well-maintained.
A light, energetic swish sounding as Portis informs the madam that her horse is waiting inside.
Marcia asks Portis to teach her how to ride without using a whip to avoid frightening Larissa, and he confirms that all knights are trained to ride without them.
A soft, quick swish sounding as Marcia feels relieved that she made her request earlier while wondering if Larissa is ready for the lesson.
A sharp, loud swish sounding as Marcia peers excitedly into the stall to see the horse.
Larissa stands tall in an adorable riding outfit against a bright floral backdrop.
A soft, warm glow sounding as Marcia gushes over how incredibly adorable Larissa looks in her new attire.
A light, quick swish sounding as Portis asks if everyone is ready and announces that the preparations are finished. Chibi Marcia asks Portis to take care of them for the day, and he enthusiastically accepts the task. A loud, high whinny sounding as Marcia shouts with joy while riding her magnificent white horse.
Marcia sits confidently on her horse as Portis stands nearby to guide her.
Marcia admits that she truly enjoys physical exercise.
A soft, quick swish sounding as Chibi Marcia suddenly turns to check on her little sister.
A soft, light swish sounding as Marcia notices that Larissa is getting closer to the pony and appears more energetic than usual. A wet, gentle lick sounding as Marcia watches the two little creatures bonding and playing together. A soft, warm hum sounding as Marcia enjoys being led on the horse through the stable grounds.
A sharp, quick creak sounding as Marcia opens the door the next morning to wake Larissa.
Marcia calls out to the girl after finding her bed empty. A loud, rhythmic jingle sounding as Marcia rings a handbell while wondering where Larissa went so early. A quick, light tap sounding as Marcia asks a maid about Larissa and learns the girl has already gone to the stables.
Narrative text questions if the madam remembers the girl's pony, noting she rushed to the stables as soon as it was morning.
A quick, heavy tap sounding as Marcia runs toward the stables to find out what Larissa is doing.
Marcia stops suddenly with an expression of shock. Marcia finds Larissa standing peacefully by the pony's side.
A bright, sparkly glow sounding as Larissa looks at her new animal friend with wide, twinkling eyes.
A soft, warm rub sounding as Marcia pets Larissa's head and gently reminds her that breakfast comes first. A soft, light nod sounding as Marcia insists that the girl needs to eat. A quick, light scuff sounding as the sisters walk away from the stables together. Marcia wonders if Larissa is feeling regret about having to leave her pony behind. Marcia observes that Larissa's expressions are starting to look more like those of a normal, happy child. Marcia resolves to make sure the girl gets to play with her pony more often. A soft, light nod sounding as the sisters stroll through the mansion in elegant dresses. A quick, light scuff sounding as Marcia tells Larissa to slow down as they carry a basket of carrots to the stables. A loud, crisp crunch sounding as Larissa feeds a carrot to her pony and feels that things are much better now.
Marcia tells Larissa she is going to practice what she learned and will be nearby.
A voice calls out to Marcia, noting that she was there. Marcia looks up from her horse with a start of surprise. Marcia looks back and is surprised to see Fabian. A heavy, rhythmic tap sounding as Fabian explains he happened to see her out here after his breakfast.
A light, quick pat sounding as Fabian mentions that Portis told him she was a very fast learner.
A soft, quick swish sounding as Marcia modestly says she is simply good at physical activities. A firm, light tap sounding as a boot steps down firmly onto the ground.
Fabian tells Marcia that he believes she has her own special charm at all times.
A soft, warm thud sounding as Marcia gazes up at him with a deep, visible blush.
Marcia thinks it is nice to be appreciated by a man like him, but tells herself that he truly loves Larissa instead of her.
A sharp, quick swish sounding as Marcia quickly changes the subject, pointing out how cute Larissa is now that she is used to the pony. Marcia mentions her plans to give the animal a cute name just like Larissa's.
Marcia encourages Sir Fabian to spend some quality time with the little girl.
Fabian looks at her with a serious expression and speaks Marcia's name. Fabian gazes at Marcia and tells her that she always prioritizes her sister's needs over her own. Marcia looks down thoughtfully while clutching her chest in her riding attire. The blonde woman reflects on her initial goal of simply trying to survive. Fabian steps closer and tells Marcia that her thoughts on the matter do not change the truth.
The black-haired man smiles warmly while insisting that her current position belongs solely to her and not to her sister.
Marcia is visibly stunned by his words as she wonders why he would say such a thing.
Portis holds the white horse nearby as Fabian asks Marcia if she understands the true reason he gave her the gift.
Marcia assumes the horse was for her sister's sake, but secretly worries about her growing feelings for her husband. In a fond memory, Fabian leans close to a laughing Marcia and explains he realized she wanted to learn to ride. A soft, quick swish sounding as Fabian takes her hand and mentions the new animal for Larissa has finally arrived. Amidst a backdrop of flowers, Fabian kisses Marcia's hand and declares that everything he has done is for her. The Duke explains that he made these gestures because he is well aware of how much she loves her sister. Fabian offers a charming smile and confirms that her love for her sister is the primary motivation for his gifts. A resonant, heavy thump sounding as Marcia stares at him with a racing heart and a deep blush. Fabian announces that he will go and check on Larissa as Marcia requested. A steady, rhythmic tap sounding as Marcia watches her husband walk back toward the grand mansion. Marcia watches him go with a lingering gaze, her green eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and longing.
The blonde woman recalls how Fabian used to look at her as nothing more than a business partner after their contract was signed.
She remembers how uncomfortable he used to seem, yet notes that he now treats her as his true wife.
Marcia wonders if it is possible that Fabian actually likes her, but she quickly dismisses the hopeful thought.
Marcia tells herself that she is simply mistaking his general kindness for romantic affection. A firm, tight squeeze sounding as Marcia grips her sleeve and resolves not to fall for him or expect anything more. The scene shifts to the grand hallway of the mansion early the next morning. A tired, heavy yawn sounding as Marcia admits to herself that she got very little sleep the previous night. The memory of Fabian kissing her hand continues to haunt her thoughts as she tries to focus.
a sharp, quick creak sounding as Marcia decides that investigating the mystery of witches is now her top priority.
Marcia asks a maid about why witches cannot be mentioned, leaving the girl confused and prompted to find her own answers.
A light, quick swish sounding as Marcia enters the library and begins searching the tall shelves for information on magic. A heavy, resonant thump sounding as Marcia drops a large stack of research books onto a table. A soft, quick rustle sounding as the blonde woman begins flipping through a book titled The Story of Magic and Witches. The text explains that magic is a rare trait inherited by only half of those born to magical families, who are then called witches. Marcia learns that female mages cast spells on living creatures, while male mages can only affect inanimate objects.
The book details how male mages handle technical labor, while female mages are responsible for medical healing.
Marcia reads about the fame of love magic and the high cost associated with obtaining curse magic.
The narrative explains that these specific magical traits are the reason female mages became known as witches.
The text notes that the invention of modern medicine made the public less reliant on expensive magical healing.
As their importance faded, female mages were hunted for profit or used by nobles to facilitate dark curses.
Marcia discovers that the ability to read the emotions of others is a simple task for any trained mage.
The book describes how thieves led brutal witch hunts for money while the nobility turned a blind eye to the violence.
The blonde woman reads with sadness that most female mages have now completely disappeared from the world.
Marcia reflects on the bitter history of magic and how it was ultimately destroyed by human greed.
A sharp, sudden gasp sounding as a realization strikes Marcia while she ponders her own secret abilities.
She realizes that if anyone discovers she can read emotions, she will likely be hunted down as a witch herself.
Marcia remembers how she tried to tell others about her gift when she was a child, but was only mocked and called a lunatic.
A soft, dry chuckle sounding as Marcia looks away, feeling that there is nothing more to be said about her past.
Her attention is caught by an illustration of a red eye as she continues her research.
The book explains that all people with magic power possess red eyes, though children of witches might inherit the color without the power.
Marcia thinks of Fabian and his striking red eyes, remembering that he is known to have no magical ability.
She realizes that even without magic, Fabian would have been stigmatized and accused simply for being a witch's child.
Marcia looks on with deep sympathy as she realizes that Fabian must have endured a very painful and lonely childhood. A firm, quick tap sounding as Marcia rests her hand on the book, lamenting how difficult it is to find a witch in the current era. Narrative text explains that Larissa's mental condition has deteriorated to a point where time alone can no longer heal her.
Marcia reflects that finding a witch is the only way to truly cure the girl and make her feel at ease again.
The blonde woman is startled to realize that her night of research has already lasted until the break of dawn.
Marcia looks out the window and is surprised to see someone moving through the garden so early in the morning.
Her green eyes widen in shock as she recognizes the figure wandering outside.
Larissa strolls peacefully through the flower-filled grounds, bathed in the soft morning light.
The scene shifts toward the stable building as the sun begins to rise higher in the sky. A sharp, quick creak sounding as Marcia peeks into the stable and calls out to see if Larissa is there. Marcia finds the lavender-haired girl curled up and sleeping soundly against the side of the large pony. The blonde woman watches her sister from a distance, struck by how adorable the girl looks while resting.
Marcia wonders if Larissa has been feeling lonely because they have been spending so much time together lately.
Narrative text notes that it has only been 2 months since they fled the mansion, recalling how Larissa used to struggle even to leave her own room.
A soft, gentle pat sounding as Marcia reaches out to stroke her sister's head while she continues to sleep.
Marcia realizes that the gift of the pony has had a much deeper and more positive impact on Larissa than she ever imagined.
The blonde woman feels a surge of genuine gratitude toward Fabian for his thoughtful gesture.
Marcia pulls the girl into a warm embrace, thinking that it is impossible not to love such a precious child.
A quick, soft blink sounding as Larissa slowly opens her eyes and wakes from her nap in the stable.
Marcia offers a playful apology for waking her up, unable to stop smiling at how cute her sister is. Marcia hugs the girl tightly while asking why she chose to sleep here instead of in her own comfortable bed.
When Marcia asks if she likes the animal that much, Larissa looks up and reveals that she has named the pony Cookie.
A heavy, resonant thump sounding as Marcia stares in disbelief, her heart racing at the sound of her sister's voice. Marcia is frozen in place, barely able to process the fact that Larissa is actually speaking to her.
Stunned and hopeful, Marcia asks the girl to repeat what she just said.
Marcia's eyes fill with tears of joy as she struggles to believe what she is hearing with her own ears.
A soft, wet drip sounding as Marcia wipes away a tear, completely overwhelmed by the breakthrough.
The pony, Cookie, remains fast asleep on the straw, oblivious to the emotional milestone occurring beside him.
Larissa smiles brightly and clearly addresses the blonde woman as Sister Marcia.
Marcia is moved to tears of pure happiness, her face glowing as she hears her sisters speak her name for the very first time.